Over 100 years ago, mutant creatures emerged, massacring humans. These humans, killed by the creatures, also turned into mutants. During this period of calamity, humans developed powerful abilities and talents that could subdue these mutants. In 2145, all the mutants gathered to attack Earth's last line of defense, triggering a war and a true massacre in the capital of China. 3 warriors prepared to face the catastrophe even as they lamented the death of their comrades. The group had no other choice but to fight. A monstrous creature attacked the 3 heroes, and the warrior with a large war hammer tried to resist. However, the 3 were captured by the creature, which was far stronger than they were. The second warrior was incapacitated as the monster managed to subdue her, and they, hopeless, prepared for the end of their lives. Then a warrior with a sword, a sharp and swift blade, transformed the strong and sovereign monster into a heap of pieces. The 3 warriors were astonished and could not understand how they had been saved at that moment, until the strongest man alive appeared before them, known as the one with a God-given talent named Knighting. He told them not to let their guard down, as the war was still ongoing, and the group thanked him, happy that the swordsman was on their side in that battle. However, there was not much time for conversation, for there were still more enemies alive above them. A creature with purple tentacles at its lower part, an eye in place of its belly, and a head with black horns appeared, observing them from above. The warrior with the hammer rushed toward this monster, gaining momentum on the ground and quickly leaping upward, accompanied by his companion with a bow and arrow. As the dew struck at the monster, it rebounded both at the same time, using only its aura, obliterating both fighters in an instant. The warrior with fire powers looked in horror at the scene, and before she could hesitate, she charged at the creature, conjuring flames from her wrist to attack it. Before she could take the first step, the monster vanished from her sight, appearing behind her, so fast that she could not follow. And before she could turn around, the monster struck with its tentacles against her, which to her luck was repelled by Knighting. Seeing the level of threat in front of him, he asked the warrior to retreat from the fight, and she, realizing she would be a burden to the swordsman, stepped back without complaint, asking him to be careful. Now focused only on the opponent before him, he noticed that his sword had been broken while blocking the mutant's attack. Realizing that this mutant was not something ordinary and should only exist in theory, with no proof of its existence until that moment, he decided to fight with all his might, as his enemy was an unprecedented level 4 mutant, charging quickly toward it and delivering a swift slash that created an explosion from the impact caused by the clash between the two. The world's greatest swordsman, humanity's only hope, realized that he was merely prey for the rank 4 monster and fell before it after the strike. Falling to the ground, he understood that humanity was still too fragile in the face of a 4th level mutant's power. With no strength left, he said that his death was near and that, in the end, he sadly could not save the world. In a control center, an elder realized that humanity's only hope had just been defeated, and then he wondered how much longer this fight would last. Thinking about what he could have done to make everything different without the problem escalating to such a level, he ended up blaming himself, saying that if he had discovered and recognized the swordsman's talent earlier, he would probably have been better prepared for the catastrophe, having the strength to overcome it. With no options that could ensure humanity's victory in the war, he decided to at least win the battle, allowing 3rd level awakened ones to carry the maximum power of nuclear warheads. For if this was their end, the soldiers needed at least to die with dignity. And with that, the soldiers leaped ready for their last fight, defending the honor of their species, shouting that humanity would ultimately always prevail. And with several explosions throughout the area, destroying everything, the commander, with other soldiers in the control room, saluted while using their last resources to eliminate as many enemies as possible. Some time passed, and the scene shifted to a hospital, with the swordsman waking up startled by the fact that he was still alive after his last battle. He heard some people next to him commenting on whether he had woken up, as if they did not expect that to happen. And since this was a bit unexpected, they discussed what to do with the young man, deciding that killing him right there would be the best option. Upon hearing these words, he realizes that this had happened before and that for some reason he had gone back 3 years in the past. On the day of the test, to discover his talent, he used skills from his past life to disarm, incapacitating the men and quickly defeating them. With one blow, he defeated one of the men. The other, terrified, was defeated and fell. Then he realized that the test for his talent in his past life had been manipulated. It took 3 years for them to realize that he had a divine talent capable of surpassing the mutants. However, by the time they discovered his talent, China had already lost the war. Only the last hope remained, the capital. He had the talent and the necessary strength to overcome the mutants, and it took only 7 months for him to reach level 3. Remembering his mother and sister, he regrets not having done anything, realizing that with his second chance, he could do things differently. A blue screen resembling a program interface suddenly appeared. It said that the game of the sword gods and final judgment was linked to his name, Yang Ming. The blue screen informed him that he must touch a crystal within 30 minutes. Noticing the difference in the system compared to his past life, he felt fortunate and indifferent to the change. More people appeared before him, seemingly patrolling the area, ordering him to raise his hands and asking who he was. He quickly moved, taking a weapon from one of the guards and holding a man hostage, shielding himself with the man's body. And using the group leader as a hostage, he convinced them to help him by threatening to kill a captain, if they didn't take him to the test area in 3 seconds. Everyone thought he was crazy because attacking a military officer was a capital crime leading to the death penalty. He responded by telling them to show the way. The kidnapped man replied that he had better be able to awaken. And even if he succeeded, he wouldn't escape death because attacking an officer was like committing suicide. The scene changed and we saw a lecture about the first awakened ones and those of the first generation who fought against the mutants. The speaker was Lin Tao. He was the representative of the military and he summoned the descendants of the first awakened ones to take the test. On the soldiers' radios, it was announced that someone had kidnapped the officers and was heading to the test area. As soldiers flew and people fell, the kidnapper appeared in the test area. Lin Tao ordered them to lower their weapons, allowing him to pass. He warned that if the kidnapper continued to resist, he would have to die. With those words, several men drew their weapons and prepared to attack. The kidnapper stated that he was not infected and did not want to cause confusion or disrupt the awakening ceremony, only seeking to take his test. And with that, the man shouted, "Enough talk, arrest him." The soldiers advanced toward him and he informed them that according to local laws, he had the right to take the test. If they committed any infractions, they should be punished. However, if they were high-level awakened or had great merits, they could be absolved. Our protagonist, however, was punched in the face and belittled because he was not yet an awakened one. They called him crazy and claimed he should be executed immediately because he had committed a crime and should be treated as a criminal, not as an awakened person. About to be executed, a large helicopter appeared on the scene and a man jumped from it. He was the supreme commander of Tian Feng, the great Marshal Xu Hai. Upon landing, he caused a massive shockwave, frightening and surprising everyone with the imposing aura and presence he emanated. The marshal declared that the base desperately needed awakened ones and ordered that he take the test. However, if the protagonist failed to awaken, he should be eliminated immediately. Our hero smiled and confidently proceeded to the test, certain that he would pass. The people present were instructed to disperse, and we saw other candidates in the test who belittled the protagonist, wondering how a mere commoner without awakened lineage blood could succeed. They said the scene was disgusting, and that they could vomit because they considered that man weak and ridiculous. However, the protagonist ignored the criticism, reflecting on how in his past life he had been sabotaged in the test, making successive mistakes and being disapproved. Determined not to repeat the same mistakes, he stretched out his hand and touched the stone, beginning to emit an intense purple aura that surprised everyone around. The infusion of energy and the sensation were extremely familiar to him. The test began and his talent level quickly rose, surpassing level D and reaching level B. The spectators wondered how he could be so strong. The level continues to rise until it reaches rank A, with spiritual energy completely filling the protagonist's body. He channels his spiritual energy into the stone until it overflows, surprising everyone with the unexpected talent of a commoner compared to the awakened nobles. Everyone wonders what the real level of that man's strength is as the test is not yet over and a pillar of purple light rises into the sky, becoming visible to all. The hero is exhausted, but he still has more strength to show. The pillar of light grows taller and taller, increasing his strength as it is announced that his talent is at level S. Everyone is shocked, unable to believe it. Since the crystal has not yet declared the end, the marshal is surprised and speculates that the man's talent might be even greater than level S. With this in mind, the marshal orders the ground troops to prepare to avoid any fatalities, prioritizing the protection of the man who was humanity's hope. Airspace and civilian areas must be secured. Even so, Yan Ning's test had not yet ended. He continues to pour more power and spiritual energy into the crystal, surprising everyone, including the marshal, considered the strongest there. And finally, it is revealed that Yan Ning has an SS-level talent. With this information, the great marshal begins to imagine how powerful he could be if he reached the third order. He starts to laugh joyfully at the talent that Tian Feng has managed to produce. Hearing the great marshal laugh, the bystanders begin to question the power of that man. Ignoring the entire situation, our protagonist wonders why he is only SS when in his past life he was SSS. He then realizes that the crystal only measures up to that level, accepts it, and thinks that the most important thing now is not the ranking or the power, but fulfilling the mission of the blue screen system. Yan Ning opens the screen and sees that his talent is SSS level, and that his rewards for completing the mission increase his psychic energy reserve by 10,000%. The second reward allows him to use any ability without cost every 48 hours. He recalls that in his previous life, to obtain an ability, he could only reach level S. But with this system, he could easily reach any ability at SSS level. Besides, he realizes that the system of this new life is superior to his old one. After analyzing all this, the protagonist receives another mission from the system. He must learn one more ability and tell no one about the existence of that mysterious screen. The rewards are 4 more attribute points, and reflecting on the mission, Yan Ning decides that he needs a skill book. While people are still watching him, the marshal approaches the boy, and then he congratulates him on reaching rank SS and asks what he would like as a reward. Focused on the system's mission, Yan Ning says nothing, and the marshal laughs, saying that he was once like him, unaccustomed to being the center of attention as a great awakened one. With charisma and a strange sense of humor, the marshal invites Yan Ning to his office to talk. In the marshal's office, they discuss how Yan Ning was previously wronged and sabotaged. The marshal promises to investigate Yan Ning and assures him that he will be promoted for being one of the strongest awakened ones. Wishing to know more about Yan Ning's talent, he decides not to reveal anything about the system, stating only that he has rich talent with mental and telekinetic abilities. He recognizes that this is rare and asks what reward Yan Ning desires. Yan Ning asks for a skill book, which the leader orders a subordinate to bring the best available. With the book in hand, Yan Ning expresses a desire to go home. The commander agrees and provides an escort to ensure his safety. With an extremely dense aura, the marshal says he would like to understand better what happened because it seems there are people trying to sabotage Yan Ning. Everyone bows to the commander's orders and Yan Ning is escorted home. In the neighborhood, Yan Ning sees his younger sister, Yexi Yan, who is surprised to see him. Yan Ning remembers the day she died and is happy to see her, vowing to protect her in this new opportunity. Crying, he hugs her, and she asks how he has been, as it has been over a year since she last saw him. Yan Ning says he completed the training and is now awakened. She asks why he was crying, and he replies that he missed her very much. She invites him home to share the good news with their mother. As they walk, Yan Ning says they will have a feast with plenty of meat today. At home, his mother and sister are impressed with the abundance of food. The mother asks how he has been, as the neighbors were curious. Yan Ning explains that he passed the test and, as an awakened one, has the right to better meals. He promises to always bring high-quality food for the family, determined to do everything in this life. After lunch, Yan Ning opens the system and sees that the mission has been completed. Gaining 4 attribute points and the new ability Impulse, Yan Ning sees the rank C ability upgraded to rank SSS, now called Storm Sword. This ability consumes 4,500 psychic energy points, and Yan Ning is impressed by the system's ability to evolve a rank C ability to SSS. He realizes that it would be necessary to be a third-order awakened one for such an ability, but with the talent to use any ability every 48 hours without cost. The system does not allow him to reveal this, so Yan Ning waits to reach at least the 2nd level of strength to use his abilities and talents without fear or distrust. When Yan Ning was included in the Seed Project during his meeting with the Marshal, he realized he should avoid complications until called upon to participate. And knowing that his new ability was far superior to any in his past life, he decides to test it in his safe zone of the army. The explanation continues, telling us a little more about the history of that world. When Earth was invaded, the spiritual key created dungeons worldwide, and awakened hunters entered these dungeons, starting to conquer them. The army, aiming to research and prepare the hunters, spent enormous resources to recreate them their own simulations. Compared to real dungeons, these artificial dungeons deactivate at the moment you would suffer a fatal injury. Therefore, it is a safe and realistic dungeon where it is possible to train without the risk of death. Yan Ning prepares to test his new ability in the safe zone of Changfen, which would be a testing area. Yan Ning requests a low-level solo dungeon, and the person in charge begins to wonder who Yan Ning is, a man with SS-level talent whom the commander previously ordered to be given anything he requested. I'll at least ensure his sobriety. So he says that with the boy's current strength, entering the dungeon alone would be dangerous. Yan Ning replies that it will be quick because he just wants to test a new ability. Already inside the dungeon, he realizes that the dungeon simulates the scenario right after the monster's invasion, and the weapon provided is a dagger, exactly what he wanted. Walking through the dungeon, Yan Ning sees a red cyclops coming toward him. With a single strike, he kicks the cyclops' throat and stabs his eye with a knife, killing it instantly. He realizes that the dungeon's weapon fits him perfectly and prepares for the hunt. Still in the dungeon, Yan Ning finds the exit door, and upon opening it, he encounters a gigantic red mutant. When the mutant is about to bite Yan Ning, he delivers a blow with his knife to the creature's neck, causing it to fall dead. Realizing that although he does not have great physical strength, his past life's experience allows him to handle the situation easily. He only needs to find the area boss to finish the dungeon. As he exits the area, Yan Ning finds himself on a street. Zombies notice his presence and become hostile, opening their grotesque mouths. Yan Ning runs among them, killing the nearest ones while searching for the region's boss. Surrounded by a horde of zombies, our hero is pursued by countless of them. Jumping over a wall and evading the horde, he reaches the boss area, being alerted by the system. A colossal mutant with crabbed claws and the appearance of a giant insect, resembling a mix of several creatures, emerges from the ground. Our hero realizes how fast it is and leaps, dodging one of its attacks. Right behind him comes a wave of mutant zombies, and he reflects that usually more people would be needed to subdue the creature. The creature attacks him, and then he climbs up its arm and, jumping over the creature's shoulder, uses his system ability. With a strong beam of light, the creature is struck. Our protagonist notices that the area around him has turned into a zone of destruction, and then he sees that the creature has been wiped out by his power. Impressed with his own abilities, our hero gains experience points and a piece of equipment, unaware that dungeons of this type drop items, and with that, he gains another agility point. As he leaves the dungeon, he thanks the young man for his help. The young man, in turn, wonders if our protagonist fled from the dangers of the dungeon. But when the hero is already distant, an elder approaches the young man, reprimanding him and saying that he should not let awakened ones use the dungeon carelessly, because the maintenance of artificial dungeons is very complicated and expensive. With that, the young man says that no First Order squad had entered that dungeon, which makes the elder wonder how that First Order creature was destroyed if no squad had entered. He also comments that the drop of equipment is extremely rare and difficult, almost never happening, especially an item of that rarity. With this, the young man who allowed Yen Ning to enter the dungeon realizes that the protagonist's test was to solo an entire dungeon, and he becomes frightened and apprehensive about the extent of the protagonist's power. As the young man walks down the street, we see that the city's situation is not well, with people injured and children fighting and selling insects. He thinks that despite being stronger than in his previous life, it's still not an optimistic situation because an attack will occur soon. Believing that the Tianfeng safe zone will be attacked and knowing that in just 10 days, a major attack will occur on the city district, he worries and realizes that his sister Cyan and his mother are still in danger, concluding that he must become stronger to protect everyone. Meanwhile, in the safe zone of the capital, there is talk about the appearance of an SS-ranked Awakened One, a much-needed talent in these difficult times, at a table filled with elders. They discuss how to best utilize and cultivate Yen Ning's talent, mentioning the need to accelerate his training and choose the most suitable instructor for him. One of the elders comments that a strong Awakened One is needed to train someone even stronger, and one of the elders with a mustache asks if he is interested in reaching the unbeatable 4th level. Another one with white hair says that most 3rd Order Awakened Ones are strong, but none of them have reached the 4th Order, not even the highest-ranking officers. He believes this is because none of them were treated as such an important resource from the beginning. The officers around agree, and the leader of the meeting suggests that Tianfeng be brought to the safe zone to start his training immediately. However, one man opposes the decision. Everyone is surprised by his stance and questions why he would underestimate such a talent. He mentions the last part of the report, arguing that since Yen Ning is a mentalist with mental attributes, his physical capabilities are probably limited. Generally, those with more comprehensive psychic abilities stay in the rear, supporting those with physical capabilities. This means that if he enters combat alone, the Awakened One will likely die. Moreover, advancing from the 1st to the 2nd Order is a risk, and the jump from the 2nd to the 3rd is even more dangerous. He concludes that for the protagonist to advance from the 2nd to the 3rd Order is almost impossible. The leader reflects on these words and decides to lower Yen Ning's priority, stating that there is no urgent need to train him quickly. The next day, the Great Marshal receives this information and is in doubt. The High Command says that since Yen Ning is a psychic awakened, the chances of him evolving to the 3rd rank are low. An official asks if they should continue with the previous plans, and the Marshal says that since the High Command has ordered it, they should withdraw Yen Ning's benefits and personal guard. Another then asks about the investigation, as the main suspect committed suicide and the main clues were lost. The Marshal replies that he promised to investigate, but since Yen Ning seems to have no potential, there is no need to continue. This news is delivered to him, and a member of his escort reveals that due to his limited potential, he will have to remain in the safe zone, losing his benefits. He concludes that there is no longer a need for Yen Ning to enter the Awakened program, but Yen Ning questions how it is possible to be only a 2nd Order Awakened. He says that despite being S-ranked, he is actually SS dead, reflecting and understanding that at the moment, mentalist Awakened Ones are considered weak. Unlike in his past life, it has not yet been discovered that to reach the 4th level, psychic attributes are also necessary. He wonders if he should reveal the true potential and communicate to the higher-ups about psychic abilities, deciding to forget this idea for now. He realizes that in order for them to believe him, he needs to prove his strength and decides to train to regain his 3rd Order status, overcoming this difficulty. With the system and the Storm Sword ability, along with the attribute points he now had, the protagonist was much stronger than in his previous life. He decides to increase his stats and goes hunting. In the forest, in a hunting ground, he is invited by a group of hunters to join them, ensuring a safer hunt and a share of the credit points they would receive later. Yanning questions the invitation, as a First Order monster is too weak and would give little experience with so many hunters together in one group. He asks how this could be advantageous for him and ends up refusing the invitation. With his refusal, the members of the hunting group become outraged, saying that Yanning is arrogant for not wanting to accept the group's help, and that because of his refusal, he must be looking for a fight since he wouldn't be able to defeat the monsters alone. With this threat, Yanning reveals furious red eyes, causing the person who was threatening him moments ago to retreat in fear. Yanning then turns his back on them and heads towards the deep forest. As he enters the forest that decomposes corpses, he reflects on the mutants that were there and remembers that in his previous life, he would encounter 2 First Order mutants. He knows that to advance to the First Order, he needs to kill 3 First Order mutants, and since he's already killed one in the test dungeon, he now needed to eliminate 2 more. While thinking about this, a creature comes towards him. He draws the weapon he was carrying because he didn't want to use the storm's sword as it wasn't necessary at that moment. With this thought, Yanning uses the weapon and crushes the head of the creature coming towards him. Now Yanning began physical and psychic training. He starts the hunt, killing monsters and thinking about increasing his psychic abilities so that the higher-ups would recognize his skills and allow him to evolve. He intended to have immense strength so that mentalist awakened ones would be recognized and no longer suffer from prejudice or stereotypes of weakness. Far from where Yanning was battling, the group that threatened him is impressed, hearing the sounds of the duel and commenting that they were close to the demonic tree. With this in mind, they decide to leave the area as quickly as possible, fearing that Yanning might kill them. Meanwhile, he was fighting against a type of tree and, alerted by the system, receives a notification that 2 First-Order mutants were approaching, entering the battle. Observing the giant tree advancing towards him, Yanning realizes he wasn't sensing the presence of another being and suspects it might be a trap. The tree's movements are extremely fast and dangerous, and he dodges its roots. Where the roots struck, craters and deep holes formed in the ground. Fleeing from the tree, he searched for the other being notified by the system. However, he gets slightly distracted and is almost fatally injured. Facing the monster, he observes it while receiving a frontal attack. With the speed of the attack, he realizes there was no way to dodge it and decides to counter it with his weapon. And at the moment he counters the attack, he notices something near the neck of that giant tree. With this frontal injury, Yanning's arm is slightly hurt. Recovering, he laments having to face 2 First-Order monsters at the same time, because if it were one at a time, it would be easier, since his old team was accustomed to eliminating intermediate second-order monsters frequently. In his previous life, he had received information that the tree demon was destroyed and that the second monster was probably hidden somewhere. However, he had misinterpreted this information, now seeing the truth. The 2 monsters were fused together, standing right in front of him. He realizes that the second creature, Stangler, buffs the tree demon's roar, but it wasn't long nor very effective. The tree still suffers some damage due to this buff. Recognizing that the tree's tactics hadn't changed, he draws a blade, analyzing the patterns and creating a strategy to subdue that being. When the tree attacks, he jumps over the roots and begins to strike the creature. One of these strikes hits the Stangler that was below the neck of the demonic tree. With a flash and a yellow cut, he manages to separate them, crushing the creature as if it were nothing. The demonic tree becomes enraged and heads towards Yanning, who delivers several strikes with his blade. And after being cornered, the tree uses a total attack as its last resort. Yanning cuts all the roots of the tree, leaving it without any means of attack. The battle ends when he delivers a strike to the central core of the monster, killing it. The system then notifies him that he has defeated the tree demon and the Stangler, thus receiving the psychic rewards, demon tree bark and a dirt the wood armor. He also receives a unique grade giant white claw and a corpse fruit number 6, which increases physical strength by 1 point and provides a 20% stamina recovery. He uses the fruit and feels happy afterward because of all the experience and attributes he had received. He was now surpassing most awakened ones of his category. The group that had threatened him earlier realizes that the psychic pressure of the boss had vanished and is surprised to notice that Yanning, the boy they had invited to join their team, had destroyed the great boss of that area. Within the safe zone of Tianfeng, we see Yanning going to a material shop to sell everything and quickly obtain money, wanting to invest in his skills. He decides to do business in person despite there being online sales methods. He receives an offer of 697 credit points for the high-quality materials, but since he is a new customer in the store, the attendant ends up offering 700 points. With this sum, Yanning could buy up to 200 kilos of meat, an idea that makes him accept the offer, having the points immediately transferred to him. The local merchant offers some equipment options and Yanning asks about books or sword skills. He responds that only low-ranking items would be available since the store is modest, offering the protagonist 3 skill books, all of low rank. Yanning reflects that regardless of the skill chosen, caution is needed because what enhances his skill are the base attributes, and he begins to look for a skill that would allow more mobility against agile enemies. The merchant offers help in finding other books, but Yanning chooses Quick Slash, curious to see how far this skill could go with the system. Yanning spends 600 credit points, and upon leaving the shop, he decides to buy something for his little sister at home, offering various canned foods that she rarely ate. This would make his little sister extremely happy. While his mother was away working and his sister sleeping, Yanning decides to read the skill book and explore the blue screen system further. Evolving a D-rank skill to SSS, the system informed that the skill would consume 4,000 psychic energy and increase Yanning's agility and strength by 600%. Although the usage time was only 1 second, it would be worth it for the extreme speed increase, making him imagine a place where he could test his new skill. Thinking of a favorable place for this, he leaves the safe zone and goes to the Jinyang neighborhood, infested with moles and mutant creatures. In his previous life, that place remained unexplored, but he remembers fighting a second-order monster that maximized its speed and agility. There was a piece of blue equipment of great value, and Yanning notices that the surrounding fungi are sticky, with his boot getting stuck. At that moment, a mutant rushes toward him at high speed. Yanning pulls out his weapon and slices the mutant, thankful that it was just a simple zombie. If it were a stronger creature, it would have been a bigger problem as he continues his journey through the area with toxic dust around. Yanning recalls the first fight he had against the climber and recounts that at that time he was a second order awakened. Noticing that his physical condition was better back then, he now feels slower. Trying to remember the location where the climber would be, he realizes that it's likely where he currently is. And looking back, he spots a great waking up, realizing that it could serve as a trap. As he was taking down a mutant, an elite monster appears by surprise. The monster charges at our protagonist, who retreats dodging. Yanning realizes that he needs to deal with that creature before facing the main monster. The trap he set had its merits, but the system warns that a second-order mutant had appeared. The climber appears right behind the young man, and Yanning now realizes he is facing two mutants at the same time instead of just one. And so he jumps toward it, managing to dodge, and notices that the monster seems faster than in his previous life. He begins to use his ability to dodge nearby enemies, but predicting the attack of such a fast and strong enemy was a difficult task. With no time to think, he chooses to act. The climber attacks him head-on, and without being able to dodge, Yanning faces the strike. Managing to suppress the attack and come out unscathed, he intended to use his strongest attacks, but realizes that if he did so, he would have many gaps in his defense. So he decides to use a quicker attack. At the moment when he needed to avoid the two mutants, he formulates a plan using his newly acquired special skill. The two creatures advance toward Yanning with a bloodthirsty and murderous gaze. He runs to lure them to a certain point, remembering his abilities and his key sword. Not being sure if the attack would be effective, he calculates the length of the arm, the force of the attack, and the proper angle to deliver the strike. And when the two creatures approach, he delivers the same attack to both, obliterating them. A mark was left at the spot where he struck. He wouldn't have liked to take such a risk, but the attack was effective, and he realizes that his power is still unknown to him, deciding to delve deeper into his combat abilities. Receiving some system messages congratulating him and rewarding his victory, he understands that even though it was risky, it was worth it. In the Tian Fang region, a large energy fluctuation is recorded, and everyone is surprised, wondering what happened there, detecting an abnormal energy spike. Knowing that there was no third order awakened in that area, they decide to send a team to investigate the site. Sometime later, the team arrives at the location, observing the battle marks Yanning had left behind. They discuss it and say they have never seen such marks before. Realizing that whoever made those marks must have used at least 4,000 psychic energy. They conclude that for someone to have so much energy, they must be a third order awakened, and they decide to report this to the department's high command immediately. Meanwhile, Yanning was evaluating his status and the equipment he had just received as a reward. Realizing that the equipment is very valuable, worth 60,000 credits, he hoped to get a good price this time, as in his past life, he hadn't been so lucky. He lists the items for sale online and begins to receive several offers. Someone shows interest in buying his equipment, offering around 60,000 credits. Yanning wonders if someone could pay with resources while receiving more proposals, realizing that there would be no problem in selling everything. Making his final offer, he informs that he would sell the armor for 30,000 credits but would like to receive psychic fruits and white rank equipment as compensation. A strong man with long hair says the equipment was worth it and that he would even become poor to obtain it, ordering his subordinates to bring more equipment. Sometime later, several pieces of equipment are delivered, but they were still not enough. He asks his goons to keep looking for more equipment and makes a deposit of 30,000 credits, promising to pay the remainder soon. Yanning reflects on his past life, remembering when his family went through many trials, saying that now he would provide a good life for his mother and sister. With resources available, he could buy a house and provide a better life for his family. At the real estate agency, he is approached by a young woman who, upon seeing his simple attire, thinks the boy wouldn't have any money. Yanning, accompanied by his sister, who is impressed with the place, realizes that he is a low-ranking awakened. The young woman says the houses cost around 40,000 credits. He insists on seeing the 40,000 credit houses even with his current balance of 13,000 credits. This angers the young woman, thinking he was deceiving her in some way. But Yanning asks her to wait and receives a message from the strong man saying he had already gathered 39,000 credits and would transfer them immediately. Yanning receives the money for the equipment and completes the sale, transferring the money to the young woman who had previously despised him but who was now happy with his presence there. In his new home, Yanning asks his sister to call their mother, saying that he had other things to do. Heading out at night, jumping across rooftops while searching for mutants to fight. He remembers that in his past life, most of the strong mutants were subdued by third-level awakened ones, making his evolution difficult, and that the weaker ones always ended up more finished than they should have been as he heads towards a Ranksty dungeon. Arriving there, he decides that he will test his strength in the Corpse Academy, known for being a place that was essentially a school for hunters. 7 days after the mutant outbreak, he needed to complete the mission by surviving for 12 hours without leaving the premises of that place. People then begin to gather, wanting to form groups, and we see a man named Gao Yun and asking if anyone had participated in that place before, then offering to be the team leader. The The group informs that the Quartz Academy was probably a very difficult place and questions him, asking if he really had the experience to guide them. The blonde man informs that the place is considered medium to difficult for second-order awakened ones, and also that poor cooperation could end up harming and eliminating his entire team. Ignoring all this conversation, our protagonist is approached by the blonde man, who asks if he was there just to die, because that place was intended only for second-order warriors. Our protagonist, releasing his aura, intimidates the blonde man, who asserts that they cannot protect someone as weak as him. Continuing to ignore him, the protagonist decides to move forward, continuing on his path. Feeling ignored, the blonde man tells the protagonist to hide behind them, as maybe that way he could gain some experience. Speaking to his companions, he comments that the equipment from this dungeon was only basic. He also warns about how difficult the dungeon was and that they shouldn't attempt to complete any mission alone there, as it was too dangerous. He then recounts that the last time he participated in this dungeon, he ended up attracting 2 bosses at once. And because of that, almost his entire group perished, and he only survived because 2 strong awakened ones killed the bosses for him. Hina states that it was all very difficult for his mind. Our protagonist, who continues to ignore all the conversation, notices that his attributes are still low, and that his strength was at level 17, comparable to a second-order warrior. But adding these stats to his skills, he remains confident that he can be the best warrior in this dungeon. The blonde man's group begins to organize, stating that soon the shields surrounding them would fall, and then they would start hunting the dungeon boss. At that moment, the beautiful girl approaches and asks if he would cover the group. The blonde man affirms that he would take care of everyone, and with the preparations made, they set out on their journey. Arriving at a deserted area, they notice a man running ahead of them. That was our hero, causing the group to wonder among themselves if he was trying to get himself killed. The blonde man tells the group to ignore him and orders them to stick together. As he runs up several stairs, he encounters 2 young men who ask for his help. However, these young men reveal themselves to be grotesque-looking monsters. Our hero eliminates them right there and a few others later, remembering that he had been deceived by these creatures before. But now he managed to eliminate them efficiently, as he had always intended. Based on his past life experience, he knew he was about to encounter one of the secret bosses of this dungeon, and he thinks it would be simple to conclude since he now possessed the power of the Storm Sword. Meanwhile, the other group is hunting one of the dungeon bosses located in a landfill. We see the blonde man asserting that the more common monsters are eliminated, the more aggressive the remaining ones become. And because of this, they should hunt the boss directly to make their objective easier. Concluding that by killing the boss, all other monsters would become more powerful for a certain period of time, needing to hide as soon as they defeated the first boss there. Hearing this, the group starts to feel confident, believing that with such a good leader, they would be able to complete the dungeon with ease. However, they receive a system notification informing them that the monster Nukanubi Cadaverous had located them. At that exact moment, a creature with a malevolent aura and a cadaverous appearance observes them with a sinister gaze and smiles bloodthirstily. The leader, who was the individual with the highest defense, protects the rest of the group while everyone prepares to attack from a distance. Several attacks concentrate on the creature, causing massive destruction around them. Thinking they had managed to attack effectively, the creature leaps after dodging and falls on one of the group members. The tank who had imprisoned the creature, with his magical abilities, falters but manages to regain control and imprison it again. As he observes this frantic battle, our protagonist appears, managing to climb onto the roof, wondering where the hidden boss he was searching for might be. Observing the status windows and searching for the mission, he notices that the hidden boss mission called Butcher had disappeared. He wonders who took the hidden boss mission from him. At that exact moment, during the group's battle, a creature with the appearance of a dead tree mixed with a corpse appears behind them, flanking them. They realize there is a second boss there. However, by the time they notice, it's already too late, and they end up being attacked and killed. The one responsible for everything was the supposed leader who had taken the mission in secret. As a tank type awakened, he didn't deal much damage, making it difficult to obtain good equipment. But if he were the last one standing in the battle, he could get all the equipment he wanted, and even if he gained little experience, he could still evolve. He begins to shout, asking the group who had taken the mission, and while running, starts blaming our protagonist. He shouts again, saying he wants to come to the hero's plans and traps both bosses simultaneously, drawing their attention so the others can attack. Everyone, ignorant of the blonde man's plan, thinks he is very brave. Outside the chaos, we see our protagonist watching from atop a rooftop, realizing that he was being blamed for the plan orchestrated by the man. He admires the leader's plan but has an even better strategy, deciding to go after the other 2 hidden bosses, which were terrifying creatures, one with a skeletal appearance and the other with exposed muscles. Successfully luring both, he jumps from the building while the dreadful beings pursue him. The leader of that team looks up and notices that the hero is now beside him, asking what he was doing there. Then the scene shows the 4 main bosses of that place gathered to face the group. The blonde man, who once counted on the group, watches as each of them succumbs to the strength of those beings and is shaken by the scene. Our hero looks at him and asks if he didn't like to play games. At that moment, the 4 bosses are now targeting the 2 men. The desperate leader questions, asking if the boy had accepted all the missions. With a sarcastic smile, the protagonist responds that he's just making good on the confusion that the man caused. And the leader, who once seemed courageous, now accuses the hero of being crazy. He then reveals that he planned to deceive everyone and finish off the bosses in the remaining hours, but his plans have been exposed. He decides to run away like a coward, and while fleeing, leaving everyone surprised by his attitude, he calls out to his group to flee with him. Our protagonist thinks this is perfect for his plans and heads towards a room where, when they arrive, they find the hero already there. They ask how he could be so fast. At that moment, one of the group members tries to charge at the protagonist, who notices him. The man realizes that he is much slower than the protagonist, unable to hit him with any of his techniques. And the hero tries to explain that it wasn't he who took the butcher mission for himself. Everyone is surprised and asks how that was possible. The group turns on the blonde man, asking if he had deliberately left the Nukanubi corpse loose, alleging next that putting a member in danger was his plan from the beginning. The same man asserts that right now they don't need to fight among themselves, saying that there were already many problems happening, not to mention the mutants that would soon arrive at the location. The whole group, now in rage, argues with the blonde man, wondering what they would do now that they were facing 4 extremely strong bosses. And one of the men shouts, stating that the building is too big for the other 3 creatures, concluding that the place could not be destroyed. They see the other 3 bosses trying to enter the place but failing in the process. They then decide to split into 2 teams, one to block the 3 larger mutants and the other group to face the only boss capable of destroying the place, stating that if they made it out alive, they would hunt down the blonde man who betrayed them and also the protagonist. Our hero asks if they could overpower those creatures to the end, and we see the warriors using their strength, powers, and skills to attack the bosses. However, the 3 stronger bosses aren't damaged by any of these abilities. The group realizes they are in a dire situation, losing strength by the moment. The blonde man gives up, seeing that everything was doomed to end there. But the protagonist says that if they want to survive, they should follow him, jumping from a building while everyone thinks he's crazy and calls him a coward. Our hero, now in the air, begins to glow with a strong light and an intense and formidable pressure. Everyone is astonished and wonders how it was possible for him to be so strong despite being a zero-order individual. Seeing no other options, they jump along with the protagonist. The blonde man asserts that it would be better not to jump because, as a tank type, he would have a better chance of surviving. The protagonist is glad the man didn't jump, and then he uses his Storm Sword ability, destroying the entire building and everyone inside at once. With the shield cracked, the former leader is struck by the protagonist's ability along with all the other bosses in the area. A powerful explosion of blue energy light occurs, causing all the group members to wonder how a zero-order man managed to accomplish such a feat. Everyone present is surprised and amazed by what they witnessed. When all that happened, only smoke was visible in the environment. The men, impressed and awestruck by the simultaneous destruction of the bosses, ask if the blonde man had died in the process, realizing that thanks to the protagonist's power, they had faced all the bosses at once without any issues. They then state that his power is at least 3rd order, and the protagonist appears amidst the rubble, asking if everyone is okay. Those who had previously accused him now bow and apologize for disrespecting someone with such strength and for having threatened to hunt him earlier. He accepts the apologies and says it doesn't matter, asking them to find the remaining monsters and eliminate them. The group follows his orders, and one of the men in the group is so impressed by the protagonist's strength that the other 2 girls in the group begin to suspect him. Yanni states that in his past life, the landfill monster had a blue-rank piece of equipment. As he searches for that being, he realizes he has made a huge mess and wonders which part actually belongs to that creature. He notices a blue light and realizes that it was the equipment he was looking for. It was the Skull of Resentment, which allows a person to use telekinesis and psychic detection. All one has to do is place it on their forehead. He asserts that this equipment is a treasure for people with psychic abilities because it would allow them to condense their skills and make tangible attacks. With his goal of bringing the rise of psychics to the world, that item would be of great help, so he places the equipment on his forehead. A blue light begins to emanate, turning his eyes blue, causing him to shout as he realizes he has acquired the ability of telekinesis. He hurls a rock using the power of his mind, causing debris to collide in an area nearby. And he realizes that this power is very good for his current abilities, making it easier to level up even more. He then begins testing some things using psychic detection, which allows him to see people around him even from a great distance. The system alerts him, indicating that the maximum range is currently 29 meters, but that it will increase with his evolution. He receives a system message confirming that all zombies have been killed and that the missions have been completed. He receives a notification stating that he completed 100% of the mission with a current ranking of SSS, earning various rewards and drops. He begins to analyze the blue equipment he received, realizing that he now possessed the Thunder Boots, which increase his agility and the power of his jump. He then wonders if, with this equipment, he would become part of the Agile class. In search of an advancement mission to the Second Order at the Tangfeng Central, he begins to be questioned about what kind of mission he wanted. He replies that he is looking for an advancement mission. The woman asks if he didn't want to move from Zero Order to First Order, and he responds by saying that he would take all the Second Order missions. She is shocked, questioning if the boy was crazy for seeking without knowing his own limits. The protagonist is upset by her comment, and she rephrases her question, then asserts that it is impossible to take on 4 missions at once, and that the penalties for failing would be high. The protagonist informs her that he is aware of all the penalties and states that he is certain he will be able to handle them all. Then, placing his hand on a crystal, he performs a strength test until the crystal begins to emit an extremely strong light, impressing everyone. It is recorded that the protagonist is at the peak of the First Order. Yahello asks if the woman could help him with his registration. She, impressed, observes the broken test crystal. At that moment, a man appears, asking the protagonist if he wasn't the famous talent. The protagonist looks back with a questioning expression and realizes who that person is talking to him. It was a man wearing a cap, the captain of the city's reconnaissance squad. He asserts that no matter the protagonist's effort, his class wouldn't advance much. The woman tries to interrupt the man, but the captain continues, mentioning that they found traces of a battle between someone of Third Order and a creature. Upon hearing this, the protagonist smiles and the scene shifts. In his due, we see a group of heroes and warriors preparing. The leader Hong Gang was a Third Order awakened with a scar on his face, discussing whether to call in a few more reinforcements. He asserts to his companion that it wouldn't be necessary because he was there in search of equipment for his newly awakened son, mentioning that the safe city regrets the loss of an SS awakened and explaining that reporting the search for equipment would harm the high command. With this, his subordinates better understand the situation. Hong Gang asks if there would be a strong second-order monster about to advance to Third Order at the site. It is confirmed that a strong zombie tiger inhabited there. The commander, while smiling, orders the squad to prepare, saying that the strategy would be to distract the weaker monsters while he hunts the tiger. Everyone agrees with his plan and follows his orders. And the protagonist, observing from a rooftop, sees that 2 of his advancement missions are located in the zoo. He then activates his psychic powers to detect the monsters, but also notices the group and another Third Order individual. Deactivating the psychic detection to avoid being detected himself, he decides to eliminate the monsters as quickly as possible. The commander and his group engage in battle, attacking various monsters, while the giant dog begins to chase 2 of the group's warriors. Suddenly, an immense pressure is felt throughout the zoo, and a huge creature with red eyes and crimson fur emerges. The commander, smiling, releases his power and charges forward. Our protagonist realizes that the Third Order man is after the blue-ranked equipment that the tiger might drop. While the man is distracted, the blonde man completes his mission, also desiring the blue equipment. However, he decides it's better not to make enemies unless the man fails to kill the tiger. The crimson tiger charges at the commander, who unleashes a whirlwind with his spear, delivering a precise strike to the beast's head. Our protagonist observes the true strength and agility of the commander. The fight is fierce, with the commander delivering quick and precise blows. The tiger counterattacks, throwing him against a rock. The commander decides to use his most powerful move called Flame Slash, launching blue fire at the tiger. His subordinates, seeing that he has won, begin to retreat, fighting off other mutant monsters. At that moment, the protagonist realizes it would be the perfect time to use his ability, but his instincts tell him that for some reason, it's not over yet. The tiger rises, even more furious, advancing to the Third Order. The pressure in the air increases, and the now exhausted commander prepares for a final confrontation with the beast. Yahello, observing the situation, knows he needs to act quickly. Then an aura emerges, and we see the great creature just reaching the 3rd stage. Our protagonist realizes he must face and defeat the creature, focusing his great power in its direction. He uses his ability, Light Flow, sending a massive beam of energy towards the creature. The great commander is astonished, wondering what that energy could be. We see the monster being hit. The commander, still trying to understand what it was, tries to discern if there was any Third Order awakened individual at the peak of their power in that area, only to be surprised shortly after. Without understanding what had caused that and what power it was, the commander's subordinates realized that the zombie tiger had perished. He orders everyone to be silent. Then, realizing what had happened, he becomes furious, recognizing that someone had stolen his prey. However, he decides not to attack whoever did it, thinking that the person must be much stronger, intending to have a conversation with Commander Xiao Hai later. At that moment, our protagonist receives a system notification informing him that he had eliminated 3 monsters and received the materials from their remains. As soon as he opens the system panel to check the weapons he had received, the vengeful tiger gauntlet begins to enhance his strength, agility, and attack speed. Now realizing that it was worth facing the mutant to obtain such a good item, the protagonist equips it. The scene changes, and we see a team captain investigating the events in which our protagonist participated in the forest and the academy with zombies. At that moment, we see an extra arriving and informing the captain that they had detected 2 Third Order energies. The man is surprised and questions again about the 2, wanting to know what was happening with the Third Order awakened individuals. He then orders everyone to return immediately, proclaiming that they should uncover the problem immediately. Otherwise, the commander would hold them accountable in the future. We then see a man equipped with a spear summoning Xiao Hai. The captain we just observed responds to Commander Hong's summons. He questions him, asking if he was nervous and what happened on the front lines. Commander Hong, encountering this, wonders who this guy is. He introduces himself as Huang Xiao, the captain of the reconnaissance department, mentioning that he is the commander's right hand and that if necessary, he would communicate the reason for the visit to his commander. The man with the spear, enraged, informs that a Third Order Awakened had stolen the equipment he was going to give to his son after stealing the prey that would have given him such an item. He then questions if that power came from the place where the two energy peaks had appeared earlier. Still furious, the man accuses the captain's district, saying that one of their awakened individuals had taken his prey and equipment. The man tries to calm him down, mentioning that the only Third Order Awakened individual was the commander. But still furious, the man with the scar on his face says it would be useless to mention this case, warning that he would go to the front lines to confront Commander Xiao directly. With that, the captain decides that he should report the incident to the commander immediately. We then see the commander's surprise as he questions how a Third Order Awakened managed to steal Commander Hong's prey. He views this as a serious security breach, instructing his subordinate to handle it as quickly as possible because they didn't need to create panic. The subordinate gives a positive signal and informs that he's going to gather information about what happened. Meanwhile, our protagonist is analyzing his missions on the status screen, realizing that he needs to obtain eagle feathers and resolve another anomaly. By doing so, he'll be able to ascend to the Second Order, discovering that eagle feathers are easy to buy online but are rare. However, since the equipment is relatively useless, people often opt to sell them. He then receives a notification from someone selling the feathers he is looking for. But the person in the chat is actually trying to deceive our protagonist, claiming that the feathers are extremely rare and difficult to obtain. Our hero, realizing this, offers 800 credits for the feathers. Upon reading this, the seller on the other side of the screen realizes that 800 credits are more than he would earn in a year. So trying to take advantage of the protagonist, he counters with 900 and then 1,000 credits, claiming that he risked his neck for them. Our protagonist, now enraged by the situation, shouts that the man's a First Order rank C awakened and would be incapable of defeating an eagle. He deduces that the seller probably found the feathers in the woods, though he's bluffing. The protagonist continues yelling, saying that he urgently needed the feathers, but because the man tried to cheat him, he decides to withdraw the offer. At that moment, the seller sends a photo of himself kneeling and begging, saying he would be satisfied with 800 credits so that the protagonist wouldn't back out. Seeing the man's boundless greed, the boy now offers only 400 credits. Even at this price, it was still a good offer, and although saddened by the lost opportunity, the seller accepts the new proposal. The scene shifts to the new anomaly at the Fanghua Institution. We discover that this dungeon is different from the others because no one has been able to complete it. With an SS to rank, what is tested here is not combat, but willpower. We then encounter a new red screen asking the protagonist if he wishes to enter a dungeon. He accepts and says that it's time to discover how strong his willpower truly is. Inside the dungeon, he notices that the sky has changed color, and that there are other people trying to complete it besides him. We see that these people realize that the dungeon is indeed different because even its teleportation is unconventional. One person introduces himself as Lai Zeping. He was a man with glasses and appeared to be old, being an awakened at the peak of the First Order in the mental series. He asks the others if they are also awakened from the mental series. With this question, a young man, infuriated, responds that it's obvious because only they would choose this type of advancement mission. And a slightly embarrassed young woman says that even though mental series are considered weak, together they could complete the mission. The elder says they are right because despite being weak in combat, only willpower would be tested in this dungeon. He claims to have experience in two similar dungeons and asks if he could be the leader, which makes the group question whether he really had experience. Addressing our protagonist, he asks if he has anything against his decision. Our hero replies that there's nothing wrong with that, only that he wants to start the mission because he's in a hurry. We then see a red status screen saying that they need to find and imprison a hidden ghost. Everyone is surprised by this. They then wonder if such a thing really exists. At this moment, the elder calms down and reveals that there are no real ghosts, but rather the lingering will of an individual. This happens because the will present there possesses a lot of psychic energy. He explains that this is merely a projection of what's left of that being, but he also reveals that even these projections or ghosts could still be powerful. Not only could they protect themselves from physical damage, but they could also control the will of others, thus leading the group with the intent to complete the system's mission. It's revealed that they would need to search the building. And if they encountered the being, they should call for help because he had a specific method of dealing with the creature. Despite everything, he is still trustworthy, and the elder reveals that they need to split into 3 groups. Our protagonist would be alone while the elder guided a young woman and the 2 young men who would go with him. He asserts that everyone should communicate as they couldn't afford to withhold information from one another. We see our protagonist analyzing what appear to be pieces of a newspaper. In that note, it was written that a teacher had been accused of harassing a student and afterward had attempted to end his own life. At this moment, we see a creature approaching our protagonist, resembling a woman who looked like she had stepped out of a horror movie with black hair. However, our hero remains unfazed and realizes that it was a female ghost. We then see a purple aura channeling into our protagonist, a manifestation of his own will. He decides to launch it toward the creature, which ends up being hit by the purple rays and decides to flee. After these events, we see several system messages appearing. The warriors communicate and discover various events at the location. Among them, the death of teachers in a fire and the compensation for psychological damage to the girl's family. Soon after all this, priests were called to place talismans at the site, and the protagonist takes the opportunity to report everything to the group. The elder understands the situation and realizes that the girl Wang Fang had been harassed by the teacher. Her family then demanded compensation, which they did not receive, leading the girl to take her own life and become a ghost by causing a fire. They conclude that the talisman the priests had placed there had likely fallen, and their mission would be to seal it again. We see the elder suggest that everyone gather in dormitory 201, but our protagonist questions how the man would know this so easily. With this message, the other group members follow his command and head to the location. But at that moment, the boy with glasses begins to sense the presence of the ghost and immediately communicates it to his companion. The two flee toward the man who was shouting for someone. Meanwhile, in the teacher's dormitory, our protagonist is with the elder and a young woman. The door to the location was stuck. However, the two are surprised by the physical strength of our hero, who resolves the situation. The young woman finds the talisman and our protagonist reflects, realizing that the trace of a human being caused the talisman to fall. He then asks the young woman if she had found any clues about the teacher who harassed the student. He also wonders if the man might have been burned afterward. She responds that she hadn't, while we see two men appear heading toward the elder with the creature right behind them. It possesses one of the boys, giving him a grotesque appearance, while his companion is attacked, screaming for help. The elder informs them that he is going to help and tells our protagonist and his companion to prepare the talisman. Our hero activates it, and at that moment, the elder traps the possessed one, shouting for them to speed up the sealing. At this point, our protagonist seals the talisman on the elder himself. After that, the elder screams, announcing that everyone there would die. The protagonist wonders if this was true, and if so, why the possessed boy now lying on the floor seemed unconscious. The young woman realizes that the old man's seal had caused the boy to fall and concludes that he had caused the apparition. The ghost was created by the elder's manifestation of power. Annie reveals that the man used his willpower to create this manifestation, manipulating the boy's will instead of possessing him. Moreover, the goal was to make them waste the talisman's power, causing them to fail the mission. The young woman is shaken, realizing that she nearly caused the mission to fail. Meanwhile, the protagonist channels purple orbs in his hand, attacking the man and ordering him to reveal his true form. He pierces the man with the orbs, who then falls to the ground, writhing. His skin begins to melt, revealing a terrifying appearance of raw, rotten flesh. He tries to understand how he was discovered, and the protagonist responds that since the mission is over, he no longer owes him any explanations. The monster then reveals that the dungeon had a hidden objective, warning that if they didn't complete it, they would never achieve the highest ranking. Our protagonist asks about the hidden objective, and the creature responds that it would be to make it disappear by will alone. The hero regrets not completing other dungeons in his past life, realizing that if he had known about the hidden objective from the start, he would have already obtained his SSS rank. He ends up accepting the creature's proposal, but questions why it would want to know about it. Before the creature can respond, the hero realizes that it probably stored memories of all the dungeons it had faced. Connecting everything, he understands that the monster wanted to know how it was revealed to avoid making the same mistake in the next dungeon, perfecting its ability to deceive. In other words, this mutant has spiritual intelligence, and the young woman learning this discovers that the dungeon is likely bugged. The monster admits that Yang Ning now understood its intentions and asks if he would reveal how he discovered it. He responds affirmatively, stating that the ghost hadn't sent a word the entire time, indicating that it probably wasn't a true ghost. He also notes that since the man didn't manifest in the chat, he probably didn't have access to the system. Secondly, while observing the documents, he noticed that Wang Feng had attempted suicide, but it didn't explicitly state that he succeeded. However, in the teacher's dormitory, they know the teachers really did die. Therefore, the talisman would only have one possible place to be, and that place would be his grave. The protagonist concludes by stating that the man probably harassed his student. Afterward, he didn't manage to kill himself but ended up in a mental institution, rendering him unable to testify against the accusations. The girl's family, desperate for justice, tried to seek retribution. But when that didn't work, they decided to take justice into their own hands. After a fire, the teacher became a ghost driven by his corrupt will. The group then calls a priest to seal the talisman. The young woman counters his reasoning, arguing that his claims were baseless and trying to refute all of his theories. However, our hero says he holds a crucial clue that he won't reveal until the ghost begins to disappear, as he doesn't trust the words of such a being. The creature starts to vanish, begging the boy to keep the secret. But the protagonist responds with a sarcastic smile, saying he simply guessed everything. The ghost begins cursing the hero before disappearing, while the young woman asks if he really managed to do what he claimed. Shrugging, the protagonist then reveals that the creature's biggest mistake was mentioning the room where the talisman was located. He explains that if it were a warrior with the system, they would already know this, concluding that only the true ghost would have known this information and questioning why the man would reveal it to that being. The young woman is startled, thinking that the hero is more terrifying than the ghost, and is impressed, recognizing that without him, she wouldn't be alive. The boy then receives an item called the Resentment Necklace with a passive effect that increases resistance to psychic attacks by 20% and also boosts essential spiritual energy regeneration. The young woman wonders if this could really be Yang Ming, and if he was the person who had accepted 4 second-order advancement missions earlier. She then asks which of the missions he completed first, and our hero confirms that he has already completed all 4. At that moment, the system sends 4 notifications informing that the protagonist has received 4 more attribute points in addition to 7,300 credits. He leaves satisfied, thinking that he managed to reach the second order of strength in less than a week, thanking his fortune for having such a good system. The young woman who registered Yang Ming's skills begins making a call to report these accomplishments to her superiors. And now we see the protagonist's status, showing 19 points in strength and 18 points in agility. Realizing how good his attributes are, he concludes that even without the bonus, he would be above any second order awakened. But he also notices that he now needs 23 attribute points to learn a new skill. Doing the math, he realizes he would need to buy at least 35 fruits to increase his strength, which would cost him about 210,000 credits. Despite this, he decides to postpone the idea because he has already completed all the worthwhile dungeons in Hotae-1, especially the Death Factory near Zenjin. He recalls that there was likely a high-level blue equipment there that could earn him many credits. While pondering all this, he looks up the sky, seeing a red and black vortex, remembering that it was a sign of a zombie horde. With the memories of his past life, he realizes that great cataclysm is about to happen. The difference is that now Tianfeng would be hit by a horde earlier than expected. Remembering that this should occur within a week, he hops on his motorcycle with the intention of warning the commanders to prepare. Yang Ming sends a message to the commander about the imminent zombie horde. However, the commander doesn't take it seriously. He thinks the protagonist is just trying to get attention because he didn't receive the proper recognition for an SS rank. He believed that Yang Ming was actually weak, recalling that the last great horde occurred 40 years ago, which ended with zombies trapped in abandoned cities. But he considers that the focus should be on the mysterious third-order individuals. In the safe zone of Tianfeng in the meeting room, the commander is discussing with his subordinate about Yang Ming's possible connection to a third-order individual. And when the subordinate reveals that, although hard to believe, Yang Ming is the only one who matches the description and activities related to the sale of materials, he also mentions the fact that Yang Ming had bought a house that ordinary people couldn't even dream of acquiring. The commander questions whether Yang Ming could truly be a third-order awakened. A member of the military committee mentions that although Yang Ming is extremely talented, it was unlikely that he had reached the third order in such a short time. He explains that even a dual awakened with SS rank strength and agility, and with many resources, would only reach the first order in such a brief period. Frustrated, he finds it unbelievable that Yang Ming had reached the third order, suggesting that perhaps a third-order individual was supporting the protagonist. After presenting his conspiratorial theory against Yang Ming, the marshal of the safe zone agrees with him, saying that it makes sense because psychic talents are rare. He speculates that Yang Ming might be used as an experiment by someone. Shifting their focus away from Yang Ming, the commanders decide to investigate his supposed benefactor, aiming for a potential alliance with the Third Order Awakened. At that moment, they receive news that Yang Ming had just completed 4 second-order advancement missions, which surprises them. Despite the initial shock, they believe that the possible benefactor of Yang Ming was the one who completed the missions, leaving only the spoils for him. They debate the fact that the missions were completed, but don't prove that Yang Ming is truly the person they are looking for. The marshal then orders that Yang Ming and the surrounding cities be monitored to prevent an outbreak, believing that if a third-order individual were supporting Yang Ming, they would have already been alerted about the horde. He explains that it's better to prevent a possible future threat, and the subordinate immediately obeys his orders. The Grand Marshal, reflecting on the critical frontier, recalls equipping Hong Gang with a blue-level item to enhance his abilities. Hong Gang needed a blue equipment item to give to his son, who was also awakened. At that moment, a system message appears for Yang Ming, asking if he wishes to enter the Death Factory dungeon, which he promptly accepts. The Rank B dungeon is a war-type mission with random objectives and 7 waves of enemies. Participants would be rewarded according to their performance. To exit the dungeon, there is a clear rule. The rule was that after each wave is completed, a vote would start, and at least 70% of the awakened participants must agree to exit to leave the location. Otherwise, they would have to face all 7 waves. Upon entering the dungeon, Yang Ming observes that several people are already present at the site. He quickly notices that many of them belong to the same faction, being led by a third-order awakened woman. The protagonist notes that this woman indeed seemed to have total control of the group. A man steps forward, volunteering to be the leader. But before anyone can respond, the woman brutally attacks the man. Her subordinates then restrain the remaining participants, heightening the tension in the environment. Yang Ming realizes that the group he joined is being used as cannon fodder. The Third Order woman and her allies intended to use the other participants as human shields to ensure that the spoils were theirs alone. Amidst the chaos, Yang Ming assesses the situation. He recognizes the woman as Linus Ali, a well-known and feared awakened. She promises to release the survivors if they can pass the 6th wave and hand over all the spoils, but Yang Ming knows this is a lie. As he considers his options, the protagonist remembers that he still has the Storm Sword in hand, but he isn't sure if he is strong enough to defeat Linus Ali in a single blow, so he decides to observe and wait for the right moment to act. She orders everyone present to reveal their ranks. One by one, they present themselves, with 2 at the peak of the Second Order and 2 others in the advanced Second Order. When it's our protagonist's turn to introduce himself, Linus Ali approaches, mocking him for being just a mental abilities user. She underestimates his capabilities, but Yang Ming provokes her, asking her to keep underestimating him. The system notification sounds, informing that the first wave had begun with 100 zombies, while 2 First Order mutants advance on them. The Second Order awakened position themselves at the front, ready to face the horde, while the rest try to provide cover. However, it's clear that Linus Ali's group has no intention of helping. They plan to use the others as sacrifices while they lie in wait to reap the rewards of the battle. With the zombie horde drawing closer, the battle begins intensely and chaotically. The protagonist, aware of the danger, remains alert and ready to act at the most precise moment, knowing that the true fight is not only against the dungeon's zombies but also against his own allies who have already surrounded him. The archer pointed out how they were now forced to take on those 6 waves, and so began the first one. The archer stated that he and Song Gang should fight the Devourer while the rest of the party slew the zombies. The frontliner charged headfirst at the abomination, while the long-range fighters prepared their attacks. And so the blonde mage used his skill, Ice Spikes, instantly slaying 6 zombies with ease, while the protagonist only managed to eliminate a single target. This made the mage point out how obvious the result was, seeing how he was only a weak willpower class. Meanwhile, the boss of the farming party spectated from afar while laughing at the weak Yi Lin, who had the guts to take on this mission, stating that the willpower class evaded his certain demise by relying on the others, making her wonder how he would survive the upcoming waves. With that, the first wave was completed. 30 minutes had passed, and the party would be facing the 4th wave shortly. Song Gang, who feared a Second Order foe appearing soon, wondered when the Third Order fight would begin, which made his friend point out that this would be their only chance to take her on. Lin Lan began to make fun of the Second Order fighters who were already exhausted after the 3rd wave, making her speculate that this party was lying about belonging to the Second Order, and so she revealed that she would only enter the battle to face the final wave. Lin Lan was also surprised to see the willpower user alive and unharmed, making the protagonist give credit to his fortune. One of the fighters burst out upon hearing this, stating that Yi Lin, with his useless long-distance attacks, was only relying on the others during the fights. Yet Song Gang was well aware that the protagonist must have a trick up his sleeve, which could benefit them later on, seeing how he managed to enter the Second Order. And so the 4th wave, consisting of 400 zombies, 6 First Order mutants, 2 Second Order mutants, and 1 peak Second Order mutant began. Song Gang ordered the advanced Second Orders to distract the howling female demons while he and Lin Tang took on the Zombie King as the rest of the fighters took on the low-level monsters. Yet the man with the hammer was quickly thrown back by the Zombie King's arms. Lin Tang advised him to be cautious. Meanwhile, one of the mutants set his eyes on an archer, before quickly severing his head with his powerful tongue. The spearman readied himself, and immediately stabbed the howling female demon. But to his surprise, the demon's blood began to burn him like acid. Seeing how his friend Jiang Tao got hurt, the mage immediately used his ice spikes to attack from afar. Yet the creature was too fast for him, and as it charged at him, the mage began to reflect on the party's situation, making him think that this was the end of the road for them. The protagonist realized that he would never have the opportunity to use his secret weapon, seeing how unlikely it was to reach the final wave. The mutant had almost reached the ice mage. With that, our hero finally decided to intervene, taking the mage out of danger with his super speed, before deploying his skill, telekinesis, in order to attack this Second Order mutant. And with the power to control his projectile, our hero was easily able to slay the Second Order mutant. The mage, who thanked his savior, was baffled by the one he mock's achievement, so the protagonist only asked for some respect from him. And so the two of them were now back to back as the weaker one decided to take on the First Order Devourer. Lin Lan was amazed by this sudden performance and realized that the willpower user must be using blue-tier gear boots, thinking that they gave him the courage to enter this dungeon. Yet she didn't fear him since he was a willpower user, but commanded that he be killed in the next wave, since they lacked fighters, and to focus on the 2 strongest instead, fearing betrayal. And after 30 minutes, the 4th wave was cleared, with the next one beginning shortly. Seeing how they had already lost 2 men and had an injured one on their hands, the 2 Second Order peak fighters decided to hold their strongest attacks for the final wave in order to ambush Lin Lan. Song Gang pointed at our hero, who could use his powers continuously, unlike most willpower users, which the archer agreed with, adding that they should shield him if he didn't interfere. And so began the fifth wave, with 500 zombies, 8 first-order mutants, along with 5 second-order mutants, 2 of them being peak. The giant spider immediately jumped on the spearman. Our hero was left uneasy as the mage was caught by the giant mutant centipede, thinking how it was too robust to slay with regular moves and how it would also be a waste of time to triangulate its weakness, while the others begged for help and cursed the farmers. Lin Tang and Song Gang were now back to back, having no other choice but to go all out in order to survive. And so the archer struck down the mutant bat with his ice arrow, while Song Gang used his spiritual war hammer on the twin-headed beast. This made Lin Lan smile maliciously, thinking of the 2 second-tier peak fighters as simpletons for wanting to survive while saving their energy. Meanwhile, our hero was facing the mutant centipede that charged at him along with the spider lurking behind his back. The mutant's powerful attack was enough to shatter the ground, making the rest of the party speculate that our hero had met his demise, when suddenly he destroyed the giant monstrosity with just one punch. All were shocked as there was still more to Yi Lin than meets the eye. Song Gang charged headfirst with his shield, while Yi Lin began to climb the mutant centipede, and Sylvie charged his attack, before mercilessly ending the monster's suffering with one hit to its head. Even the 2 second-order peak fighters were baffled by this feat since they could only slay the howling female demons with everyone's help. Lin Lan began to see the young man as a juicy prey, noticing how he was a beginner with 2 pieces of blue equipment, and so she turned to her party, stating that they would soon enter the 6th wave before asking them to only injure the protagonist so she could pleasure herself by torturing him. The 2 second-order peak fighters began to discuss how they would be left alone with Yi Lin to deal with the final wave, as they hoped to kill or just wound Lin Lan enough for our hero to finish her off. And so the final wave began with its 3 second-tier peak mutants. With that, the boss of the farming party charged at the atrocities, ordering her men to go all out. As she began to tear through the monsters, Lin Lan gave her words, stating that she would only steal a fighter's loot if they survived. The villainess then ordered her minions to kill the rest of the monster horde while she slew the second-order peak berserker. The creature lifted its sword high up in the air, yet Lin Lan easily dodged his powerful attack, before lifting her talon and savagely breaking the berserker's sword in half. A second-tier peak mutant tried to take her from behind, but its bite was easily blocked by Lin Lan's blood shield. Meanwhile, our hero, who was dealing with the scorpion, observed the strength and agility of the dual class blessed with both power and speed as he realized that she far exceeded Hong Gang. He then decided to be cautious during the final rounds, sensing that the villainess was still hiding some abilities. Meanwhile, Song Gang and Lin Tang were plotting to distract the Blood Butcher and use it as bait for Lin Lan in order to launch an all-out attack on her. At that moment, Lin Lan easily destroyed the berserker's head and charged at the Blood Butcher just as the 2 men had planned. Lin Lan then ordered them to distract the beast while she tried to slay it, but just as Song Gang was playing along, the archer deployed his spirit flame arrow. With that, the 3rd-order fighter found herself being attacked by the 2 second-order peak fighters along with the mutant. But the protagonist feared the worst as he was certain that the boss of the farming party had charged ahead with a plan in mind. This ambush resulted in a powerful impact, yet the archer was horrified at the sight of Song Gang, as Lin Lan, who foresaw the ambush, redirected the blow toward the carrier of his shield. This made the protagonist speculate that the villainess used a damage transfer ability in order to switch positions with the now injured man, but this angered her as she was forced to reveal her secret weapon by smashing the beast's head. Lin Lan then charged at the archer while complimenting his move, before delivering a devastating punch to his gut. She then broke his right arm, eager to see how he would try to resist. Lin Lan then asked her minions to kill all the survivors and loot their corpses while she took down the zombie golem. The goon then threatened Lin Tang, stating that he could either cooperate or face a painful death. The man then threatened Song Gang's other arm first. Yet the second-tier peak fighter refused to concede, but the protagonist immediately gave up and asked the criminals to leave him unharmed. Yet the goon decided to follow the orders and handicap the young man like Lin Lan demanded, so our hero just demanded a few seconds before in order to transfer his credit points. But just then rang the end of the 6th wave, and the vote for entering the final wave began. With that, our hero decided to reveal his true power as he killed the man in front of him. And so he chose to start the final wave with secret maximum difficulty in order to make his vote the only one that counted. With that, the system informed all the participants that the 7th wave with maximum difficulty would soon begin. This threw the farming party into a state of panic since only the majority could decide whether or not to engage the wave with its 3rd-order peak mutants that Lin Lan couldn't handle. Song Gang began to laugh as he found it just for the thieves to perish along with them. Lin Lan was left frustrated and accused Song Gang of triggering the wave. With that, she charged at him, aiming to take his life, when suddenly, a giant worm emerged from underground. A titanic monster blocked the villainess's way. Just then, the minion near Lin Tang found himself decapitated. Right before the one near Song Gang met a sudden death, the protagonist then advised the second-order peak fighters to escape if they could still move. Both of them seized the opportunity and began their escape. As he summoned his sword, the young man informed Lin Lan that the Third Order beasts were intelligent beings that enjoyed preying on high-level awakeners like herself, allowing him to easily kill her men. The giant beasts attacked the villainess, forcing her to use her ability, Body Swap, in order to escape by a hair. This sight meant that Lin Lan had a limited range to activate her skill, confirming our hero's suspicions. The giant beast was determined to take down its prey, and despite her best efforts to evade, the boss of the farming party was still struck by the Third Order mutant. The willpower user decided to seize this opportunity and unleashed his skill, Sword Tempest, on the titanic atrocity. Lin Lan was left baffled by this power that even outclassed the might of the giant monster and had a hard time believing that another Third Order awakener was present. Just like that, the grotesque creature found itself cut to pieces. The skill's radius was so large that the villainess was left trapped in it. With that, the dungeon had been cleared, and with its exit opening in 5 minutes, our hero admired the outcome of his Sword Tempest. Both Lin Zhang and Song Gang were left amazed by the young man who took out the powerful beast in one attack, making them speculate that he was an advanced Third Order awakener. Just then, the protagonist detected a life signal between the rubble and speculated that Lin Lan had survived. With that, he used his psychic detection and telekinesis, only to find the beaten-up Third Order awakener heavily breathing on the ground. Just then, she spotted the floating dagger. With that, the baffled farmer realized that Yi Lin was the one behind the giant worm's defeat. Seeing how she was still alive with some type of protection on her, the young man decided to personally eliminate her. And so he tried to stab her with a knife, but the startled woman's barrier saved her life. Seeing how the stab was ineffective, our hero decided to use the weapon as a drill. But this method was also rendered useless, making Lin Lan feel thankful to have bought this expensive one-use A-rank passive defensive item. Seeing how telekinesis was rendered useless, our hero decided to end her suffering manually since she was too powerless to resist. As he charged at her, Lin Lan asked the protagonist if he was the secret Third Order awakener behind the powerful attack. The swordsman began to grow tired of this barrier and it seemed unbreakable. But as it broke, the farmer revealed that she would rather die immediately than suffer this humiliation. This made our hero realize that she misunderstood his intentions despite the fact that he had the power to end her. Lin cracked a sinister smile as he realized that Lin Lan would welcome death over disrespect, and despite the lack of ethics, our hero decided to take on the role. And so he approached the villainess, gently lifted her face, and claimed that she couldn't receive a peaceful end after torturing the other awakeners, making her fear the worst. Lin then stated that he would give her a true taste of true embarrassment. With that, Lin Lan wanted to make a deal that would guarantee an honorable death. And so the protagonist decided to reverse the roles and promised to leave her honor unharmed in exchange for all her possessions, yet Lin Lan had her doubts. But the hero affirmed that he was her only option, forcing her to immediately agree. And so Lin Lan transferred all her possessions to the other awakener. Seeing this made the protagonist realize that robbing other awakeners was the quickest way to make profits. Having given everything she owned, the defeated awakener demanded her death. But Lin then grabbed her by the arm as he was not convinced that she only had 13,000 credit points on her. Yet she affirmed that this was all she had. And so he slammed her into the ground with a malicious smile as he reminded her of his threats, yet Lin Lan dared Lin to execute them. This made our hero realize that he truly robbed her of everything, while the embarrassed farmer began to think of him as a coward. But just then, the Third Order awakener realized that her attacker must only be a Second Order who couldn't get past her barrier. 10 seconds were left until the exit of the dungeon as Lin Lan managed to get up on her feet, while her attacker began to panic as he was uncovered. With that, the boss of the farming party swore to track down Lin and give him the most agonizing death possible. But our hero, Ning, was left reassured since, by the time she uncovered his true identity, she would be the one tracked down. Our hero ended the mission with an S-rank rating, some Sonic experience along with 6 white items and 2 blue, 1 stat-free point, and the blue title of Factory Guardian. Ning was also very pleased by Lin Lan's loot and thought of selling it in order to buy Sonic fruits and enhance all his stats to 25. Our hero aimed to find an inn in Zhenjiang and practice his B-rank skill, Shadow Assault, before going to the Lost Battlefield the next day in order to get equipment and adapt to the battlefield. When suddenly, someone ahead began to ask for help. It was a man in a suit asking for assistance as his car was flipped over. Yet when our hero approached to take a closer look at the accident, multiple shadows appeared behind him. Ning was now facing multiple armed men, who aimed to rob him of his credits. With that, our hero quickly grabbed his knife and swiftly defeated the thieves in the blink of an eye. Just then, the bloodthirsty protagonist noticed the suited one on the run, so he decided to use his telekinesis to take him down. The knife struck the man's foot, making him fall face first onto the ground. Ning noticed that the suited man didn't bleed from his wound. To his surprise, this creature was neither zombie, mutant, nor even human. This mysterious life form began to beg for its life, proposing to point the protagonist towards the thieves' loot in exchange for his safety. And as he grabbed him by the collar, the one in the suit claimed that he was forced to lie by the robbers, But Yining was more interested in knowing what this creature was exactly. The little man decided to open his status window in order to save himself. The entity turned out to be a dungeon NPC called Li Fugai. This intrigued our hero, who asked the non-playable character if he had obtained self-awareness and escaped the dungeon, but Li Fugu claimed to also be clueless. Yining then began to think of how overpowered and rare the NPC's trading skills were and began to imagine Li Fugu saving and earning him money. And so he pulled out a scroll and agreed to spare the non-playable character in exchange for signing it. Li Fugu was startled to see a slave contract in front of him, which once signed would guarantee his death if he didn't show loyalty to his master. And so Yining threatened to immediately end the suited NPC if he didn't cooperate. Just like that, Li Fugu became the protagonist's slave. Our hero called the creature his teammate, while the non-playable character began to cry as he was forced into slavery and was meeting so many dishonorable individuals. So Yining offered him all of the bandits' loot, turning the NPC's sad tears into happy cheers as he began to praise his master while gaining loyalty, which baffled our hero. With that, the master ordered his new slave to sell all his Death Factory rewards except the blue tier ones and buy a storage space where he would stay to manage the finances. Later that night, the non-playable character called out his master for consuming precious spiritual food like a normal meal. So Yining shoved the creature back into his storage space and kept on eating until all his stats were increased to 25. With that, our hero decided to learn the skill Shadow Assault, which evolved into the SSS rank skill, Dimensional Slash. Our hero was thrilled to know that his new power couldn't be blocked by defenses, and with that decided to test his newest skill tomorrow on the Relic battlefield. As a new sun dawned on the world, our hero entered the said B-class dungeon. The protagonist was greeted by two first-tier, second-grade siblings, Chen Yang and his sister Chen Yao, who speculated that our hero lied about being a high-tier, second-grade awakener, which made her brother scream at her. Yining speculated that they both belonged to a military family based on their outfits and decided to be on his guard. Chen Yang apologized for his sister's rudeness, calling her spoiled, while the protagonist introduced himself as Yi Lin. Our hero was then surprised to learn that this dungeon is a special event, one of the 3 odd events of the apocalypse that he hadn't encountered yet, along with the paranormal events and meme events. But Chen Yang reassured him that despite the event having paranormal origins, the dungeon is one of the safest there is, with no mission limit allowing one to escape without fighting. Since the special event would be a replica of the War of the Apocalypse's dawn, the Awakeners would be facing normal zombies and mutants. Just then, hordes of atrocities began to fill the streets. Chen Yang planned to kill the monsters with Yi Lin while his sister kept her distance. But to their surprise, the protagonist charged on his own ahead, making Chen Yao see him as a rude individual, before targeting the biggest foe and defeating him with spectacular ease. A feat that Chen Yang couldn't expect less from a high second-order awakener, as he affirmed that he and his sister were also powerful. The long-haired man proposed to hold the monsters off as much as possible with Yi Lin and summon the undead soldiers when the situation got out of hand. Yining was shocked by this ability, which he assumed was a simple myth since he had only heard of it in rumors. But according to its user, this technique is concealed by the military, and just when he was about to warn the protagonist about keeping the secret, a monster charged at him from behind. So our hero threw his dagger in order to save Chen Yang with ease. The axe wielder was baffled to see the high-tier, grade 1 mutant fall to the power of telekinesis as the warm-up round ended, marking the soon-to-begin war replica. Chen Yang offered Yi Lin the military's special cigarette as a token of gratitude, but our hero declined, pointing out that the man must come from wealth to own cigarettes in the apocalypse. So the Awakener revealed that he was the grandson and son of 2 third-tier Awakeners with great positions while also being the leader of his own group, which he invited our hero to join. But to his surprise, the loner Awakener immediately declined, making him drop his cigarette. Yet the military man insisted, stating that Yi Lin only had to become his assistant to be showered in rewards, in addition to 3,000 credits as a salary and 1,000 more from his personal wealth, not to mention a free blue-tier equipment and the right for his family to be part of the military, making his sister step in after hearing these ridiculous conditions. The protagonist jumped away as he had no interest in this position and advised the 2 siblings to prepare themselves for battle, while thinking about how he would become their employer once he reached 3rd tier. This amazed Chen Yang, as many of the same tier had begged for these offers, while his sister thought of him as simply egotistical since their family was filled with such awakeners. 30 minutes into the fight, the struggling military man wanted to retreat in order to use his undead soldiers, but Yining asked him to hold his ground and draw the enemies to him. So Chen Yang asked the protagonist to conceal himself on top of a wall. With that, our hero decided to use Slipstream Slash, allowing him to eradicate many of the atrocities crawling on the ground. Chen Yang was baffled, since even a 3rd tier couldn't wipe out a horde, especially one with 2nd tier beings in it, in one move, making the girl think that this skill was superior to her family's. With that settled, our hero gave the green light for the summoning of the undead warriors, which confused Chen Yao since he was powerful enough to handle it. But since it was Yilin's order, her brother decided to execute it without question, leaving his sister speechless. With that, Chen Yang began the incantation. Just like that, multiple Revenant soldiers appeared on the battlefield, ready to fight fiercely. The summoner informed the protagonist that they could only spectate for now, as the soldiers would disappear once the wave ended, but Yilin ordered them to stay in place. And so Yining made his way into this ruined city that is this dungeon. He expected the legendary blue item to be revealed after killing the second-tier mutant, so he now theorized that it would appear after the Revenants appeared, leaving it to his guts to locate it. And so Yining was able to triangulate the item's position. The protagonist found an odd blue ball that triggered the hidden mission called Death Wish, which consisted of discovering and resolving the problem that caused this war. This intrigued the young man, making him speculate that the mission had a relation with the very notebook in his hand. The notebook belonged to a defense registrar 60 years from now during the very first zombie incident. In it, the author narrates how the zombie horde passed Zhenjiang and how a battalion would go meet it, along with the addition of efficient recruits, and how he wasn't used to the local language. On July 20, the 17-year-old Ah Yan revealed to him that he was in love with a girl in a safe zone behind the defense lines and wished to marry her as soon as possible, according to his customs. 4 days later, the zombies defeated the battalion, so the commander asked the author to take advantage of his civilian status in order to escape the battlefield as soon as possible. On July 25, the first zombie attack occurred earlier than anticipated, resulting in the death of the young man and the inability to retrieve his remains. Yet the next day, when the commander, who asked his men if they had any last words, had fallen shortly after, the author decided to stay where he belonged, unable to ask for his own. On the 27th of July, the soon-to-be-dead diary holder was surprised to see all of his fallen, talkative comrades all utter the same one word in their last breath. The last word was Moran's, which meant returning home. This made Yining gaze into the medallion and reflect on what had been written, when he finally understood it all. Meanwhile, back on the battlefield, Chen Yao wondered if their ally was truly a third tier or if he had just used a one-time skill or item. Yet her brother stated that they shouldn't risk crossing him. Yet she was convinced that he wouldn't harm them due to their grandfather's position, so Yang advised her to be polite and that they should try to enroll him to receive the praise of their elders. When suddenly, Yilin arrived, making the military man ask him if they should retreat right now. Kenyon explained that the Revenant soldiers wouldn't be able to resist for long, especially when the third-tier mutant arrives, so they should leave now before becoming the monster's target. But the protagonist ignored the Awakener and asked him if he was aware of this war replica, and how all these soldiers met their demise. Kenyon explained that, according to his grandfather, no one came back alive from the battle, yet their sacrifice allowed the backline forces, like his grandfather, to escape to the safe zones. Our hero then asked about the reason behind the monster horde's disappearance if no one survived, so the unsure man stated that the zombies just vanished according to the stories. Hearing this, the protagonist began to grasp the bigger picture, leaving the siblings intrigued by his sudden fascination with history. Yilin then asked about the word Moran's, which they revealed was a word roaming in their military that once screamed would invoke the undead soldiers to fight for the summoner. Ken Yao rudely ordered the protagonist not to reveal this information to anyone since her brother only enlightened him out of respect. Yilin then asked about the number of times the soldiers were summoned. Ken Yao revealed that the soldiers were summoned hundreds of times, mostly for obtaining the items, yet each individual could only invoke them once. Yining then asked if the military ever helped the Revenants beat the final wave, but the Awakener denied it since only second-order fighters set foot in this dungeon, with Yilin being the first third tier here. And after hearing this, our hero decided to quickly act, as he finally understood the reason behind this dungeon's existence. Ken Yao was left confused as she expected them to retreat. Meanwhile, the fierce undead soldiers were determined to shield and return to their home. Yining realized that those were the souls of the past heroes and was repulsed by the way the military exploited them. 60 years ago, despite being left behind by the military, they still sacrificed themselves for the sake of their homes. In the past, they were left to be forgotten as soldiers among many others. The zombie hordes couldn't have just vanished. Their souls were brought back as revenants by their hatred, turning this area into a special event that serves as the eternal prison of the zombie horde. And so our hero firmly gripped his sword, and as he tore through the monstrosities, he thought of how the final wave was never cleared by the military in order to keep the incantation active for their future generations. The powerful thunderstorm roamed above the ruins of this past battlefield. Yining was repulsed by the military's way of exploitation. The word Moran's, which is filled with the hopes of the immortalized hero, had been degraded to a simple incantation repeatedly used by the military. And Sir Yining decided to even put his life on the line in order to rewrite the 60-year-old wrong. Kenya was surprised to see the protagonist willing to take on the third-tier mutants, which Chen Yang found odd as he wouldn't need to summon and use the undead soldiers to fight the monsters. With that, the sister tried to persuade her brother to quickly escape since even if Yi Lin was a third-tier awakener, it was still possible for him to lose against a third-tier mutant. Despite it being the best time to escape, Chen Yang feared not winning the protagonist over if he chose to run away. And so he decided to wait and only escape if the third-tier mutant could overpower Yi Lin, leaving his sister uneasy. When suddenly the ground beneath them began to shake, a large silhouette began to approach from afar. A creature with a titanic foot, a giant whose knees were easily above the average building. To the siblings' horror, the third-tier mutant had arrived, a creature distinguished by its colossal size. Seeing this, our hero understood that his only option was the dimensional slash, but he also decided to use it with precaution since he was unsure of its efficiency. As he controlled his breath, Yi Ning decided to use the skill once the giant came closer. The monster was approaching with giant steps, getting up close to 40 meters, and when it tried to attack, our hero judged it wise to do the same. With that, Yi Ning used his skill, Dimensional Slash. Yet to his surprise, all seemed to be deprived of motion. The protagonist wondered if he was now inside the dimensional space, seeing how everything seemed slow compared to him. But this wasn't the end of it, as he could now see through the matter. Yi Ning could now make his body take physical form anywhere in the dimensional space, granting him the power to pass through material constructs. As he stabbed the giant in its brain, our hero finally understood why, according to the system, the skill was unaffected by defenses, making him unbeatable. Yi Ning twisted the blade in the third-tier mutant cerebrum before quickly getting off, and so the monster's head exploded from the inside. Just like that, the titanic atrocity finally met its demise as it fell to the ground. Both siblings were shocked as a monster that could single-handedly eradicate a safe zone was instantly killed before their very eyes. Kenya was now certain that this man was a third grader who even surpassed her father and grandfather. Her brother confirmed it as he had met many third-tier awakeners, yet none were this powerful, making him think that Yi Lin was a one-of-a-kind high-tier grade 3. The siblings were also confused as the dungeon would forever disappear in 10 seconds, according to the system, demanding an explanation from the main character. But he ignored them and raised the medallion, chanting the hopeful word, finally granting the thankful undead soldiers their eternal repose. Ken Yang was intrigued since Yi Lin chanted the summoning spell despite the presence of the undead, but our hero affirmed that he would explain later since the dungeon was now vanishing. With that, our hero completed the dungeon with a 100% completion rate, earning himself the highest rating once again along with many rewards. But despite all that, our hero was filled with sadness as he wanted to do more for the fallen heroes. With the end of the dungeon, the mission Last Wish was updated, making him choose between cashing in the rewards or going to the soldier's home to renew the rewards and the necklace. Yi Ning would have returned to their home even if there were no rewards at stake. Ken Yang was glad to have found the protagonist, seeing how they had entered the dungeon from different places. The man had transferred all of the rewards he obtained to the protagonist, who couldn't be more thankful. The siblings insisted on inviting Yi Lin for lunch, yet he declined, asking them for help in order to settle an urgent matter. Seeing how the man gladly accepted to offer assistance, Yi Ning requested to know the hometowns of the now-delivered soldiers, and Sir Chen Yang immediately ordered Vice Commander Xu to locate the said place, which turned out to be 300 kilometers away from town Jiang, which is why he offered him a helicopter. As our hero boarded the vehicle, Chen Yao was intrigued by her brother, who let this man go without explaining the disappearance of this dungeon cherished by the army. This goes without mentioning, offering him all of his obtained prizes as if he was trying to help Yi Lin hide this incident. Ken Yang, who was aware of this matter's significance, revealed that he even planned to take all the blame for it. The Awakener didn't just plan to relinquish his rewards to the protagonist, but even offer him an insane amount of credits. But the sister found her brother's effort a waste as Yi Lin didn't show any will to join them. Yet Chen Yang disagreed, but first he decided to accept that due to their political enemies, the blame would be pinned on them, and it would be better to accept it as a service to Yi Lin. It also deduced that the young Awakener didn't belong to any military faction since he asked them for intel, and also that the protagonist was an emotional man despite his small resort to words, so the best way to make him an ally was to treat him with the purest honesty. Meanwhile, our hero was wondering if the delivered souls were flying alongside the helicopter back home. After that, in the Zhuang clan on Mount Wen, our hero asked an old lady if she recalled the young fighters who had partaken in the war 60 years ago. As she held the picture in her trembling hand, recognizing Ai Yan, she welcomed him home. Yi Ning affirmed that the heroes were finally back home. Just then, the man arrived, stating that after all, there were only 5 people alive who remembered what happened during the war, and that they gave the village resources to improve their conditions. As for the monument that our hero brought up, the man brought the village chief to make an arrangement, who was ordered by Chen Yang to do everything he could to assist our hero. Yet the old man was left baffled when the protagonist personally offered 4,000 credits for the monument's construction, before asking him to donate the extra credits to the kids of the village. The village chief, who promised to eternalize the heroes, couldn't be more grateful towards the young man who decided to be modest. With that, Yining asked the returned warriors to enjoy their eternal repose. Our hero then felt grateful towards them as the oath necklace had been greatly enhanced by completing the last wish mission, and he decided to wear it until he saw the end of the war. The protagonist also received 100 fame points, which can't be purchased, but he might find some utility for them later on when raising his own army. This made him recall Chen Yang, who helped him a lot without questioning the disappearance of the dungeon, and despite not liking him at first, our hero realized that he was unaware of the truth. And so he decided to question him further about the dungeon upon returning and ask him for a few favors at the same time. Ken Yang was shocked to see Yi Lin contacting him. The hero immediately aimed to borrow 2 blue-tier swords that preferably possessed cooldown reduction, which intrigued the military man. But Chen Yang insisted on offering the weapons to the protagonist instead of letting him borrow them. As the thankful young man closed the call, the Awakener was left filled with joy, as this meant that Yi Lin found him trustworthy, which would also bring joy to his grandfather and father. At the same time, our hero found the military man pretty direct. He was happy to see all of his stats boosted to 26, except for mental at 31 from the last mission, and would try to conquer harder dungeons once he received the swords and his skill resets. Yining recalled how he rushed to become a 3rd tier in his previous life with only 20 stat points, which resulted in a lack of base attributes since the promotion doubles one's points. This time, our hero would boost all of his stats to 31 before promotion, since the zombies would start to assault the Tianfeng safe zone by the time he acquired this many points. But just then, the protagonist noticed a murderous aura worthy of a 3rd grade. With his ultimate not being reset yet, our hero would find himself in a difficult situation if the Awakener charged at him. Yining was left clueless about this person's identity. Except for Chen Yang, no one was aware of him, which made our hero speculate that he didn't want him anymore, or that the 3rd Order commander, who he snatched a kill from, was here. But both were unlikely, since the military man was trying to recruit him, and the commander ignored his identity, leaving Lin Lan as the only option. But with no skills to use, he couldn't rush. At first, he wanted to use his boots to quickly escape, but after calming down, he realized that the enemy hadn't moved yet, as they were unsure of his skills' availability, so he decided to hide. Just then, Yining spotted a bar and recalled how only unreachable people would enter such a place in times of danger. With that, he decided to use the place in order to project the illusion of power. The protagonist was now inside a fancy bar. A beautiful young girl sitting not far from him was disappointed to see the bar only full of old people. The guard quickly approached her, stating that they should return after she finished her drink, and she quickly dismissed him. But just then, something caught the young lady's attention. She noticed Yining sitting at the other end of the bar. Judging by her attire, the protagonist speculated that the youthful lady was going through a rebellious phase. The girl then flirtatiously approached him. It didn't escape the protagonist that all her jewelry was labeled blue tier. He then realized that she must also come from a wealthy family, judging by the 4 second-order peaks that served as her bodyguards and how no one dared to cross her. Yet when she invited him for a drink, all he could think about was the murderous person lurking outside the bar. Yining affirmed that he couldn't afford such luxury, so the rich girl gladly offered to invite him. As she ordered the drink, our hero felt guilty for exploiting her as such, but with her 4 powerful bodyguards and his own ability being unknown, the 3rd tier would hesitate to strike. The rich girl then invited him to accompany her to a hotel, which made him hesitant at first. Our hero noticed that the girl liked to be the one in the lead, which is why he would pretend to submit for now. The bodyguards wanted to stop their boss's daughter from going to a hotel with a stranger, but Lai stated that it would be of no use, as he recalled how she made the Lord furious at them one time. With that, they were doomed to follow her in order to guarantee her safety. Seeing how the ominous presence was still lurking around, the protagonist had no choice but to actually go with the girl. After arriving at the hotel, Yining wasn't surprised to learn that she was Yan Yuquin, offspring of Zone 317's leader and president of Starshine Trading Company, Yan Legion, since she could afford a night in such a hotel. In his previous life, our hero worked for her father's company as a guard against zombies. This made him point out that he technically still worked for Yan Legion, but the mention of the man upset the rich girl. As she threw herself at him, requesting a hug, our hero immediately realized that she had a fight with her father and was only acting as such in order to annoy him. Seeing this childlike behavior, our hero decided to teach her a lesson by startling her as he suddenly pinned her down. Yan Yuquin couldn't find the words as Yining was so close to her blushing face. Overwhelmed by the moment, the girl excused herself, rushing to take a shower. Just as our hero speculated, the most amusing dominators always pretended to dominate. As the spoiled girl took her shower, our hero began to think of how innocent she truly was and how it would take her some time before exiting the washroom. On the balcony, Yining could notice the murderous 3rd tier lurking down the street, but from his male-like silhouette, he was left with no suspects since it could be Lin Lan. Even after reincarnating, he was still clueless as to how he oddly went unconscious before the awakening evaluation. And if the person could have killed him back then, why do all this? And after some careful thinking, the boss of the farming party must still be injured from last time, but it was possible for her to contact another hunting team in order to hire a third-tier assassin. But regardless of his identity, our hero had to escape as soon as possible, and so he asked Lei Fugu for an advanced disguise gear that would completely mask him. The bodyguards were surprised to see the young man getting out of the room so soon, so Yi Ning advised them to take care of their lady as she was very drunk. Once in the elevator, the protagonist tried out his disguise gear, which provided him with a new face along with fake clothes. The lurking shadow disappeared, so the young man judged his costume to be a success, stating that he should focus on becoming third tier to repel enemies while wishing Yan Yukun the best. Back at the hotel room, the rich girl only found a letter. An intrigued look appeared on her face as she began to read it. In it, the protagonist thanked her for the time spent together and asked her to be more careful in the future, stating that he wasn't fond of exploiting and manipulating others. After 2 days, the son of the wealthy military family procured the protagonist with 2 blue equipment pieces. Our hero was now holding the Yuchin short sword along with the blazing flame longsword, 2 magnificent blue-tier weapons. Yi Ning then activated the power of the longsword. The blade could easily reach 2,000 degrees as it consumed 270 spiritual points every second. Our hero then turned his eyes to the abilities of the short sword. The blade reached incredible sharpness by using 240 of his spiritual points per second. Combined with his own spiritual energy reserves, these blades would be perfect for smaller tier battles. With these 2 weapons, along with his boots, armor, knee armor, and oath necklace, in addition to his 3 ultimate skills being reset, Yi Ning could now pass as a third-tier awakener capable of entering the difficult dungeon called Gate of Hell, a multi-level dungeon where one faces zombies and mutants. As every 7 floors, a special mutant appears to serve as a boss, with the final floor being inhabited by a third-tier peak monster. Aside from the mutant rewards, the dungeon had the most abundant energy crystal reserves, and if our hero was lucky to find an impressive chunk, it would outvalue any blue equipment. With that, our hero decided to enter the extremely difficult dungeon, Gate of Hell, where the system advised him to have third-tier allies before entering. With 39 other Awakeners participating, Yi Ning's chances of obtaining a promotion entirely rested on this very trip. Inside the dungeon, the Awakeners desperately tried to mine the energy crystals since even a small chunk cost 8,000 credits, so a small reserve would assure one a luxurious life. But another Awakener ordered them to stop since the only way to take the crystals out of the dungeon was as rewards for killing the lurking mutants. Our hero counted 39 other Awakeners, with 21 belonging to the military. Just then, a man ordered everyone to focus, as this exploration would be led by the military. This person introduced himself as the third-tier Awakener, Wang Yang Pin, the colonel of the 7th Army Group. The Awakeners were surrounded by 18 zombie-filled tunnels, where a 3-man team would enter a respective tunnel in order to increase profit, since too many teammates result in fewer rewards. The different teams would meet each other at the entrance of the 7th floor in order to join forces against the special mutant. Since the military had brought 4 third-tier and 10 second-tier peak Awakeners, it was possible to resort to a 2-man team while following a military officer, which most were excited about. Wang Yang Pin then requested a 70% fee deducted from the rewards of those who chose a third-tier Awakener and 50% from those who chose the weaker ones. And so the colonel ordered his third-tier soldiers, followed by his second-tier soldiers, to move forward. The men immediately obeyed, as the Awakeners could now pick their teammates. The unsure Awakeners began to discuss among themselves the atrocious fee imposed by the military and how it could guarantee their safety. When suddenly, a tall Awakener stepped forward and introduced himself as Yun Ming, a first-tier, third-grade from the Demon Hunting Corps, stating that he would only accept high second-tier fighters for a 50% fee of their total loot. Our hero was surprised to see another civilian Awakener in this dungeon, and one that belonged to the well-known Demon Hunting Corps nonetheless. After that, a man called Huang Kai stepped forward, having the same rank as Yun Ming and proposing the same deal. Yi Ning was shocked by this man due to his familiar presence. Huang Kai recognized Yi Lin, making him speculate that he was the third-grade Awakener that stalked him, and since cultivation groups feared such dungeons, his presence must be luck. Yet the 2 men were happy to meet each other here, as each now had a chance of disposing of the other, with Huang Kai being cautious, having heard that his target possessed a strong skill. The protagonist then stepped forward, introducing himself as Yi Lin and offering his services to all for just a 40% fee. Yet the Awakeners had their doubts since he didn't give the impression of a third tier, and so they assumed that teaming up with him would be dangerous. Huang Kai called out the young man, stating that he was most likely lying about his grade, so Yi Lin responded that only a fool would falsely assume the title in such a dangerous place. So one of the men turned to the colonel since he had the best detection skill, and despite not being able to verify his strength, he deduced that he was a third tier based on his blue equipment. With the mission starting off in 60 seconds, the Awakeners rushed to form their teams, and so all organized themselves into groups of 3, except for the last, along with our hero, who stood alone. Yulin was shocked to see that no one wanted to be a part of his team. This made Huang Kai laugh at him, seeing how everyone assumed our hero was just a liar pretending to be third grade, which left him forced to choose between the second grade military awakeners or the two weak fighters left. The girl was a ranged mage called Lin Qi, and the man was a mentalist called Zhang Wen, who both wished to team up with our hero, which he immediately accepted, leaving both of them grateful. As every team chose its tunnel, our hero opted for the last one and asked his teammates about their respective abilities. Lin Qi was a mage who could only use her first grade skill 3 times, while Zhang Wen was good with a machine gun, making him effective against first grades. The disappointed protagonist tried to find the right words, but his teammates understood him well, stating that they only entered the Hell Gate in order to make a living. But he reassured them that as long as they paid him, Yi Lin would make sure to keep them away from harm. Just then, our hero felt the atrocities coming their way. Yi Lin counted 273 zombies and 2 first-tier mutants. Its counting ability amazed the mage, while the mentalist assumed that this was a third-grade special power. As he tore through the zombies, our hero thought of how saving his energy was the key to survival, which is why Yi Lin decided to avoid the use of ultimates and equipment power before the 7th floor. Lin Qi was amazed by the young man's speed, while Zhang Wen felt like he didn't resort to spiritual energy in order to slay the monsters, and both were shocked to see that the atrocities were wiped out before they could act. Killing the 2 first-tier mutants allowed our hero to obtain 380 pieces of spirit crystal and equally share 300 pieces of crystal with his team for completing the mission. Amazed by the easy 60 crystal reward, the protagonist's teammates were glad to follow the one that began to calculate his profit, as each piece was worth 10 credits. Shortly after, on the 7th floor, all were waiting for Yi Lin to arrive, while Huang Kai pointed out once again that he must have lied about his grade. The murderous awakener assumed that the young man couldn't deal with first-grade mutants without his skills and was thrilled to assume that he would die at his hand or a high second tier. But just then, the last team arrived. Wang Yang Pin stated that the only way to clear this floor was to slay 5 high-tier second-level mutants and that 7 third-tier awakeners would take on a mutant while the others fought another for more profit. The colonel even proposed to help the struggling ones in exchange for a small fee, but Yi Lin declined on behalf of his team. But the two of them were worried, as the fast Yi Lin was having a hard time against the crystal ant on the previous floor, but the mentalist assumed that he was saving energy and decided to trust him. Just then, the system informed the awakeners of 8 high second-tier mutants arriving. Seeing how all the monsters were standing right behind each other, our hero hesitated to kill them on his own and make it look like an accident, while Huang Kai decided to plot for Yi Lin's murder after dealing with the imminent threat. Killing the monsters in one go would destroy his chance of killing the murderous third grade, but the protagonist decided to spare the man for now in order to not provoke the military. And so he used his heaven-splitting strike in order to end the monster's misery. As all were amazed by this feat that even outclassed the everyday third tier, the murderous awakener, who was warned by Lin Lan of the skill's power, was still amazed by the destruction. Even the protagonist's teammates were left baffled as they finally witnessed the young man's true strength. Yi Lin finally landed on the ground, thinking of how the monsters should be worth between 50,000 and 60,000 credits as he received a total of 1,400 crystals from the mutants. As they were rewarded 150 crystals each as a team reward, his teammates were filled with joy as they earned 9,000 credits without even fighting, which surpassed their 6 months of income. Wang Yang Pin pointed out how the protagonist was hiding his true power, but the young man apologized for slaying all the mutants by misjudging his strength. But Huang Kai was left unsatisfied since the young man was the only one that got to enjoy the rewards, stating that he should be more sportive, especially in front of the military. The protagonist realized that the man was only trying to provoke him in front of the military. The young man reassured everyone that there were still more second-order monsters to awaken and kill, as he promised to steal no more kills. Huang Kai used this opportunity to accuse Yi Lin of being an egotistical person who disrespected the colonel with his high tone. But Wang Yang Pin agreed with our hero, stating that more second-order peak mutants awaited them, and that they needed a strong ally like him, not a wedge between the group. With that, the murderous awakener decided to follow the commander but stated that the young man should kill a second-order peak one again to compensate with its rewards. The colonel agreed since he was eager to see more of Yi Lin fighting. Our hero was forced to agree but realized that Huang Kai was trying to exhaust his ultimates, that he wanted to keep Sword Tempest for floor 14 and Dimensional Slash for tough situations. Just then, the final wave was triggered as 8 second-order peak mutants charged at the Awakeners. With that, our hero decided to rely on his equipment skills to take down one of the 8 monsters and even hoped to lure the murderous Awakener into a mistake. Yin had his sight on a giant defense-type mutant, planning to hit and escape until the creature became tired. The protagonist used his short sword yet only failed to pierce through the monster's flesh with his weak attack. Seeing how he was struggling, Huang Kai decided to make the young man his next target after the beast he was battling, realizing how weak he was without his ultimates. In the face of this giant lizard, our hero found himself in a tough situation. Yet he charged headfirst at the beast with the power of his blades and a smile on his face, striking the giant reptile's limb. But to his disappointment, he was once again left with a simple scar. The crocodile was so tough that even a blue-tier blade couldn't chop off its leg in one go. The beast decided to counterattack with its tail, leaving the protagonist with no choice but to block it. The fight was intense. His teammates were shocked to see him struggling so much, and so they decided to aid him. As they aimed their attacks at the crocodile, it only resulted in getting its attention. With that, the second-tier peak mutant charged at the weak awakeners. This made the mentalist and mage believe that they had finally met their fall, when suddenly, Yilin arrived to save them, asking them to retreat as he was able to kill the beast without help. Despite not being able to kill it in one go, his attacks began to deal more damage. With that, he used his speed to safely assault the giant reptile, hoping to tire it. Both the military man and the member of the demon-slaying corps were easily overpowering their opponents, which was no different from Huang Kai and his hammer. Lin Qi pointed out how all Third Orders finished their fights already, while Yi Lin was still struggling with this one opponent, making the mentalist state how he oddly defeated 8 monsters, yet struggled against one of the same rank. All of the Awakeners were watching as Yi Lin struggled against the crocodile. The colonel found it strange seeing how the protagonist could only deal very little damage, thinking that Yi Lin would be a second-grade peak without his powerful equipment. Seeing how everyone had finished their fights, our hero expected the murderous Awakener to attack him very soon, and so he charged ahead and pretended to be going to assist him. But Yi Lin realized that the man only wanted to kill him and the crocodile in one go. Yet since he was almost finished, Huang Kai wouldn't be able to execute his plan, and so he resorted to the power of his lightning boots in order to increase his mobility, positioning himself right above the monstrosity's head and stabbing it with Gut Ripper's thrust. Just then, the murderous Awakener tried to ambush him with his skilled Golden Jar hammer, yet our hero resorted to his Blood Soul armor defense, followed by his crippling armor's light blade in order to knock him back, and finished off the crocodile with the very same skill. Huang Kai managed to safely land on his feet. The Cardinal then pointed out how the young man didn't require his assistance after all, leaving the murderous Awakener unsatisfied. As he recognized some of his equipment as Lin lands, but since the hero's energy reserves couldn't hold such power for long, Huang Kai decided to kill him before he exited the dungeon. The protagonist pointed out how the murderous Awakener wouldn't be satisfied until they settled their differences. And when the Cardinal tried to calm the hammer carrier since the young man killed the alligator, the man affirmed that this was a personal problem. Not knowing the man's motives but being aware of the matter being personal, our hero proposed to settle their differences on floor 14 in order to save the others some time, which shocked Huang Kai, who expected the young man to flee from the dungeon. This left him intrigued as the protagonist had already resorted to his aces, and relying on gear only to make it through the floors was a fatal folly, and the two men who were at each other's throats agreed to settle the matter on the 14th floor. The colonel, having had enough of this madness, ordered each team to pick a tunnel. After that, between the 9th tunnel leading to the 10th floor, the murderous Awakener was left annoyed as he only stumbled upon ambushing claw fiends along with his team, who would be asked to stay up close. Just then, one of the claw fiends attacked from the back, which the two Awakeners immediately noticed, and to their misfortune, one of them lost his arm to the demonic creature. The claw then immediately went to take care of the other young man, but Huang Kai managed to block it just in time, and despite his best efforts, the monster easily dodged his hammer, when suddenly, another creature of the same kind snuck behind his back and immediately reached out to his face. The 3rd grade managed to dodge this touch of death before the mage could finish it off. The scared Huang Kai was left annoyed by this frail touch of death and claimed that he would only leave the two of them with 1/10 of their rewards, which shocked the mage who had just saved him. The man then pointed out how one was now handicapped and the other was out of skills, which left them no choice but to follow him, triggering the two men. With that, he forced them to choose between profit and survival. With that, he charged upfront, asking them to stay close. But just as they started to follow him, a presence suddenly arrived. Huang Kai turned around, only to be startled by the disappearance of his team, swallowed by darkness. Meanwhile, on the side of the colonel's team, the two Awakeners were thrilled to be at the entrance of the second-to-last floor, calling the dungeon easy, yet the military man advised them to keep their guard up. When suddenly, one of the two Awakeners found himself with a pulverized head. His death was at the claws of the zombie ray crawling on the ceiling, which the colonel warned his teammate about. Meanwhile, in the 18th tunnel leading to the 10th floor, where our hero and his team were progressing, the mage and the mentalist judged their tunnel to be the best based on the far screams, stating that this tunnel was much easier and monsterless. Lin Qi speculated that the monsters must be up ahead, while the mentalist theorized that their teammate's presence was driving them away. When suddenly, our hero stopped, piquing the mentalist's curiosity. Thinking that the upcoming encounter was inevitable, Yulin explained that a ghoul crawling above was just up ahead to the girl, and in the left tunnel resided a concealed hemophage female near them, without mentioning the bone gnawer approaching them from the right tunnel's underground. The mentalist was amazed by the protagonist's sophisticated sense of perception, while the mage was left completely amazed by the existence of such an ability. Our hero charged headfirst to slay the ghoul and asked the others to follow him shortly after while he lured the underground monster out before regrouping in 30 seconds. And so he used the power of his dual blade in order to slay the first atrocity. And while fighting the second one, he ordered his teammates to never turn around no matter what. Shortly after, on floor number 14, the colonel asked the arriving men about their team leaders. So the soldier explained that they all died from the low monster's ambushes, which were more lethal than the second tiers, and that he used a lot of power to escape with one agile man. The colonel feared the worst since their superiors demanded numerous energy crystals that they were now unlikely to deliver, so a soldier proposed to buy them from other teams. But to their surprise, young men came back injured with one man while Huang Kai returned alone. The murderous awakener was particularly annoyed by the mysterious abundance of rot worms. The colonel was now only waiting for the protagonist, who despite his odd fighting style, might make up for the missing numbers with his team. But Huang Kai affirmed in anger that the young man was just a fraud relying on his powerful gear, and even bet his face that they had been slain long ago by the monstrous creatures. But just then, they stepped out of the tunnel. To Huang Kai's misfortune, Yilin with his intact team of weaklings managed to arrive safely at the end of the tunnel. All were astonished to see the man arrive alive and unharmed, making them speculate that he wasn't assaulted by monsters. So the mage explained how their team leader just helped them stay away from monsters, while the mentalist questioned their shape, thinking that they had done the same. Yet no one could justify their stupid mistake. The protagonist then pulled out his short blade and put it on the face of the one that bet on their demise. So Huang Kai claimed that our hero must be a cheater who experienced the dungeon before and remembered the routes. But the colonel affirmed that this was impossible since the dungeon shapeshifts every time. The military man was impressed by the young man's brilliance and was now determined to enroll him into the military, seeing how much it would benefit them. Knowing that his prey was honest, Huang Kai realized that he was stronger than Lin Lan's description and so decided to think carefully and observe during the next third-tier battle. Yilin then accused the murderous awakener of not being a man of his word, so the colonel intervened, stating that they should now focus on the upcoming battle, so the protagonist accepted and complied with his will. The military man then stated that since there were two first-tier third-grade mutants, the military would take on one while the civilians slay the other before exiting the dungeon. Yet Huang Kai opposed this plan since the military had most of the third grades in second-tier peak, while their team only had 2 weak second grades along with 3 third grades, with one potentially being a liar. The colonel had to remind the opposing awakener that the young man easily slew 8 second-tier mutants in one slash earlier and agreed to help the civilians in exchange for a fee. But the protagonist affirmed that his generosity wasn't needed and instead proposed to personally assist the military if they needed his aid. This made the murderous awakener realize that his target had some big moves left, while the demon slayer had a hard time understanding the man's true power. With that came the time to fight the 2 grave diggers, with the civilians fighting one and the military taking on the other. The strongest members of the civilian side charged right ahead, bombarding the giant creature with powerful attacks. Yilin decided to take a look at the military side. Huang Kai used his shield to block the monster's attack, before asking the protagonist if he was going to attack now. And so Yilin charged at the beast as he resorted to his 2 enchanted blades. The demon slayer snuck behind the beast and struck its head with his spirit energy battle axe, but the man was quickly thrown away. As the young man tried to slash through the monster's flesh, he then activated his boots, before stepping on the murderous awakener's head and using his super speed to run away with a smile, triggering the shield carrier. The cave digger took advantage of this distraction and tried to strike down Huang Kai, but the man managed to block the deadly strike with his shield at the last moment. But the monster wasn't done just yet, as it attacked once again, making him fall to the ground. Yilin appeared to be checking on the man, but the murderer was well aware that this was no accident. While keeping up the act, our hero wanted to shorten the distance between the mutants from 200 to 100 meters in order to slay them both with one attack. The demon slayer asked our hero to focus on their monster since he couldn't control it any longer. And so the protagonist ordered all second grades to support Yun Ming while he and the murderous awakener tried to distract the beast. And so the titanic monster attacked the 2 men. Huang Kai began to panic since Yilin sent all their supporting units to aid the demon slayer, yet the young man affirmed he was able to slay the beast for a 3-second-long distraction. The murderous awakener pretended to believe in our hero, just to make him use all of his strong moves. Huang Kai parried the monster's attack just as promised, but our hero only needed to get the monsters 50 meters closer to each other. The murderous awakener struggled to parry certain death, while Yilin mourned the colonel about their mutant, stating that they couldn't hold the line. And just as he turned his head for 1 second, the third-grade mutant used this opportunity to send him flying into the air. With that, our hero warned all of his allies to retreat as he was about to deploy his ultimate move, but this was just a ruse to get the 2 monsters closer. And so he threw his swords, each in opposite directions, scorching both giants' tuck shells. The colonel pointed out that this wasn't the same attack as before, while Huang Kai noticed that this was no ultimate skill, As the two mutants were within reach along with the murderous awakener stuck in the middle, the golden opportunity was now open to the protagonist as he used Sword Burst Storm. Just like that, the two third-tier mutants met their end at the blades of Yi Ning. The ultimate move was so strong that the other awakeners were almost blasted away by the shock. Min Young, who realized that they couldn't oppose the kill-stealing Yi Lin based on his firepower, which he could have used to terminate them now, speculated that the young man must be a middle or high-tier third grade that outclassed them first tier. Huang Kai was caught in the attack blast despite our hero warning him to escape. Yi Lin then falsely assured the dead man that he would treasure the equipment that he left behind. But his pitiful acting couldn't fool anyone. With that, all survivors obtained 300 crystals, with personal rewards being calculated at the exit, as the Awakeners were free to use them now or go deeper into the dungeon. The Colonel warned our hero about the mid-tier third-grade mutants that awaited them deeper in the dungeon, before adding that he and his men would now retreat. Yet, when he was about to point out how Yi Lin could dive deeper, the protagonist claimed to be exhausted and expressed his wish to retreat in order to save his remaining skills for emergencies. With that, the Colonel ordered all the survivors to gather, stating that the military wished to buy their crystals for 11 credits each as the market price was 10 credits. This news thrilled the Awakeners. The Demon Slayer immediately agreed. The military man explained that the transaction would happen after exiting the dungeon, before turning to Yi Lin, who had the most crystals, asking him if he also wished to sell. But the young man was more interested in the military's obsession with these crystals. The Carmel explained how these minerals had the ability to increase one's grade, and despite buying all available chunks, they still required more. Yi Ning was aware of their power being proportional since a second grade would need far more crystals than a first grade to break his limits, before thinking about the military's efforts regarding this project. And after some reflection, Yi Lin decided to sell his 2,700 crystals to the military for 30,000 credits, regardless of their proposition. The Colonel affirmed that he would have paid this price regardless of the proposition before asking the protagonist if he wished to reconquer the dungeon. Yi Lin denied, since entering a dungeon with the same team would minimize the earned profit. The Colonel affirmed that if Yi Lin entered the dungeon with a different team, he would be noticed by General Tang, as they were collecting crystals for his second son. The military man believed that the general's son would someday become a third grade, and with the help of the crystals, could even enter fourth grade, when suddenly the protagonist silenced the man and rudely ordered him to leave after buying his crystals, which shocked the Colonel. While riding his bike, our hero thought of how pathetic his impressive income was compared to the army's wealth. He was well aware that the participants in Project Seed would obtain unreliable abilities, making them useless in battle, thus it being a waste of money for the military. As he thought about it, he recalled how he was impressed by his past life's wealth, which was nothing compared to his presence being the most extravagant in the first third sequence. Our hero had to boost all of his stats to their peak in order to take the third grade test and enter the first sequence at the right time in order to bring some change. Shortly after, the protagonist, who had all of his attributes fixed at 26 except for willpower, was aware that he needed to consume more fruits in order to boost his abilities as they increased in power. With that, he began to feast on those positioned in front of him, wondering if they would suffice. And so he kept eating and eating, increasing his attributes, and decided to consume the last one despite being full, as he had now reached 29 points. After taking one bite and boosting all of his stats to their zenith, the system granted him one prize pull for maximizing his attributes, leaving the man surprised. And so he decided to play the game, hoping for an epic equipment set, or an epic grade sword-like weapon that would duplicate his strength. Our hero obtained the epic Ring of Serendipity, which was classified as epic, but didn't complain about the prize as rings were also precious, wondering if this one was related to willpower. Yet the ring only increased his storage ability despite not being able to contain living beings. Despite not enhancing his abilities, the 100,000 meter Q storage seemed to be a formidable ability that could allow him to store a large number of missiles. But the ring also had the ability to convert willpower into other stats with a 5-point limit in his case. This thrilled the young man as he could now use this ability to increase his stats in the middle of the fight. But just then, Meaning noticed how the ring also had a limit for a 5th grade, making him wonder if this grade was the zenith of humanity or the peak of mutants. This item would also grant him S-class adventure privileges upon entering the world of Serendipity. This world intrigued the protagonist as he had never heard of it in his previous life, speculating that 5th grade mutants resided there. The full power of this ring would be related to an unknown future. The protagonist then ordered his slave to sell Huang Kai's item and use the money to purchase spirit fruits. But just then, the system informed him that he would now need to use high-grade fruits since being above 30, regular fruits could no longer elevate him. And so he commanded his minion to buy high-grade fruits instead of the normal ones. Our hero was near reaching the 2nd-tier stat points as Tanfeng's zombie horde would arrive after tomorrow, but by then, his ultimate would have been reset. Ine wanted to prove himself against this zombie horde in order to take the 3rd grade test without anyone opposing his application. When suddenly, Life would reappear, stating that the desired fruits weren't available for sale, which left the man shocked. Since they were all purchased by the military, the protagonist thought of reaching out to Chen Yang, when suddenly, the military man called, asking if the protagonist still remembered him, while Yi Ning began to speculate that Chen Yang was a telepath since he called right after thinking about him. The Awakener stated that the Tianqing merchant group discovered a class, a supernatural dungeon appearing, and wanted to invite him for a raid since it was safe and profitable, which shocked the protagonist. So Chen Yang explained that the dungeon only possessed a borderline as it wasn't complete. It would be better to attack it at the moment since they would be able to run out of the border in order to escape the dungeon's harm. And since the A-class dungeon was still in creation, it only possessed one spiritual body, unlike a normal one inhabited by many. So Yi Lin agreed, but under his own terms. Chen Yang stated that in case the hero accepted, he would get 10,000 credits regardless of failure, along with a big chunk of the dungeon's reward and 30,000 credits from the merchant group. The merchant group's offer was way too generous, making the protagonist speculate that they aimed to use his gameplay in order to make and sell a future clearing guide, which the military man confirmed before asking Yi Lin if he had any other terms. And so the young man demanded a 20% share of the merchant's cut, followed by some high-tier spirit fruits. After that, on the way leading to Hebei village, our hero speculated how he would use the 2 days left before the mighty zombie horde arrived in order to conquer this dungeon that didn't require physical abilities. The car then stopped, with Chen Yang informing the protagonist that they had reached their destination. After getting out of the vehicle, the men were approached by a welcoming party. The first presented himself as Wang Zheng, son of the merchant group's vice president, and introduced his workers in Fang, an agile and psychic series awakener, and a professional that he hired at a generous price, yet the man insisted on being a simple second grade, pointing out how Yi Lin requested an outrageous price far superior to his. Liu, the young man, baffled, making Wang Zheng intervene and explain that Fang was a very honest man who had cleared such supernatural dungeons before. With that being said, Wang Zheng proposed to start checking out the dungeon, so Yi Lin asked him to lead the way. And so, they made their way to the borderline, with Fang explaining to Yi Lin that he should follow his instructions for his own safety despite being the third grade, since he was the only one receiving instructions from the system, which surprised our hero since he was informed that dungeons in the making had no missions to offer whatsoever. The second grade proudly affirmed that this was his power, which allowed him to receive hints from the system if close to a clue. Yi Lin recognized this ability as quite rare, but it was also possible to not follow it while thinking of how much the military man and the vice president's son had prepared well for this mission. It was then explained that the residents of this village near the river survived by selling water to the safe zone, but the rust on their pedicabs indicated that they hadn't gone there in a while. Chen Yang pointed out how these people suddenly forgot to sell their water, as if they were all trapped, emptying their buckets into a full barrel again and again. Just then, a man approached the strangers asking about the military they belonged to. Chen Yang pointed out that they belonged to Zhenjiang and that they were here because of the complaints made about polluted waters. This made the villager burst out in anger and state that the woman who died inside the river would be the death of them all. After hearing this, Yi Lin questioned the man about the cause of the problem and when exactly it occurred, yet the villager insisted on their water being very pure. So the protagonist threatened to detain the man. The scared villager explained that Zhang Xu jumped into the river after stealing something a week ago, and due to the rainstorm, the woman quickly disappeared into its fast currents. Chen Yang jumped in and asked if the woman jumped willingly or if they made her suffer the plank, but the man denied the village having any relation with her death. Yet the man's hesitance didn't convince Chen Yang, so Yi Lin decided to calm him down. Despite his normal appearance, it was clear that the man's hands had long been in contact with water, and if the man was truly involved, he would adopt a more formal approach if they acted now. Feng was surprised to see our hero reacting this fast, so Yi Lin asked the man to calm himself and guide them towards the woman's family, stating that they wouldn't bother him anymore if they judged him to be innocent. And so he agreed. Since the house was very cold, the villager decided not to go any further, stating that its only residents were the woman's mother and daughter, Li Ru. Upon entering, the party noticed how odd this house was as it was filled with an unpleasant glacier cold. The house was filled with water stains and barrels that were full of water, which intrigued the young man, when suddenly, an old lady emerged from one of the barrels, startling everyone with the protagonist. But Feng reassured them that this was just due to the dungeon's influence, which hadn't turned the elder lady into a spirit body yet. And so the old lady asked the trespassers about their identity. Yelena stated that they were here to investigate her daughter's death, affirming that they shall punish the guilty killer if he exists. Yet all the woman could say was that her child was inside the river and repeatedly asked the men to help retrieve her. Chen Yang pointed out to Yi Lin how the old lady wasn't able to think properly, so our hero asked her about her grandchild. The men were then informed that the child was getting water from the river and that she would return at night. The protagonist then turned to the second grade, asking him if his power detected any clues. Stoke reminded him that he only got hints if near one, theorizing that the child was the mystery's key. Chen Yang then asked if they should search for her, but Feng firmly denied it. But when asked for a reason, the bald man had a hard time making up an excuse to solidify his point of view, which didn't escape our hero, who speculated that the ghost of the drowned woman was forcing the villagers to collect the water in order to retrieve her corpse. When suddenly, the little one returned. Feng was shocked to see Lai Ru, the woman's daughter, entering the house. The little girl carried a bucket full of water that stank with a strong smell of blood, and so our hero used his psychic probe fully and noticed something floating in the bucket. To his surprise, a human tongue was present inside the water bucket. The little girl was intrigued by the presence of these strangers inside her home. Just then, Feng alerted them, whispering that they should avoid the wrath of the girl according to the system. So Yilin introduced himself and the others as investigators from the Zhenjiang safe zone, here to investigate her mother's disappearance. Yet the little girl affirmed that her mother was in fact dead and killed by the inhabitants of the village who spread rumors about her, which led to her demise. The protagonist presented his condolences to Lai Ru, asking if she was aware of the cause of her mother's death. The girl then handed him a list filled with the names of those who spread the rumors, so our hero promised to put them all under arrest after retrieving the missing person. But Lai Ru affirmed that it wouldn't be necessary since her mother was already among them, confusing the young man since her corpse must still be dwelling inside the river. Yilin's hesitance made the girl speculate that he was a liar who wasn't here to help. Since Fang warned them not to anger her, the protagonist falsely claimed that he would arrest them all after finishing the formalities, since arresting them now would be a rush. Suddenly, Lai Ru, enveloped in a dark, murderous aura, affirmed that she would kill all the investigators if they dared to lie to her, leaving all the men with a chill down their spines. Feng then stated that they would spend the night in this abandoned house, ordering the two rich kids to sleep together while the others split up. Yet, while all the others quickly agreed, Yilin questioned the second grade's instructions. Feng explained that they would need to confront the astral entity, who would either target the weakest or the strongest at least once in order to get some clues. This made the protagonist jokingly assume that he was hired as simple bait, but Chen Yang and Wang Zheng immediately denied it in panic. But as long as he received his payment, our hero didn't mind doing such a task, leaving the two of them relieved and grateful. Yet Fang affirmed that Yilin should save those words until dawn if he managed to see it. He then stated that the woman must have recently turned into a ghost after being slain by the villagers, so she could only use them and her family for revenge, leaving them with two actions. They would either retrieve her remains, as he planned to search Lai Ru's house tonight and send Yi Ning to the river if anything was found, or just allow the girl vengeance. Yet Yilin found these tasks to be too simplistic. Fang affirmed that it was simple because the dungeon wasn't yet formed, and once complete, it wouldn't even know who was the woman's first victim since all would be ghosts, which terrified Chen Yang and Wang Zheng, who were grateful to have entered before the completion of the dungeon. Later that night, as the wind whistled in the village, the protagonist began to think of how suspicious Fang was despite providing logical clues. Since the man hid intel and wanted to send our hero alone to the river, he must want him dead for profit reasons, meaning that the river was more deadly than expected. Since he would go investigate the girl's house alone, there might be a valuable item back there that would end up in Yilin's hands if he didn't snatch it first, which made sense. He then thought of how little Lai Ru, despite her expression and the tongue in her bucket, didn't seem to be under the curse's effect and couldn't possibly take human life. But just then, something caught our hero's attention as the ghost began to walk on his ceiling, and so he resorted to his psychic powers in order to see the astral body. Just like that, our hero saw an upside-down lady on the ceiling with a crazed smile on her face, making him speculate that this was the missing person. Yilin immediately reached into his inventory and grabbed the grudge beads that he obtained from Hell's Gate, as a chance to use them had finally appeared. And so he infused his psychic abilities into the said item. The grudge beads, which could enhance psychic abilities by 25% and prevent a lethal attack from supernatural creatures at the risk of being obliterated, were used to form an energy blade. This troubled the ghost, who immediately fled the scene. Yilin was determined to pursue his astral attacker. Just then, he heard screams coming from nearby. Our hero was surprised to learn that Chen Yang and Fang were also getting assaulted by the astral entity. The rest of the men rushed outside, asking Yilin about the situation. So the young man explained that the ghost attacked Chen Yang and Fang, who could be dead at the moment, which amazed them, as they speculated that the ghost's powers were underestimated and that it gathered strength after they entered, wondering about Feng, who was the weakest death. Thinking that their theories were inaccurate and that the matter had become too dangerous, the protagonist proposed to his party to exit the dungeon while he took care of it. While the others immediately welcomed this kind offer, Chen Yang was still worried about his friend, but our hero reassured him that he had a life-saving item with him. With that, the military man ran with the others to the dungeon's border. Since the item could only save his life once, our hero decided to be cautious as he activated his psychic sense. He noticed that only a leg remained of Chen Feng, speculating that the ghost controlled and ate him, and that he screamed long before death, so Feng couldn't have died at the same time. The young man then spotted the corpse of the second grade floating inside a barrel and from the iron shovel, speculated that he was assaulted while attempting to dig something out. And so Yilin used his powers to perceive what was hidden underground, just to find what seemed to be the remains of the ghost. But just then, our intrigued hero noticed the creature had 6 fingers, and since this trait was transmitted through generations and Lai Ru didn't have it, the corpse must not be her mother's. When suddenly, the mysterious woman noticed the young man. As it rose from the underground, Yulin took a good look in her eyes and speculated that they were the blue-tier item the late Feng had his eyes on. With that, he pulled out his grudge beads once again, in order to attack the monster with a psychic web. Yet the 6-fingered woman's true physical form was far more powerful than her astral form as it easily tore through the web, when suddenly, the grudge beads began to shine. Our hero was shocked to see its ultimate skill being activated. As one hit from the ghost was enough to be classified as lethal, Yulin judged it wise to retreat as soon as possible, and so he resorted to his lightning boots and attempted to escape as the 6-fingered freak followed him from up close. Yulin dashed for the borderline, and despite running in a direction different from the party's, he managed to get out of harm's way. Since the corpse didn't belong to Zhang Su, there was a possibility of her ending up somewhere down the river and possibly still being among the living. Our hero must find her before the first light of dawn. As the sun began to erase the starry sky, the party was worried about the protagonist's long absence and how they couldn't contact him due to the barrier's interference, so Wang Zheng proposed searching for him inside the barrier. Yet the men affirmed to the son of the vice president that they had found no trace of the missing man, which left him intrigued by this sudden vanishing. Just then, Lai Ru came to them stating that they weren't arresting the names on her list as they had promised, as it was now morning. Ken Yang affirmed that they were about to start. The little girl with a dark expression on her face requested to take the arrested villagers to the river where she could torture them. With the death of Feng and Yulin's vanishing, the 2 rich kids discussed how this was their only option left. And so 3 men were brought, tied up to the river, as they claimed to be innocent and begged the military to release them. With a pair of scissors in her hand, the young lady affirmed that these 3 drove her mother to meet her demise. And so filled with hatred, she stabbed the first man. The little girl affirmed that she would also cut off the men's tongues for spreading fake news about Zhang Su. As she was filled with the pleasure of vengeance, blood spread everywhere as she chose her next victim. Seeing this, the first man apologized for speaking ill of their executioner's mother, while the second one continued denying. She then took down the second man, who screamed in pain since he had spread rumors about the woman who rejected him. Ken Yang, who was in the military, was shocked to see all this malice coming from a little girl, while the merchant hoped all this would end once the revenge was over. She then turned to the men, stating that her victims were still alive and asked them for assistance in order to throw them into the river. Wang Zheng accepted with a shocked face. With the revenge being fulfilled, Chen Yan asked the little girl if she needed help in order to retrieve her mother's corpse. Yet Lai Ru stated that her mother was already here, which is why none of them would live to see another day. Suddenly, the ghost popped out of the river, immediately eating a member of the party upon appearing. With that, the terrified awakeners began to run for their lives, but the monster began to absorb them with a power so strong that they were rendered trapped. Ken Yang watched in horror as one of his comrades was quickly devoured by the ghost. And so he placed a knife to his own neck, affirming to Wang that he would rather die by his own hand than suffer this fate at the fangs of this atrocity. Wang Zheng watched in horror, when suddenly, the knife was taken out of the soldier's hands. It was none other than Yulin, who finally arrived at the scene along with a woman who held Lai Ru in her hands. The protagonist used his powers to snatch his allies from the monster's grip and knock it back. Ken Yang was delighted by the arrival of his trustworthy ally. He then called out to Lai Ru for her to take a look at the woman beside him and the child in her arms. The girl began to tear up as she saw her mother, and so she ran towards the one she assumed to be dead. The little girl then realized that it wasn't her mother who didn't belong among the living but herself, so the mother took all the blame for her death. This left the soldier and the merchant utterly confused, as the little girl turned out to be a revenant spirit and the 6-fingered freak wasn't her mother. Yulin promised to explain the matter after escaping this dangerous dungeon, when suddenly, the ghost tried to consume Zhang Su. And so the little girl came in contact with her body as her eyes began to glow green. Just then, the little girl took a foggy, monster-like form. The young man judged the dungeon to have become safer as she finally awakened her powers. And so Lai Ru charged to save her mother from the monster's fangs. With that, the 2 powerful entities began to trade blows. Lai Ru then bit the woman in the neck. With that, the 2 revenants began to disappear. He then explained that on a night filled with heavy rain, a mother fell into the river, but was rescued later, while the daughter drowned, became a ghost, and assumed that the corpse was her mother, which meant that Feng and Chen Feng died simultaneously due to there being 2 ghosts and that the villagers they tossed into the river were innocent. Just then, our hero used his power to retrieve his sphere-like item. Just like that, the young man obtained the blue-tier ghost eye, which would allow one to gain intel and clues from the system on the scene objects. Since its abilities were similar to the late 2nd grade, our hero assumed that it must boost his capabilities if he put his life on the line in order to retrieve it. And so the grateful merchant affirmed that Fang's 10,000 credits would be transferred to their savior, as both he and Chen Yang bowed to a thankful Yilin. Although our hero was happy to have gained a total of 70,000 credits, he was even more delighted to put his hands on the high-tier spirit fruits. And yet, When he asked about his wanted item, the merchant affirmed that he would have to be a little more patient in order to obtain it, which left him intrigued, so Chen Yang explained that all the high-tier special fruits were bought by the military for the Sea project. This annoyed the protagonist, who decided to take matters into his own hands, stating that he would take the two men and even their parents to spectate a show in Tianfeng, which piqued Chen Yang and Wang Zheng's curiosity. Yilin affirmed that he would take them to witness a great zombie horde outbreak. After that, in Safe Zone 119, Ken Yang asked Zhang about his father's absence. The vice commander, Zhang Tao, affirmed that he was here on behalf of the commander, who had urgent matters to attend to. And so the military man assumed that the protagonist wouldn't oppose it and proposed picking up Wang Zheng and the rest on their way to the safe zone. After that, at the Tianjin Merchant Association headquarters, the young man was brutally slapped in the face. Wang Zheng was confused by his father's sudden action. The vice president, Wang Tian, who stopped his son, explained that even though he agreed to meet Yilin, he had no right to try to bring him spirit fruits that were destined for the military. He explained that he owed the man these fruits for saving him, and since the military ordered many from numerous groups, some missing ones would be unnoticed, yet the father was unconvinced. Wang Tian then addressed his son with a softer tone, stating that his hands were also tied since the president of the group had more power than him. And even if he could, Wang Tian couldn't risk triggering the military's wrath to satisfy the wishes of a total stranger, pointing out how his son hired Yilin to protect his life in the first place, and that they would get him the promised fruits later. Just then, Chen Yan arrived, so the vice president proposed to go meet the famous protagonist in Tianfeng, affirming that if the young man was as powerful as rumored, he would review the matter of the high-tier spirit fruits, which the delighted son had a hard time believing. In the said safe zone, Yining informed Commander Xiao via the system that the zombie horde would attack tonight, asking him to prepare himself for battle. Despite being warned last week, the commander witnessed no paranormal activities in the old city area. But just as he began to reflect on today's message, where the hero gave him precise dates, he was alerted that the horde in the old city area had broken the seal and charged at the safe zone. The shocked commander was baffled to see that Yining's predictions were accurate and asked for all hands on deck to activate the defenses. And so the citizens were alerted of the zombie horde and were asked to regain the safe zone immediately if outside. The soldiers were then instructed to plant mines in a particular formation in order to create breaches in the horde for awakeners to launch their assault. The trench was then filled with oil. Even the Air Force was deployed in order to defend the city. Lai Fugui pointed out to his master how the safe zone seemed ready for the horde, while Yining stated that it was hard to defend it. Despite all their firepower, this would all be useless against the mutants. The protagonist explained how the city had 2,000 awakeners, with 1,000 on the backline, 600 on the front lines, and 200 ranged attackers, making them look desperate in front of the horde. This made the slave worry about their annihilation, but our hero assured him that they would be safe as long as he was here. When suddenly, the zombie horde trespassed the cordon, signaling the start of the battle. And so the spirit-powered fighter planes were ordered to nuke the monsters, while being cautious of the mutated hawks, which the long-range attackers were tasked with killing. A fierce battle exploded between the humans and the zombies. After asking for cover, the soldiers up front led the frontliners' attack on the zombies. Meanwhile, the soldiers and the merchants were watching from afar. The vice commander wondered where Yilin, who invited them to spectate the zombie horde, was. So the vice president stated that you should be waiting for the strongest creature to appear in order to demonstrate his might, hoping to see him fight a third-grade mutant amusing Wang Tao. The high-ranked soldiers agreed as he began to laugh, stating that the upcoming would be more laughable than impressive, which annoyed Chen Yang, who affirmed that both he and Zheng Wan held the protagonist in high esteem as he asked the two older men not to mock him. Since the vice commander trusted the young man whom he had known since youth, he affirmed that they would wait for Yilin and listen to him until the end, but he hoped that he had a grasp of reality. Both the vice commander and the vice president agreed that despite Yilin's importance as a third-grade awakener, he didn't deserve so much esteem. Zheng Wang asked his father to watch in silence as he was sure not to be disappointed by the protagonist. Just then, a young soldier began to beg for help as he was at the mercy of a mutant. One of the awakeners signaled the presence of a second-grade mutant known as Rotten Corpse. But with the commander on the field, the troops were ready to launch an attack, and so he charged at the Rotten Corpse with his skill, Blood Corpse. All were amazed as he managed to slay the mutant with one hit before continuing the charge, when suddenly the ground began to fissure and tremble, making the commander fear the appearance of a couple of third-grade mutants, and with just one being exponentially harder to kill outside the dungeon, two would appear as a severe problem. And so he ordered all the forces to escape to the safe zone, before ordering them to set the trenches on fire as they risked their lives to hold the line until their allies arrived. When suddenly, Sword Stream Burst was launched at the nearby crab-like mutant. Just like that, the monster was cut to pieces. The commander was amazed to see a third-grade mutant fall so easily and wondered about its attacker's identity. Commander Xiao was baffled to see that it was none other than Yilin. The protagonist stated that they would converse later after he slew the mutant in front of him. Our hero decided to use his sky-splitting slash, in order to chop the giant creature with an ardent slash. The shocked commander was more than amazed, speculating that Yi Ning had reached 3rd grade in just 15 days, which made him think that he had wasted his life since the young man had surpassed him. But Yi Ning just gave him a smug look, stating that the commander's forces could take on the monsters on their own from here on, before asking the commander to follow him as they had many things to converse about. Meanwhile, on the roof, Ken Yong and Wang Zheng were amazed by the protagonist's demonstration of power, stating that he far surpassed the average 3rd grader. The vice president of the merchant group was also baffled by such strength, while the vice commander thought of how even Chief Chen Kai-Lai wouldn't stand a chance and how Yi Ning even outclassed mid-tier 3rd graders, which justified his immense ego. Just then, the young soldier received a message from the protagonist, who awaited their arrival in the Tianfeng conference hall. After the battle in the said hall, Commander Cho seemed amazed while the soldiers and the merchants were shocked by his presence. Since everyone in the room was familiar with each other and introductions were useless, Yi Ning asked all of his allies to seat themselves as they had something to discuss. As he saw the vice president of the merchant group and the vice commander of Safe Zone 119, the commander realized that the young man had obtained valuable connections on top of his power. Wang Tian complimented Yi Lin on his strength, which was particularly impressive even among 3rd graders, while Zhang Tao thanked him on behalf of his safe zone for helping Chen Yang. The commander was confused to hear them call Yi Ming Yi Lin, speculating that this was due to their accent. But just then, our hero revealed his true name to the foreigners. While they were confused about his real name, Commander Xiao realized that since they weren't aware of it, it meant that they weren't helping him, leaving his growth a mystery. Our hero then pointed out how his power was close to a 3rd grade and asked the commander for the machine in order to measure it on the spot. Yet the man affirmed that they had all witnessed his abilities. The vice president and the vice commander also agreed that this would be pointless, since they couldn't doubt him being a mid-tier 3rd grader. Yet the protagonist asked the man politely once again to get the machine, so he agreed. The old merchant stated that they surely weren't brought here just to see that he was a 3rd grade, which the old soldier agreed with, so Chen Yang affirmed that they could wait a little longer. But Yi Ning just smiled in silence. The machine was then brought up. The young man thanked the commander for bringing the tester. This made Zhang Tao think of him as a capricious child despite his power, while Wang Tian stated that there was no harm in him trying to prove his might. And so Yi Ning placed his hand on the tester. The machine then recognized our hero as a peak tier 2nd grade. All 4 of them were left shocked as the powerful protagonist turned out to be a 2nd tier. Even the commander was left shocked by this news. This left them all in a state of shock and panic. No one could believe that the powerhouse was in fact a 2nd grade and not a 3rd grade. It would be believable to see him as a 3rd tier peak, but to see a 2nd tier wield the power of a mid-tier 3rd grade was simply unfathomable. The commander recalled how the young man took 4 2nd grade missions, and with him having the abilities of a mid-tier 3rd grader, the man had a hard time processing it. With that, Chen Yang demanded an explanation from our hero. So Yi Ming explained how 15 days ago he was revealed to have an SS rank talent but got rejected from Project Seed for being a psychic awakener with low potential. The vice president had a hard time comprehending this simple yet impressive story, while the commanders were revolted by the responsibilities of Project Seed for assuming that Yi Ning had low potential. Yi Ning explained that he proved himself to ask for their help to enter Project Seed since he could easily ascend, change the military's opinion on psychic users, and be the first sequence. Our hero aimed to best all the geniuses enrolled in this project and show them who truly stood on top. And so Wang Tian asked how they could assist him and asked about the nature of his power. The young man claimed that he had the ability to convert mental power into attack power and that he was supported by a secret organization, which was a lie to conceal the Sword God system. This made sense to all, especially the commander, who was certain that Yi Ning had some form of support. With that, the young man proposed to 5 men to form an alliance that aimed to serve him, where he gave the orders in exchange for a delightful reward. And so he left the room, leaving them some time to think about his proposition. Our hero then thought about how the commander must be annoyed by never surpassing himself, how the merchant was under the president, and how the vice commander was annoyed by his position. Meanwhile, in the room, the children tried their best to convince their elders to accept the protagonist's offer. And so Wang Tian turned to his friend to ask for his point of view. So the commander explained how our hero didn't belong to an official faction, and how he must have a lot of experience. Ken Yan demanded clarification as the two of them agreed with each other. So his uncle explained how choosing Yi Ning would make them enemies of many powerful figures that support the project, like the first sequence Jun Zhangmang, a high-tier 3rd grade. The vice president pointed out how helping Yi Ning would be too dangerous, seeing how many of them were beasts that should be avoided at all costs. Just then, the commander revealed that he planned to aid him since he despised being stuck as a first-tier 3rd grade and did not want to repeat the same mistake, since it was a promising gamble. The young merchant reminded his father of his own words on how high risks came with big chances before asking him if he was fulfilled as a simple vice president. Ken Yan then stated that if his uncle was here on behalf of his father and grandfather, then he must act like them in this situation. Just then, Yi Ning returned to the room to check on the men, who all accepted his proposition. With that, he gave his new allies a list of everything he needed, requesting them to deliver it by the next morning before asking for help in reaching the capital in order to start a third-grade trial. As they all agreed, the vice president pointed out how Yi Ning demanded a lot from people and that he had great potential after seeing the list. With that, the commander went to resend the young man's invitation to the capital, leaving him thankful. Commander Xiao sighed as he exited the room. Shortly after that, Yi Ning stood alone in the lights of the street, thinking of how he had finally formed his own faction with different allies coming from different places, determined to do something spectacular in the capital as his plan's next step. Meanwhile, the trivial matter confirmed by Commander Chen Kailai was being discussed in the Seed Project Capital Hall of Capital City. The man sitting at the head of the table affirmed that in case of a problem, everyone in the room would be held responsible for missing an extraordinary genius like Yi Ning. When an old man addressed General Yang, affirming that they should immediately report such a trivial matter, another high-ranked man agreed with the first, suggesting sending a third-grade party to escort the protagonist safely to the capital before waiting for the superiors to determine his sequence. With that, the Seed Project initiator, General Yang Guping, stated that they could only grant the young man the title of Special Sequence, as it was a crime not to have spotted him sooner. When suddenly, a hand was slapped on the table. Tang Zhen affirmed to the general that they shouldn't report the intel immediately, which annoyed Yang Guping since it was him who had turned a blind eye to the SS genius in the first place, and yet after everything, he still had the guts to say this. And so he gave the man a murderous look, asking him if he wished to die. But the staff officer affirmed that he was misunderstood by the general, only proposing to delay their report by a month or even a week. The man explained how General Zhang's second son was currently the first seed despite not having reached the peak of second grade, which made the initiator reflect in silence. Tang Zhen explained how Yi Ning could easily reach third grade and dethrone the current first seed, but Zhang Yang was supported by powerful parties, especially by their superiors. General Yang complimented the man on his bravery and loyalty, stating that he could only delay the news for half a week to give the general's son a chance to reach third grade. With that, the man affirmed that he would prepare for the protagonist's arrival in the capital and warned the staff officer and his supporters against making any attempt on the young man's life. Meanwhile, in a place full of crystals, a young man was consuming a potion while another awakener stood behind him in the dark. The newly second-grade peak Zheng Yang thought that his father was joking when he tasked him with reaching third grade in just 3 days. But the third corporation general affirmed that this was no joke, as he made his son recall the protagonist who had the power of a third grade while being second grade, due to his SS talent. This made the young man realize that the protagonist aimed to strip him of his title. The general confirmed, stating that if Yi Ning reached third grade first, he would truly be able to steal the title despite having unimpressive support. The father claimed that he would send his son to difficult dungeons to help him keep up, since there would still be hope if he passed the third grade trial with Yi Ning, which motivated him. This delighted the general, who comforted Zhen Yang by stating that his rival was still a novice and that his way to the capital would be harder than he expected. Meanwhile, in the Tianfeng safe zone, Yi Ning pointed out how effective it is to be part of a faction, seeing how quickly he got the fruits and how Chen Kailai gifted him a very expensive A-rank sword skill. With that, he decided to max out his attributes first. At the end of his meal, our hero was overwhelmed by a great feeling, with all of his stats at 31, seeing how his spirit power circulated better and how he gained more mastery over the stats. As for the sword skill, it was Breach, which would allow our hero to jump into the air and deal damage with immunity, along with many effects while doubling defense, which impressed him. And so he tossed the book into the air in order to learn his skill. With that, it evolved into the SS class skill Falling Heaven, which would focus on a target within a 1,000-meter radius and deal area damage while granting great protection. This left the young man amazed, as he would be able to deal damage without receiving any in a wide range, making him eager to use it in the trials. Yet our hero was disappointed since his skill slot was already full for his grade, but it didn't bother him, as he would be able to use strong skills without relying on those after promotion. Just then, the system tasked him with retrieving 4 different items. This would allow him to fuse skills and deploy his SSF rank skills without losing spirit power while reducing their cooldown to half a day. It wasn't common for the Sword God system to give missions, especially with such great rewards, but the items were the problem. Mountain Destroyer seemed to be a third-grade peak that was slain by many third-grade Awakeners 27 years ago. As for the other mysterious items, they must be ancient. The protagonist speculated that he could only get his hands on all 4 after accessing the National Treasury as the first sequence. Just then, the commander opened the door with news from the capital. Commander Chell informed the young man that the capital had sent him an escort, which satisfied his arrogance. But he was more interested in knowing if he had become the first sequence, so the old man informed him that he had become a special sequence, and that promotion would be discussed after arriving. Yi Ning was certain he had enough power to be number 1 and was sure that his position was doubted in order to please the Seed Project's investors. The commander, along with Commander Chen, found him too obsessed with his title, and with its current holder being well-rounded in the capital, he should accept his current one for now. This would appease the general's son's sponsors and even make them allies, but Yi Ning utterly refused. The hero assured the commander that he had his secret reasons for acting as such and wanted all of them to see all his actions as well calculated, leaving the man silent. Yi Ning was determined to overcome anything that stood in his way. The next day in the afternoon, the capital's helicopter finally arrived. Taking a look at them, Commander Xiao stated that they traveled in the latest combat plane model that could doom their region within minutes. And so they prepared to welcome the envoys of the capital. 5 powerful men with extraordinary auras set foot in Tianfeng. This amazed the commanders despite expecting such power from the elites of the capital, who were all surely 3rd grade. And so he approached the men in order to welcome them. But the 5 awakeners ignored their host's warmth, casually passing by him. Just then, the old man recalled how he was an insignificant commander in a safe zone, and how the men were here for the protagonist. The first one approached our hero, introducing himself as Lin Ru, leader of the 27th Air Force Squadron inside the capital, here to escort him, but he insisted on being called Old Lin. As the protagonist introduced himself, Lin Ru found it hard to believe that the calm young man lived in such a small, safe zone. With that, our hero decided not to waste any more time and insisted on immediately going to the capital. Just by seeing the young man's power, Old Lin realized that completing the task given to him by General Zhang would be challenging. He had been ordered to take care of the young genius on their way to the capital. On their way to their destination, the protagonist was informed that they would soon reach the capital. Our hero was left to think as Lin informed him of a feast organized by a few high-rankers in order to celebrate his arrival. Yi Ning quickly realized that someone planned to delay his promotion trial, as the leader of the Air Force Squadron pointed out how much he would benefit from the high-rankers and the break. So the young man politely declined his offer, stating they would talk after his promotion trial, but Lin Ru was told to waste time, and since the easy plan turned out ineffective, he looked at the pilot in order to commence a rougher approach. And so the escort pretended that their Spirit combat jet was defective, and that they had to land immediately. But just then, the young man realized that his escort was trying to waste time under the orders of his rival's father. And so he put his blade on the pilot's neck, pointing out how his superiors couldn't help him and stating that he would pilot the jet from here on since his flying skills would make them crash. Old Lin speculated that the young genius had figured them out and that they couldn't fight on the plane at the risk of crashing it while being amazed by his fearlessness. And so he agreed to let the protagonist pilot the plane since he only aimed to gain the general's son some time. And so he advised the men to look closely as he taught them how to do their job, asking them to remember the right steps and people. With that, the fighter jet had been stabilized. Just then, Lin Ru realized that the protagonist, with his certainty that surpassed the high-ranking officers, had a bright future ahead of him and that he was on the wrong side of this Cold War. With that, the military man saluted our hero, who decided to trust him in the future. Shortly after, the plane arrived at the 2nd military base of the capital war zone. Upon arriving, the general presented himself to Yi Lin as Yang Guping, the initiator of the Seed Project, but the young man introduced himself as Yi Ning. Yang Guping informed the protagonist of a feast organized in his honor with some high-ranked officials, but Yi Ning declined, stating that he wanted to commence his trial immediately, which shocked the initiator and the staff officer. Yi Ning explained that they gave him the title of Special Sequence instead of First Sequence due to their superiors doubting him and how passing the trial would allow him to prove himself. General Yang felt respect for the direct young man who was neither humble nor overconfident, while the staff officer thought about how Zhang Yang was inside a dungeon and how he would be too late if the protagonist took the trial tonight. And so he tried to persuade him to take the trial the next day, where more officers could witness and testify to his might, which the initiator agreed with. Yi Ning accepted, making everything go according to his plan since they would delay his trial further if he directly asked to rest today and take it tomorrow as he intended. An angry hand was slapped on the table. The general was furious to see that the young man would take the 3rd grade trial the next day and wanted to talk to Lin Ru, whom he had tasked with delaying Yi Ning's trial. But the staff officer stated that the S genius turned a deaf ear to him, the initiator, and even Old Lin, and that they couldn't control his actions. With that, the father was determined to inform his son and was even ready to abandon his 3rd graders in the dungeon that he had sent in order to aid him. Meanwhile, our hero was surprised by the treatment he received as a special sequence, seeing how rich the country was now and how he could use the spirit crystals to adjust his state. Becoming the first sequence would grant him a salary of 100,000 credits, along with a blue-tier equipment set, a powerful weapon, and the right to enter the National Treasury 2 times a month, allowing him to reach grade 4 in less than 12 months. The next day, at the 3rd grade Tower of Trial, the crowd began to gather, having heard that the participants of Project Seed were trying to achieve the unattainable 3rd grade. With that, the Seeds entered the field. But our hero noticed that they looked like middle-aged men. This made him realize that they all must be 2nd-tier Peak Awakeners hired to steal his spotlight, seeing how the real Seeds must not have reached this level yet. The Seed Project initiator welcomed all the officials, stating that the trial would begin shortly, before asking if there were any other Seeds who wished to participate in the trial. But just then, the first sequence, Zheng Yang, arrived, determined to take the third-grade trial. From the looks of it, Yining realized that the young man had just come out of a dungeon, and that he was stronger than the fake seeds, but despite that, he was determined to strip him of his title. Zheng Yang recalled how 4 of his superiors died for his sake inside the dungeon, blaming their blood on our hero's hands. With that, the trial started with the first batch of Strength Awakeners being opened as they were tasked with climbing to the 10th floor, granting them more prizes for each floor reached. And if they could reach the global ranking, additional prizes would be opened to them, which was a rare opportunity. Yining was revolted to see that his country was only in 7th place, determined to bring it honor with his performance. The first sequence, a dual-type Awakener, was determined to enter first. 2 others volunteered to take the trial first, but when asked if anyone else wished to enter, the second-type protagonist expressed his wish to enter the Strength-type trial, which shocked everyone. Just then, the general stated that this was a Strength-type trial, and that he would personally open the psychic trial for him later. But our hero pointed out how there were no rules preventing him from taking this trial and revealed that he wished to take 3 trials in order to leave everyone amazed. This made General Zhang speculate that the young man was trying to guarantee his success since the psychic trial had never been passed before, and that he had a better chance in the first trial. The general mockingly pointed out how insignificant Yining was in front of Strength-type Awakeners, but it would be easier for him to take their trial, which the other man agreed with. Meanwhile, his son pointed out how the protagonist was trying to surpass him with his max-out stats, but when he brought up his talent, Yining ordered him to keep silent, asking him to take him on if he had the courage. The first sequence gladly accepted the challenge as they entered the gate. Upon entering, the system informed him that he should climb up the floors after incinerating all foes in front of him and that all equipment effects were cancelled and stats weakened. With that, the young man began to think of how the 10th floor would guarantee him passing the trial and how humanity had only managed to climb 23 floors after the apocalypse. As the first monster appeared, our hero was determined to reach floor 24. The first floors were of great ease and were quickly cleared by our hero, and after passing the first one, the second floor was opened in less than a minute. As he slew the first-grade Iron Claw zombie, our hero grew tired of the pathetic opponents in the lower floors. The first 7 floors were child's play. Everyone was progressing at the same rate, but everything would change between the 7th and 10th floors, making the initiator wonder who would be first. But General Zhang pointed out how his child had already reached the 10th floor, while the protagonist was still stuck on floor number 8, making the man next to him speculate that Yining was overhyped. Meanwhile, our hero thought of how he shouldn't tire himself in the first 7 easy floors, unlike the others, as the goal wasn't to progress the fastest but to arrive first. The initiator explained that due to mutants having powerful magnetic fields, the transmission would be cut off after the 10th floor. Shang was proud to see his son being the first to disappear into the blue screen, while the fat man beside him pointed out how Zheng Yang cleared 10 floors in 10 minutes, putting the psychic user to shame for entering the strength trial. The general then pointed out how Yining was the 18th contestant to pass the 10th floor, while the general's son was 3 floors above. This made him mock the young man and point out how his son surpassed him in every aspect. But General Yang thought of how the protagonist should be faster according to his strength despite being a psychic type. Meanwhile, our hero decided to take the giant monster from above, as he recalled how its weakness was his back from his previous life. With that, the beast fell to his blade just as he expected. Having cleared floor 12, our smiling hero thought of how his stamina and spirit powers were still intact. With that, he decided to use his attribute conversion in order to use his stamina and spirit power to quickly reach floor 21 and use his ultimates in the higher floors. Meanwhile, Zheng Yang realized that he was the first to pass floor 16 as he was determined to surpass Yining. At the same time, many Awakeners exited the dungeon while one of them stated that all who pass floor 20 are monsters, while another revealed that they passed for clearing floor 10. With that, few contestants were still in the trial. The initiator pointed out how many were eliminated and how Yining was amazing to reach floor 15 despite being a psychic-type Awakener. The father claimed that the young man shall meet his end on this floor, unlike his son on floor 17, who could easily reach the global ranks. Yet General Yang noticed that the first sequence became slower after entering floor 16, while Yining was only getting faster against all odds. As our hero reached floor 16, the initiator was left certain that he wasn't imagining things. The father couldn't believe that the commoner had caught up to his second son, while the amazed man beside him assumed that Yining must be pushing his limits and that he would soon die. But to their surprise, the psychic Awakener had cleared level 17, which was never seen before. The general desperately wanted his son to win against our hero. Meanwhile, Zheng Yang was fighting a giant skeleton. The gigantic atrocity readied its fist and delivered a devastating blow to the axe wielder. Having not recovered from his last dungeon raid, the young man realized that this was as far as he could go. But this wasn't a problem for him, speculating that no one else was still advancing, which led him to prioritize his survival. And so he gathered all of his strength into his battle axe. With that, the young man charged at the mutant with his skill heaven-splitting axe in order to finally vanquish the giant skeleton. With that, Zheng Yang decided to exit the tower. Once teleported outside, his father rushed to check on him. The young man was happy to be number 1, having cleared floor 18, but little did he know his father was well aware of the bitter truth. The general's silence confused the young awakener, as he was the first to clear floor 18 in 2 years, and yet no one applauded him. But just then, Zheng Yang looked at the screen only to find that our hero had reached level 19, which he entered shortly after his exit, according to the general. Suddenly, the young man began to cough blood, refusing to believe that Yi Ning surpassed him and accusing the system of malfunctioning. Yet the father affirmed that this extraordinary feat was no error, and that Yi Ning started to clear all levels in 1 minute after 15, just like his son did in the first 10 floors. This left him disappointed since, despite all his gifts, he lost to a psychic type, meaning that his elders sacrificed themselves in vain. But the general said that this wasn't the case, reminding him that he was still exhausted from his last dungeon with little preparation for the trial, meaning that he was not inferior to Yi Ning. But just then, our hero cleared floor 20, allowing him to enter the top 10 international ranks. With that, the initiator ordered one of his men to inform Commander Xia of this incredible feat, as he wanted a high-ranking official to witness the achievement of the prodigy. Meanwhile, our hero, deprived of his enhancements and saving his ultimates, was left to struggle alone on floor 21 since only 3rd-grade mutants could be found. And so he charged at the creature after converting 5 willpower points into agility. But the mutant released a powerful attack covering a large area. Despite the monster not being able to keep up with him, our hero realized that he couldn't actually slay the beast without tanking some damage. And so, Yi Ning opted to forbid the beast from spitting venom by channeling 5 willpower points into his strength and resorting to his longsword in order to cut off a part of the mutant. This left our hero annoyed, as 5 willpower points were almost insignificant, and that only one of his attributes could be enhanced at a time. But he found the monster's inability to use poison as a comfort, and with that, he concentrated all of his spiritual energy. And by channeling it all into his offensive power, he decapitated the 3rd-grade mutant before mincing him into small pieces. With that achievement, level 21 was finally cleared, paving the way for the next floor to open in 60 seconds. Yi Ning was satisfied, and being on the brink of floor 22, our hero finally allowed himself to resort to his skills. Just then, Fang Hao, the Daxia vice commander, and the commissioner of the political department, Hu Zuiping, arrived at the scene. The vice commander immediately demanded an explanation for his summoning, so the initiator explained that the protagonist was still fighting in the tower even after clearing floor 21, which left the man impressed. But just then, they were informed that the young man had cleared level 22, leaving the high-ranking officials totally amazed as the young man reached international rankings. But just then, the commander of Daxia was asked to contain himself as no one could endure his leaking energy. Fang Hao apologized, stating that he was overexcited, seeing how he himself barely passed floor 21 in 30 minutes, yet Yi Ning cleared the one above in under a minute. The man then pointed out how the hero's progression inside the tower was illogically sped up and slowed down continuously, making the commissioner question if Yi Ning was truly a psychic-type awakener, seeing how many in the room were ready to put everything aside for victory. As he looked at the father and son, the commander firmly claimed that despite his forgiving nature, he would punish anyone who lied to their country. The general felt uneasy, who, despite having worked under the table, would never dare to misinform the military. Just then, the initiator pointed out how Yi Ning was still inside the dungeon, so the vice commander pointed out how one would face a mid-tier 3rd grade with no help after floor 22. Meanwhile, Yi Ning used his heaven-splitting slash in order to slay the remaining beast, allowing him to clear floor 23 to everyone's surprise, making the vice commander wonder if he became number 1, seeing how the previous record was floor 23, but was much slower. The commissioner was happy to confirm that the young man had the best score in history. General Yang, his son, and his ally were all baffled, as the title of first sequence would now undoubtedly be bestowed upon him. This made the vice commander tear up, as the record was finally broken after 37 years, and seeing how his country made it to the top 10 once again after 10 years. With that, he ordered the initiator to inform the highest commander so that they could properly welcome back the genius that is Yi Ning. And so they approached the exit. The commissioner speculated that the late protagonist might get trapped inside if he tried to clear another level, but just as the commander brought up the strong mutants above, his face was filled with worry as he realized something. With that, he quickly asked Yang Guping to find a way to exit the tower before requesting a medical team, but the initiator explained that they couldn't contact him while inside. And so the commander started to pray, hoping that Yi Ning wouldn't carelessly jump into danger. All were worried, but all felt relieved as the system informed them that the protagonist had stopped the trial of strength. The general was confused as he didn't see the young man exit the dungeon and that they couldn't see him on screen, so the initiator explained that he went to the agility trial. As the teleportation for the trial of agility was about to take place, despite his desire to conquer floor 25, our hero wanted to preserve his 2 remaining ultimate moves, seeing how the hidden rule of the trial would allow him to stack his success by passing many trials at once, which would guarantee him the supplementary reward. The trial of agility, called Maze of Monsters, consisted of exiting the labyrinth without harming the attacking monsters as fast as possible, with the rewards being based on performance. Seeing how powerful the SS class talents of all those on the leaderboard were, especially the first and second, our hero realized that his power conversion wouldn't suffice. The genius of the agility class, Wang Lingyu, didn't completely mind that all the eyes of the high-ranking officials were on the protagonist, seeing how he defeated the first sequence. As long as she herself surpassed Yi Ning in this trial, she could earn herself the title of second sequence, which would make the Xingyo safe zone proud. Seeing how she couldn't destroy the walls, Huang Lingyu decided to always go right in order to exit the complex labyrinth, regardless of the time it would take. The girl then used the head of the snake in order to get away from the beast, but the reptile tried to spray the genius with venom. Yet Huang Lingyu, with her S-rank agility talent, dodged the attack. The girl speculated that her talent would allow her to easily evade the lurking mutants. Meanwhile, our hero realized from the time given that the labyrinth must be small, despite its complicated design. Yi Ning only needed to get to the center of the maze and use his dimensional slash in order to exit the dungeon. But to his misfortune, the number of mutants began to increase as he approached the center of the maze. He could luckily rely on his muscle memory to evade the beasts. Having faced all these mutants numerous times in his past life, our hero memorized the very way to counter all of them. Meanwhile, the genius girl stumbled upon an octopus-like monster. Seeing how the beasts were getting more annoying, Huang Lingyu decided to rely on her skill in order to get past the mutant, only to find another right in front of her. The surprised girl immediately used her skill Wind Blast. Huang Lingyu didn't dodge the attack unharmed and decided to run faster since she was almost exhausted in order to finish before Yi Ning. But just then, at the center of the maze, Yi Ning finally reached the heart of the labyrinth, which was infested with monsters. And with that, he used his dimensional slash in order to quickly locate the exit. The commander couldn't see what was going on, so the initiator stated that the results would appear in 5 minutes at most, while the commissioner stated that Yi Ning knew his strength. Fang He was worried that the young man would be depressed like the general's son upon tasting defeat, but the initiator reassured him that it wasn't likely since he was a psychic type. Zheng Yang asked his father if Yi Ning would finally be defeated, which he confirmed. But just then, someone passed the trial of agility in a world record-breaking time, and when the name appeared on the screen, both father and son were utterly baffled. As Yi Ning cleared first place once again on a global scale by exiting the dungeon in 68 seconds, the commander looked forward to seeing his upcoming abilities. The wounded Huang Lingyu finally exited the trial, speculating that she was the first to pass the trial in 121 seconds, flooding her heart with happiness. Despite not being this outstanding, the girl hoped for at least the 20th place in the global ranking, only to find that Yi Ning was the victor, making her suffer a defeat far superior to the previous first sequence. The man then rushed to Huang Lingyu as she began to lose consciousness. All were amazed as Lei Xuangu finally arrived. The commander informed him that Yi Ning had recently become top 1 in the agility trial, and when asked about the young man's location, he explained that he was taking the physics trial. This infuriated Lei Xuangu, who requested to destroy the system in order to make him exit the trial, leaving everyone in a state of shock. But in reality, the highest commander was just trying to crack a joke in order to appease the atmosphere and propose observing the genius for now. As he let out a forced laugh, Fang Hao thought about how this inappropriate joke threw everyone into a state of stress instead of amusing them. Upon looking at the leaderboard, the young man noticed that the first place scored twice the second score, making him speculate that he had some kind of special ability. With a time limit of 10 minutes, the trial consisted of tanking attacks from monsters divided into regions based on their power, and exiting the trial would result in failure. In order to get the highest score possible, our hero decided to skip the weak regions and go to the strong ones immediately. And so the protagonist dashed forward while converting some of his willpower into speed, by skipping the weak monsters and going straight to 3rd grade before using Skyfall in order to block the damage. Yi Ning should guarantee himself a high ranking. Lei Xuangu asked the commander if Yi Ning could also become number 1 in the physics trial, but the man affirmed that it was almost impossible, since most physical types could be recognized by their muscular and heavy bodies, unlike the young man like General Qin Feng and Zhang Hai. But the High Commander affirmed that his underling was thinking too rationally, seeing how Yi Ning had already done the impossible by conquering 2 trial leaderboards. The old man was certain that the Psychic-type Awakener was the most fit to become a 4th grade and conquer yet another trial, stating that he would slap his face if he was mistaken. The convinced Fang Hao asked his superior to stop harming his own face. In the meantime, our hero was struggling to get past the 2nd grade peak-tier mutants. The giant monster charged its fist, forcing our hero to convert his willpower in order to increase his durability. Yi Ning wasn't left unscratched as he began to cough blood. But the creature wasn't done just yet, as it readied its feet to stomp the young man, who evaded a lethal blow at the last second. And just when he tried to catch his breath, Yining's shoulder was suddenly attacked out of nowhere. With a hand down, our hero realized that exiting this region was his top priority. With that, he called his slave to ask for aid in order to get his short sword back inside. Just then, our hero noticed a giant but slow zombie elephant that used its nose as his primary resort for offense, which might be the protagonist's key out of the dungeon. With that, he decided to make the beast angry in order to use its strength to catapult himself to another region. And so the young man crazily increased his endurance in order to tank the hit from the elephant, allowing him to fly over this annoying region, and finally reach the peak tier 3rd grade region. Yining was slammed into the ground. Seeing how weak his endurance was, Yining realized that he was one attack away from his grave, when suddenly a giant worm emerged out of the ground. Seeing this, the terrified Yining, who would be forced to fail the trial if this didn't work, decided to test his skill, Skyfall. And so the titanic monstrosity charged at the young man. Yining then used his skill Skyfall for the first time, leaving him inside a powerful shield that would block the creature's fangs. The young man was left satisfied by the highest class of sword skill delivered by the system, seeing how robust his shield looked. Having long exceeded the number 1 ranker's tank value, our hero was left confused as the 10 minutes were still not done. And so the barrier began to crack. Yining had almost exhausted his spiritual power. Despite the skill having offensive effects, it would go to waste since the monster must remain unharmed. Just then, the shield was broken, as our hero jumped into the air, and to his fortune, the trial was finally over. With that, he accepted to retreat from the dungeon. All looked at his final score. Everyone was shocked to see that this young genius utterly dethroned the number 1 ranker in the psychic trial. But Letic Suan-gu found the hero suspicious, leaving all the officials anxious. But the High Commander just speculated that Yining must be a part of divinity instead of humanity, giving everyone another sense of false alert. The system, which wouldn't give him the reward, wouldn't let the hero take a break, and it didn't matter that he was now one-armed since his respective trial did not involve fighting. But Yining was determined to complete his elements trial. Yining decided to choose the advanced trial since it wouldn't take much effort, as the enemies were made from his memories, unlike last time when he chose the basic trial. And with that, Yining started the trial. The hero was now in a hyper-realistic illusion of his home zone as the first round. Commander Xiao rushed to the young man as he was delighted to see him, but the psychic type dodged the commander, leaving him confused. Before stabbing him in the gut, despite the great resemblance, our hero realized that this creature wasn't Commander Xiao, but a monster. But to his surprise, a monster kept his human form in order to pressure the young man. Despite the feeling of sorrow, our hero decided to go for the next round. The hero is now back fighting side by side with the Chen siblings once again. But just as Chen Yang asked for help to deliver his sister from the mutants, Yining slew the girl, which left the military man shocked. As he killed the remaining ally, our hero was left unimpressed by the system despite loving these siblings. And with that, he decided to start the next round. Yining was now in front of Lin Lan, who reminded him that he wanted to get intimate with her. The illusion stated that she was totally open to the idea. The 3rd round would have been challenging for many psychic-type awakeners. Yet as he killed the woman, he felt no remorse, unlike the previous 2, making it easier for him. Thinking that the system wasn't taking him seriously, Yining decided to take on the 4th round. The young man was now in front of the rich girl, stating that she only acted spoiled in order to anger her dad. The girl then opened her robe, leaving herself exposed to the awakener. Yining thanked her for her goodwill and asked her to close her eyes out of respect for her, before ending her life in order to access the next round. Many people were trapped in the chaos. The instructor asked the children to have courage as he promised to keep them out of harm's way. Yining, now a 14-year-old boy, recognized the place as his old classroom. The doors were almost opened. The hero recalled how he was the only one that left this room alive. His classmate Wan can also met her demise in this incident. To this day, he recalls how she offered him a slice of bread she didn't want. The girl then begged the hero to get her to safety. Yining confessed that he wished to save everyone that day, but all of this was in the past, and saving the girl now would result in a failure of his trial. And so with his eyes full of tears, he began to choke the life out of the little girl while deeply apologizing. As he killed the innocent child, the grown man began to curse and beg the system for mercy. All other children were thrown into a state of panic after witnessing the crime, and so Yining activated his powers in order to terminate all of them. And so he apologized to all, stating that he could only move onward, wishing to find them in heaven at the end. Yining was now in the company of his mother and sister. The 6th round was about family, making the young man wonder about the system's limits. The little girl, with her eyes full of tears, turned to her beloved brother and hugged him out of fear. Yining began to reassure the little girl, only to find her acting oddly while keeping a normal conversation. Just then, the young man was stabbed by his little sister, making him back down. The little girl then asked her brother why he wasn't returning her hugs, speculating that she had wronged her brother. But as he killed her, Yining apologized, taking all the blame. This left the mother heartbroken after seeing her eldest slay her youngest. As he lifted his sword, Yining deeply apologized to his mother, After staining his hands with his family's blood and his eyes with tears, only one round was left for this trial. With that on the brink of an emotional breakdown, the hero requested the final challenge, just to be knocked out and lose consciousness. This made Yi Ning speculate that this was the end for him. But then he heard voices begging him to wake up. Our hero found himself lying in a hospital bed, surrounded by many relieved faces. Yi Ning was confused as he was supposed to still be inside the trial. Just then, one of the men stated that all hope was lost and that they were all worried about him since he went into a coma right after becoming a 4th grader. Yi Ning finally understood that he had gone back to his past life. Not only had all his past injuries magically disappeared, but he also felt more powerful than ever before. The protagonist was radiating with a great, powerful spiritual pressure. This made the man see a ray of hope for humanity as he felt the pressure of 4th grader from our hero. But just then, a soldier informed Commander Yi Lan that the 4th grade mutant and his army of zombies had breached their defenses. This made the commander turn to the 4th grader and ask him if he was ready to fight, stating that they were ready to sacrifice themselves in order to give him time. This left Yi Ning confused as he had supposedly hit the end of the road after facing the powerful 4th grade mutant. But just then, he recalled how he was left on the brink of death for 3rd graders to save him. Our hero then fell into a coma after forcing himself to break his willpower core in order to attain 4th grade, yet he couldn't recall any of it, making Yi Ning speculate that this sudden amnesia was the result of a forced promotion. Nothing made sense as the hero began to question the reality of his second life and if it was fused with his memories, making him lose control over his immense power in a moment of weakness. The commander behind his shield asked Yi Ning to take some time to accustom himself to his newfound strength, since he was their only hope, before ordering everyone to join the front lines in order to give the young man time to prepare. And so Yi Ning tried to get himself under control and retake mastery over his own breath, since for him to regrasp reality, he first had to exit the room. Meanwhile, the city was thrown into a state of complete panic as the defenses were almost crushed, with the underground bunker being the only safe zone. As all rushed there, a pack of mutated birds appeared. These flying atrocities flew above the front lines in order to attack the citizens. Meanwhile, an awakener was assaulting a normal woman and her child as they stood in his way, showing no mercy to the defenseless. Some awakeners started to push aside the normal civilians, and even kill them in order to guarantee safety for themselves, when suddenly 2 blue lights fell from the heavens, pulverizing 2 of the troublemakers. All were left in awe as the protagonist finally arrived at the scene. Yi Ning ordered them to get into the bunker in a civilized way, stating that he would kill any killer like a mutant. The young man noticed a swarm of flying monsters approaching, and so he formed his spirit blade, before easily getting rid of the beasts. Yi Ning felt more powerful than ever, with the strength of a 4th grader dwelling inside him, ready to face his killer once again. The city was thrown into immense chaos, yet some awakeners were determined to hold their ground as one of them led the attack, only to be pinned down and bitten by the zombies. So the man decided to give the atrocities a taste of their own medicine. With that, he bit off some of the monster's flesh, pointing out how repulsive it was. The man used his last breath to declare humanity as unkillable. Seeing their commander lose his life while fighting motivated the soldiers to fight until the end. Meanwhile, the flying high commander, along with many other powerful figures, decided to try his best in order to slay the 4th grade beast, or at least mortally wound it. The commissioner reminded him that they still had their 4th grade awakener in case of failure. While the commander found it disappointing to see Yi Ning unable to master his own power, Fang Hao regretted not scouting him earlier, but the High Commander pointed out with a laugh that if they could reverse the past, he would now be a grandfather to many, and with that ordered them to get ready as they were about to arrive. The high officials decided to strike the monster's head. The soldiers felt hopeful to see Daxia's strongest 7 attack all at once, thinking that they could win once the 4th grade mutant was gone. And so they all charged at the anomaly with their strongest moves. It was left unimpressed, as it easily evaded the blow, before capturing the 7 men who were rendered powerless against it, and finally putting an end to their misery, which broke any hope the regular soldiers had left for their country to see another day. Meanwhile, at the headquarters, Chu Tian, Daxia Zhen, who was commander, couldn't fathom this tragedy and ordered that Yi Ning escape with the last of their kind in order to preserve hope. But just as he was about to send his last message to the world, the soldier noticed Yi Ning on screen, as the young man charged at his killer, ready to settle their old score. All were happy as the hero finally arrived, and seeing that his spiritual power was enough to scare the hordes, the Awakeners' morale was boosted as they prepared the counterattack. Yet the biggest enemy wasn't impressed. Seeing how the monster remained despite him being a 4th grader made Yi Ning have his doubts. Yi Ning wondered if he should slay the 4th grade monster and satisfy himself in order to pass the last trial. Just then, a soldier asked the young man to slay the monster, and Sir Yi Ning hesitated to kill a monster and end all this suffering, when suddenly, he heard a familiar voice, as 2 feminine figures began to form behind him. Both mother and daughter asked the protagonist to slay the beast. Even his old classmate appeared, asking him to do so. With that, Yi Ning understood that the system wanted him to take revenge on his killer, giving him a great idea on how to pass the final round. Meanwhile, in the control room, The commander and the initiator were both worried since the one who instantly cleared 3 trials had spent 9 hours in his respective one. This made the commissioner conclude that Yi Ning must have opted for the advanced trial, meaning that he was proud of his willpower. Yet despite choosing the hard way, Yi Ning shouldn't have so much difficulty passing the trial unless he was tired, so the highest commander decided to grant him more time. But just then, a fist was slammed on the table. Zhang Meng stated that there might be another explanation behind our hero's struggle, which piqued the curiosity of Fang Hao. But the man insisted that what he had to say was on a national level, so he asked to cut off all communications in order to preserve his confidence, and that only those under first-class control could hear what he had to say, which angered the confused Fang Hao. But Zhang Meng looked the old man in the eyes and affirmed that he was ready to bet his position to prove that his point was important, which made him reflect for a moment. And so the highest commander ordered the immediate lockdown, as this was now the utmost secrecy. With that, the shield was deployed. And so Zhang Meng explained that Yi Ning was, in fact, a fraud with no real particular talent who discovered a loophole, which is why he easily passed 3 trials while struggling his own. So Fang Hao explained that this was just his imagination, making the general recall the events that occurred 16 years ago. How an awakener, who could create copies of items without duplicating the effects, appeared in North America, and how he became rich and wealthy since the copies were accepted by the NPCs. Until the day he accidentally revealed himself to the system, which immediately destroyed him, proving that even the system wasn't devoid of mistakes. The son agreed with his father and stated that this was the only logical explanation, which meant that Yi Ning didn't beat him. And so the general advised interrogating the boy upon exiting the trial, since his newfound cheat code could benefit the whole nation. But the commander found it too inhuman to question the young man as soon as he exited a confrontation with death. With that, the highest commander ordered both of them to keep silent, as he needed to reflect in order to make his own decision. Meanwhile, inside the trial, the crowd begged the young man to slay the strongest monstrosity. Yi Ning apologized, as sometimes one couldn't prepare his past mistakes, and despite how gorgeous the past or future was, our hero refused to live inside a fake dream. With that, the protagonist stabbed himself. Even if reality was ugly, the young man was determined to change it, as looking for tomorrow was no illusion. Yet even in the illusion, the young man was determined to bring the 4th-grade mutant to his end, as he decimated the whole city in a spectacular explosion, which marked the end of his trial, allowing him to rank 1 overall along with 10 universal attribute points, increasing all his attributes to 78 and granting each a special talent. Our hero, who also completed the secret trial, obtained 4,000 fame points along with the title of Perfector, which spared him from any extra payment during trade along with A-class privilege. The protagonist also obtained the right to choose 4 blue-grade items or exchange them for epic items, along with the epic-grade items Key of Time and Regenerative Potions. His SS-class willpower talent was also sublimated to Spirit Storm, which could be used once a day and doubled his willpower points, along with Spirit Shield, Psychic Control, and Mind Bend abilities. And with that, an extremely injured young man exited the dungeon. The highest commander was delighted to see Yi Ning finally returning, as he was the head of every scoreboard and the only awakener in history to pass the 3rd-grade willpower trial. Yi Ning, who could barely stand on his feet, was waiting for the global announcement about his prowess as promised by the system. Just then, the world was made aware that a young man from Daxia had conquered all of the trials at once, which threw all of humanity into a state of chaos. With that, the protagonist finally gave in to his exhaustion, as all his efforts weren't wasted by the system. Seeing him lose consciousness made all of them rush to him, with the commander ordering the medical team to immediately aid him. The man explained that Yi Ning's life wasn't at stake, and that he had an injured arm along with little willpower left, making him speculate that he would be better after a few days of rest, which reassured the man in charge. The general couldn't believe that one could dominate the leaderboards with such small injuries and suggested waking the young man up with psychic powers in order to interrogate him. This angered the commander, who stated that no harm shall be done to him as long as he lives, so Zhang Meng accused him of only using his heart, as Yi Ning would be sacrificed for the better. The commissioner informed the highest commander that listening to the general could have devastating consequences, which the initiator agreed with in order to protect the boy and even the nation. With that, the old man stated that it would wait 72 hours for Yi Ning to awaken, and that he shall be taken care of until then, before ordering to guarantee his absolute safety. These conditions pleased Zhang Meng, who decided to wait for 3 days as he dared the young man to stop his sleep. All were standing above the unconscious young man. Zheng Yang stated that 117 countries were asking them about the protagonist and asked the High Commander about their next course of action. The general stated that the young man's guilt must be preventing his awakening after 3 days and that they should start questioning him. Yet the Vice Commander opposed this decision, so Zheng Meng reminded him how they promised to proceed in 72 hours. So the old man asked them to cease their dispute, as they couldn't just stand here and watch. With that, the general ordered the men to bring the equipment in order to commence the questioning. The requested item was then quickly brought to the men. Yet Fang Hao affirmed that they couldn't treat a genius as such. The High Commander affirmed that he too opposed this method, But this matter concerned national security, leaving him with his hands tied. All was almost in place, but just as the general was installing the headgear, Yining suddenly opened his eyes. To the general's surprise, the young man was finally awake. This sight delighted the vice commander, initiator, and even the high commander. Yet when Yining asked about what was happening, Fang Hao introduced himself while tossing the interrogation equipment away, before presenting the rest of the high-ranking officials. Yet this didn't answer the protagonist's question, since this was clearly not healing equipment. Commissioner Hu asked the awakened young man to open his panel in order for them to check his talent. Yining finally understood it all, and despite not waiting for praises, he was still disappointed to be questioned, finding it a shame to not reveal the sword god's system for his own safety, making him question the old man about the military already being aware of his talent and about the military not usually resorting to such requests, leaving him at a loss for words. With that, the general cut straight to the chase and accused the young man of using a loophole in order to succeed in every trial before threatening him not to hide any intel from them, making him point out how he was being accused of cheating. Yet when the commander tried to explain, the highest commander confirmed his suspicion since his results were unimaginable. Like Xuan-gu thanked the young man for bringing pride to their nation and promised to let him keep the title of first sequence in exchange for his honesty, since the bug could benefit everyone. But the general opposed to such a decision since it would be catastrophic when foreign awakeners contact him, leading to Lake Xuan-gu silencing him as he was showing his true face. Zhang Yang speculated that Yining refused to reveal his panel since he was too afraid to admit to having used a bug, that he would still get his son's title, which revolted him. The protagonist understood that the general was the root of the problem, yet he was still disappointed in human nature for doubting him, determined not to repeat his past life mistakes. And so he agreed to reveal this so-called bug to them under the condition of bringing him the finest talent testing crystal. Fang Hao rushed to get the requested item. This pleased Zhang Meng since, no matter the results, and even if the young man possessed an SS talent, he couldn't explain how he dominated all scoreboards, thus denying cheating. The hero then turned his eyes to the questioning man, stating that he would be happy to answer all of his questions after the trial. Just then, the vice commander brought Yining's requested crystal, and so he asked all of them to feast their eyes on the test as he uncovered the so-called bug. With that, he began to channel his energy into the crystal. All officers were baffled as an impressive spiritual pressure filled the room. As the crystal began to crack, it was announced that the young man possessed an SS rank talent, which shocked every person in the room. With that, he presented his strength as his cheat code. Both the commander and vice commander were delighted to see that the genius was truly exceptional, while the commissioner and initiator still couldn't fathom the existence of the legendary SSS terror, while the baffled general realized that there was no more room for him to argue. Yining, who was well aware of the high official's point of view, stated that one must duel another in order to be declared first sequence besides the trial. But General Yang explained that there was no use since he was undoubtedly the most powerful, and that Lai Xuan-go had already granted him the title. So the young man turned to the general, stating that he was someone who was fond of justice, which is why he would duel his son in order to make the matter fair, since, according to the rules, a sequence had the right to challenge a superior one, which is why he would reject his earned title in order to duel the previous holder to the death, which terrified Zhang Yang. Like Xuan-gu thought of how the young man rejected his reward in order to earn it, yet found the death of Zhang Yang to be an excessive punishment for his father. This made the man realize that he had hit rock bottom and that he should just yield in order to keep himself in the High Commander's favor. And so he began to apologize to the young man, stating that his talent far exceeded his son's, and that there was no reason to proceed with the duel since the title was rightfully his. But the protagonist affirmed to Zheng Meng that he wanted to do things according to the book, and that he didn't want to be called arrogant for being above the law. With Zheng Yang's formidable talent, they would finally see who was the best between the two of them. Just then, the general was conquered by fear, fearing for his youngest life, who was pleased by the idea, stating that they should wait for the end of the duel in 72 hours to make the new sequence list and give prizes since he needed time to adjust his new powers. This surprised Lai Xuan-go as the old man took Yining's side more than Fang Hao, making him speculate that he must have a reason, but he had some time to prepare for it, and so he agreed, which threw the general into a state of panic as he was determined to protect his child from Yining's blade, who aimed to send them both to the fiery pits of hell. After that, Lai Xuan-gu confronted the old man on the rooftop about his decision, so he reminded him of the state dungeon that would occur in 10 days from now. Due to past losses, the military lost many of its reserves, making this raid vital for them, as without bringing enough energy reserves, the combat jets would be useless. Like Xuan-gu realized that Hu wanted Yining to partake in the raid, so he explained how he would have to face foreign third-grade awakeners along with powerful mutants. He wanted to see if the young man had the guts to take a human life, seeing how it differs from killing a mutant. But the commander was worried about the general's reaction to his son's death, so the old man explained that he deliberately gave him 3 days in order for Zheng Meng to mentally prepare himself and also give them time to make backup plans. Like Xuan-gu praised the man for his brightness, who stated that they should pass Yining as an SS-class awakener, in order to protect him, which the highest commander agreed with. At the same time, the door was opened, revealing a dark room with a man swallowed by darkness. The saddened Zheng Yang was happy to see his father return, expecting to hear the news of Yi Ning cheating from him. The broken young man rushed to his father, dying to hear that the protagonist was imprisoned and that he kept his title of first sequence. But the sighing of the father made the young man realize that this wasn't the case. The father affirmed that the young man who challenged Zheng Yang to a duel to the death used his own talent to best him in the trial, which shocked him to see how powerful Yi Ning was. But just then, the Broken Awakener was filled with fear as he realized that he would have to fight the genius to the death, and so he renounced his title in order to escape certain death. The general affirmed that he had already offered him the title, yet the hero declined as he was determined to clash steel with his youngest, which baffled the young man. And so he ordered his father to get rid of the protagonist before the duel started in order to preserve his life. Yet the general affirmed that it wasn't possible to assassinate him, as he was granted a third-grade guard to guarantee his safety. So Zheng Yang proposed to use his family for blackmail. Hearing his father affirm that they were already under military protection, so they couldn't reach them in time, made the child lose all hope. But the general affirmed that he would protect him by contacting high-tier third-graders to aid him, and since he had contributed much to the country, those in charge wouldn't punish him for it. This made the young man speculate that his father would give him special equipment in order to guarantee his victory. But the man explained that equipment was forbidden in duels. But he also affirmed that they could use the rules that Yi Ning was eager to follow in order to beat him, which intrigued the young man. And so the general explained his Machiavellian plot to the young man, which made him crack a deranged smile, as he was now sure to win. 3 days from that day, a massive crowd was gathered in the capital city military zone. To explain to the highest commander that all was in place as the high-tier third-grade referees were in position and the shield was activated, and so he ordered to notify the 3 third-graders. As the protagonist entered the arena, the young man became the object of the spectators' judgment, seeing how young and weak he looked in person despite all the rumors about his great power. Lu Wan Zhao, the main referee, prepared to greet the prodigy, as he handed him a list filled with the names of all the participants in the duel, stating that if there was no problem, they could proceed. This confused the young man, as the past first sequence should be his only opponent. The man discovered that he would fight his main opponent after 9 other third graders, so the referee explained how other seeds had the right to challenge him while his duel was ongoing. But just as Lu Wan Zhao explained what would happen if he couldn't beat the 9 opponents, Yi Ning interrupted him, stating that they should commence, before raising his voice and challenging his 10 opponents at the same time, which made him a mockery for the crowd due to his absurd arrogance. The shocked referee knew that the superiors wanted to save Zheng Yang by creating the list, yet the man was now in an impasse as neither young man was allowed to die today. Hearing this, the initiator rushed to the young man and affirmed that there was no need for this all-out brawl since he had the right to refuse the other duels while keeping his title. Yet Yi Ning insisted, since there was no rule preventing him from doing so, as he speculated that all his opponents were insignificant against him. This left Fang Hao fond of the young man's madness, while the commissioner grew worried. The highest commander, who saw his younger days in the protagonist, agreed to his demand and asked the referee to act wisely, as this would be a great experience for him to grow. This made the main referee realize that the man in charge wanted them to shield the young man. And so Lu Wan Zhou ordered all of the opposing awakeners to enter the arena. Zheng Yang was left annoyed by Yi Ning's arrogance, but his father explained that this was to their favor, as he could use the 9 others to tire his target before slaying him. And so the duel was about to start, with all equipment effects being cancelled as the countdown began. The crowd had never seen something like this, as some began to make bets on how many seconds Yi Ning could survive. As the duel started, Zheng Yang ordered the 9 others to charge at the young man and finish him off. But Yi Ning acted quickly and used his sword burst stream, instantly slaying 3 third-tier awakeners in a matter of seconds. Seeing this, the terrified son of the general begged the hitman to save his life. With that, an awakener charged at the protagonist, prepared to sacrifice his life in order to take him out. But the protagonist easily slashed the suicidal man in the middle of the air. This awakener exploded upon getting cut. Yi Ning was left amused, as his enemies had smuggled a small nuclear bomb into the arena. This left the young man open to Yi Ning's devastating attacks. With that, the referee team was ordered to shield Zheng Yang from harm, but Lu Wan Zhao had a hard time believing that Yi Ning's immense power was third grade. But his colleague affirmed that they must protect the general's son from harm, regardless of the others, in order to keep their positions. With that, the young man tried to make his escape, begging his father to save him from Yi Ning. But the cowering young man was left even more terrified, as he was told not to be anxious anymore. When suddenly, Zheng Yang found himself decapitated, which left the referee confused. The superiors were all baffled, as all of Yi Ning's foes were slain in 1 second, but all were left confused as the protected Zheng Yang suddenly died without anyone noticing how. No living being could protect Yi Ning's target from his blade, as this duel was just a way to demonstrate his immeasurable strength. The general held the severed head of his son in complete disbelief. With that, he charged at Yi Ning in order to avenge the death of his youngest, which relieved the protagonist, who feared that the general was going to run away. And so the vengeful man charged at his son's killer with his tiger fist, aiming to take his life. Despite the fact that the general was a peak-tier third-grade awakener, much more powerful than him, Yining was certain that the man would die today trying to end him. This forced Fang Hao to intervene and use his Dragon Domination Fist in order to counter the Tiger Fist, which sent the general flying into the barrier. Jiang Meng ordered the vice commander to go away as he had to avenge his son. Fang Hao was eager to terminate the general, but he was bound by law and stated that the commander would forgive him if he stopped now. Otherwise, he would have to end him. Seeing the man get filled with hesitation and fear didn't please Yining, and so he gave him the middle finger as he began to insult his late child, which triggered the general. So Fang Hao had to intervene once again as he knocked the crazed man out with his aura alone. This made the general fall to the ground and cough blood, and so he began to beg the commander to avenge his son, since he always risked his life for their nation. The High Commander was left silent as he thought of how absurd all this was since the mourning general had already yielded. Seeing this, the protagonist began to taunt Jiang Meng once again. As he began to think, unlike most cases, he had to drive his target into desperation. With that, he dared the man to lay a finger on him as he was wide open in front of him, threatening to take out every member of the Zheng family. This was the last straw for the broken man, who was now filled with bloodlust. Fang Hao was left happy as he realized what Yining plotted, determined to live up to his expectations. And so the vice commander prepared himself to attack as the general charged to claim his revenge. As he planted the man into the ground, the vice commander stated that he would make the general realize the difference between a fake and a real peak-tier third-grade awakener. This made the young man realize the huge gap that existed between grades, as he could only defeat mid-tier third-grade awakeners and below, but was most likely useless to higher tiers. With that, Fang Hao addressed the man in charge, stating that he only acted to shield the first sequence. The old man explained that he understood what had happened and pointed out that the general shall have a grand funeral. But this pissed him off, as both of them clearly had an unspoken plot, mistaking him for a fool while executing it. With that, the young man thanked the peak-tier third grader for saving him and stated that he could only show his gratitude by protecting their nation. Lu Wanzhao was happy to see how smart Yining was and decided to grant him the wish he desired. So he declared that they shall hold the investiture ceremony for the title of first sequence the next day, which shocked the crowd, who still couldn't comprehend the general's death. All were left shocked by the protagonist's cruelty and were also surprised to see that the upcoming ceremony would be held on a national scale. Meanwhile, the staff officer of the Seed Project assumed himself dead, while Lin Ru was glad to have sided with Yining at the last moment. With that, Lu Wanzhou decided to make tomorrow's festivities grandiose and considered the result of the duel and the protagonist's abilities a secret, which, if revealed, would be considered a crime. The day of the ceremony finally dawned on Capital Square as Yining officially received the title of First Sequence, along with extra prizes from the military for conquering every trial. With that, the genius was granted S-rank authority in addition to unlimited resources, along with a salary of 3 million credits and a yearly bonus of 10 million credits, and was also allowed to pick a legendary equipment, along with a division-level deputy military position, in addition to the titles of Major General and honorary member of the Standing Committee. Wang Tian was happy to see the young man reach a level near the commanders, while Xiao Hao explained how he didn't expect the rookie to reach this level in 1 month. As for Chen Kai Lai, he received an unexpected raise. Lu Wanzhao asked the young man if he needed anything else, and despite the generosity of the military and his desire to be respectful, this was the perfect time to make demands. And so the genius asked the High Commander if he was allowed to attend the Triennial Military Conference that would occur in 2 days, which put the old man in a tough spot. The commissioner was left curious as to why young Yining wanted to attend such a massive event, while the vice commander thought that he should aim for thrilling battles instead of conferences. And so Lu Wanzhou allowed him to attend, as his position already permitted him to do so, pointing out how the military would be delighted to consider his suggestions, leaving him grateful. Our hero aimed to use the power of the military in order to prevent the disaster that occurred in the East Sea, when suddenly Fang Hao arrived, asking the young man to follow him, which piqued Yining's curiosity. As they arrived at the military compound, a vice commander explained that this was the hero's new home, as it was secure, fancy, and surrounded by precious plants, before pointing out that the shielded metallic building was the meeting room and explaining that he had a mission for Yining. Fang Hao explained how this mission wasn't usually given to new third graders, but Yining was an exception, as he was the most suited for it, and so the boy asked the man for the mission. He informed him of the A-rank dungeon Zombie Nation, where each nation had to send 2 mid-tier third graders and 8 first-tier third graders, who would have to fight everyone and everything for energy mines. Yining recalled how he ventured into this state dungeon in his past life and how it was just a regular dungeon deprived of energy mines. Just then, the Sword God system informed him of an obligatory mission, where he would have to obtain the highest authority in the said dungeon to acquire S-class war weapon blueprints. Just then, Fang Hao informed the young man that their strike squad would shield him from harm while inside, and just when he was about to explain the consolations in case of failure, Yining interrupted him, stating that he would surely be victorious in the said dungeon, which left Fang Hao grateful as he explained how Yining had the right to reach into the national treasury. But Yining had no other choice since the system forced him to conquer the dungeon, aside from the fact that the space carrier blueprints were far too important to refuse. With a gigantic weight and a titanic size with 26 spirit cannons on the sides, 2 main cannons in the front and back, and a shield and walk-on system, it could carry 64 fighter jets and 7,000 people. This description thrilled the young man as he was now determined to get his hands on this blueprint. The 3rd grade, who unlocked 2 additional skill slots, decided to use his new title in order to take 2 S-rank sword skills from the treasury to increase his power for the next dungeon. But just then, the young man felt a non-amical peak-tier 3rd grade aura approaching him, and so he turned around to see the face of his attacker, only to find a gorgeous girl introducing herself as Personal Guard 009, here to serve, when suddenly the personal guard hugged the surprised young man, as she explained how she was assigned to be his personal bodyguard. Yining pushed her away, demanding an explanation of her employer's identity and her tactile manners. 009 revealed that she recently discovered from the study materials that the vice commander was her employer, which intrigued the young man. But he grew even more intrigued as she struck a weird pose, followed by another appealing one. Yining had to put her limits as she tried to kiss him, which confused the personal guard. The protagonist sighed as he realized that the higher-ups feared that he would do something rash due to his youth. With that, he resorted to his psychic observation. After careful analysis, the girl turned out to be more machine than human, as she was deprived of a brain controlled by a chip. And so he asked the girl for the reason behind her robotization. 009 suddenly grabbed the young man's head and gently put it on her forehead. Just then, 009's head began to glow. This was a fingerprint recognizer that allowed Yining to unlock the command update. With that, Yining's attention was turned to Feng Hao holding the hand of a little girl on a hospital bed. The young one, being aware of her father's love for the nation, asked him to donate her dying body to science in order to keep fighting even after death in case of success. The vice commander explained to Feng how this fate was far more agonizing than death and how the experience never succeeded, and if it did, she would become a soulless machine. But as she wiped away her father's tears, the girl explained that she shall do the inverse of the story's heroes and sacrifice her soul in order to put her flesh on the front lines. Feng found an unsatisfied death far more agonizing than the experiment's pain. This made the vice commander's paternal heart sink into a dark sadness. But the daughter tried to comfort her father, stating that she trusts him to give her the best orders after she becomes a robot. After seeing such a sad memory, the protagonist stood frozen, unable to speak as he reflected on the shocking truth. The young man began to wonder how vital he was to the vice commander for him to send his flesh to protect him, thinking that he tried to silence her love for her by naming Feng 009. With that, he ordered her to listen to his demands, ordering her to forget all the files about protecting him up close, as she now only needed to listen and obey him. With that, 009 became the young man's devoted servant, and so he asked her to follow him to get a new S-rank skill, while thinking of how grateful he was to the girl's father, despite disapproving of his ways, determined not to disappoint him. And so a man came rushing to welcome the first sequence to the first research center. After the man introduced himself as Xiao Tian, the young man asked him if they had 2 S-rank sword skills. As the vice director confirmed and asked the protagonist to follow him, Yining ordered 009 to wait for him there. Xiao Tian explained that they only had 4 S-rank skills left, advising him to take a look at their numerous A-rank sword skills, but Yining declined the offer. Seeing how anxious the vice director was, Yining asked about the situation. He explained that it might become problematic since many 3rd graders in the capital wanted those skills, yet the first sequence decided to check the skill books regardless. The 4 S-rank skills left in the research center were Desperate Slash, Hellfire, Death Hymn, and Annihilation. The first required a 1 foot in the grave situation to use, while the second needed a proper place, the third consumed too much energy, and the fourth would turn him into a still target. After seeing the disappointment on the first sequence's face, the relieved vice director proposed that he take a look at the 800 A-rank skills available, which were almost as effective as the S-rank ones. But to his surprise, the young man suddenly learned 2 of the 4 precious sword skills. Xiao Tian was left in complete shock as he witnessed him learn Death Hymn and Annihilation, making him demand an explanation. So Yining, who was in a hurry, explained that he didn't have the energy to search through the inferior books. As Yining thanked the man while going on his way, the vice director was left too shocked to understand the young man's alibi. Xiao Tian was left confused since all 3rd graders, including Yining, had a limited number of skills they could acquire, yet the young man learned them without giving it a thought. Since Death Hymn could trap souls and Annihilation granted immense power, the young man decided to take the risk and learn them, as they were labeled S-rank despite their flaws. Just then, the Sword God system sublimated both S-class skills to SS class, turning Death Hymn into Mortal Asura and Annihilation into God's Rage. The first one, with a 2-day reset time, could turn any deceased targets within 100 meters into an undead while retaining the same combat power as in life for 20,000 spirit energy. As for the second, it could summon a 4th grade shadow for 10 seconds in order to deal devastating damage for the same cost and cooldown. Once again, the protagonist was delighted by his god-given system, as on top of his already monstrous skills, he could now use mortal Asura to make an enemy zombie army his own, and God's Rage, which could slay a peak-tier 3rd grader, and with his ability to use them without consuming mana, Yi-Ning gained his own set of skills different from those given by the system. Despite his burning desire to put them to the test, the young man had to wait for the upcoming event in order to use them. But just then, a woman came out of nowhere, screaming that Yi-Ning had taken 2 S-class skills according to the system. But with a smug smile on his face, the young man asked her if he was forbidden from doing so. The woman affirmed that he was allowed to take the skill books under the condition of leaving a combat power record after doing so. The intrigued protagonist asked if he was forced to leave the combat power record, which she confirmed. Zhou Tian then arrived running and apologized for Chief Director Wan Ru's behavior, affirming that he had no reason to leave the combat power record of the 2 skills if he didn't want to. But Wan Ru affirmed that the young man was forced to have all of his skills tested, including the ones he had before, which the man found absurd as she was only doing this for her son. Yet when the young man refused, the woman burst out in anger, stating that despite Yi-Ning's importance, he was under military command, which was why he had to take several tests. The annoying protagonist, as he realized she only perceived him as a test subject, began to wonder how many she had sacrificed for her own personal gain, making him determined to kill her. Wan Ru was left even more angered as Yi-Ning pulled out his sword in front of her. The vice director tried to ease the tension, politely asking him to exit the place, yet the angry chief director affirmed that she had the right to arrest Yi-Ning for rebelling against orders. This thrilled the cruel first sequence, as he now had an excuse to dispose of her. When suddenly, something came in at a hallucinating speed. The chief director's face was now pinned to the ground by a boot. Her bodyguards were filled with fear as 009 asked her master if he wished for her to execute Wan Ru. With that, the woman's life was in the hands of a brutal young man, and so tears ran down her eyes as she began to beg for her life. The vice director also started to beg for the woman's life, and despite Yi-Ning's desire to eliminate her, doing so would only cause problems since the general had recently passed. And so he ordered his bodyguard to spare her life but still kick her away. 009 executed the order, but this resulted in the chief director hitting the wall, leading to her inevitable death. This sudden incident left the vice director filled with fear as he witnessed it in horror. 009 apologized, explaining how she underestimated her own strength while overestimating the woman's strength. Yi-Ning then turned to the man, stating that this was just an accident. So out of fear, the vice director agreed with the young man as he was determined to stay on his good side. With that, Yi-Ning waved to the man goodbye as he left the cleaning of his crimes up to him. Later on, Fang Fang asked her master if she did the wrong thing, but Yi-Ning affirmed that he also wanted the evil woman dead anyway, regardless of his superior's opinion. 2 days after this incident, the day of the National Committee Conference finally arrived, and all were shocked that the young man actually appeared with files in his hands, and while some couldn't believe that he aimed to make a proposal, others only saw it as a show. With that, the protagonist gained his seat, but just as he was sitting down, Yi-Ning was spotted by the vengeance-filled husband of Wan Ru, Fang Tang, the minister of the armed forces in the East Sea, who aimed to kill or sabotage his wife's killer. The receptionist handed the honorary member the conference's agenda, explaining how he wasn't allowed to leak any intel from inside after giving him his serial number. Yi-Ning grew annoyed as he now had to pretend it was his first time despite hosting numerous conferences in his previous life. The receptionist then continued explaining how he could vote after the proposal and how he could press the red button in order to make a suggestion. But Yi-Ning assured her that he would just be making his own proposal as he dismissed her, stating that he didn't require her assistance. This made her grow anxious since she was tasked with keeping the young man out of trouble. And so the woman rushed to report to the chief, making Yi-Ning assume that he scared her as Fang Hao approached him. The man jokingly asked if Fang Fang wasn't enough for him after assuming that Yi-Ning had feelings for the receptionist. But our hero explained that 009 only deserved the best before explaining how the receptionist left in a hurry after knowing of his proposal, which left the vice commander confused. Yet when he asked the protagonist, who wanted him in the chair next to him, about the subject, he stated that he would only know when the time came, which amused the great man. Yet Fang Hao advised the genius to keep the subject to himself as a balance always existed between the government and the military. The vice commander thought of how a person worthy of his daughter, who gave the rest of the soldiers, wouldn't harm their country. And so the highest commander announced the beginning of the 13th Survivor Conference as he announced the 6 topics of the day. After 6 hours, Yi-Ning thought of how most of the 9 proposals were international matters, which is why Daxia suffered a crisis in his first life and why they needed him in the state dungeon. With that, the time came for the committee members' proposals, with the review being held after the vote. Only 2 members proposed to make a proposal, the first being the young man while the other was Fang Tang. This angered the minister as he accused Yi-Ning of being an infant who was only driven by arrogance for wanting to make a proposal. as he suggested with a smug face that Yi Ning regain his place before he charged him with misconduct. The young man was intrigued as it seemed that the man knew about his East Sea-related proposal despite collecting the data from 009 in total secrecy. Feng Tang then explained how the First Research Center's chief director met her end 2 days ago after Yi Ning's visit, and so he demanded to have the young man stripped of his advantages and title in order to have justice for his late wife. This amused the young man, who realized that the silly woman's husband wasn't a real threat. The High Commander grew worried as he demanded an explanation from the protagonist. So Yi Ning explained how he went to the center in order to get 2 skill books, claiming that the director hit her head after falling for his handsomeness. These words filled the grieving man with murderous anger, so Yi Ning decided to take it further as he repeated his own words, adding how she had never seen a satisfying man before. After hearing this, the conference began to be filled with gossip about Feng Tang, as all believed Yi Ning's words were true. Even the highest commander asked the minister to resolve his domestic problems on his own. Yet the man was determined to see the protagonist charged with misconduct. Seeing this, Fang Ho decided to intervene. But Yi Ning calmed him down, stating that he had the vice director as his witness. So the hero disregarded the minister's proposal as insignificant, stating that his proposal concerned him as he wanted to strip him of his position in the East Sea, and ordering the deployment of all forces in the war zone and the evacuation of all safe zone 239 residents for the upcoming A-class sea monster invasion in less than a month. Yet none believed his ridiculous proposal, as he was a young man who had never been to the said sea. This made Feng Tang laugh at him, since his zone had been calm for 40 years, turning the young man into a mockery. The highest commander demanded order in the hall before asking for an explanation from the young man. And Sir Yi Ning began to present his numerous proofs, from B-class earthquakes to missing or dead personnel for unknown reasons. Feng Tang looked at him in complete disbelief as the list kept going on, which startled him to see how much the young man was aware of his zone. And Sir Yi Ning affirmed that he would accept his punishment if any of his data were inaccurate, stating that the military could go confirm them in Feng Tang's safe zone. This left the minister at a loss for words as the highest commander demanded an explanation. Seeing how Yi Ning exposed his negligence, dooming him to certain execution, the minister decided to avenge his wife and himself right here and now. The murderous general climbed onto the table, stating that he wanted the young man disposed of. With that, he knocked him back with a punch, before charging at him in order to continue his assault. This left Feng Hao no choice but to intervene. So the minister, out of desperation, claimed that he wanted the protagonist broken beyond repair. Such actions angered the highest commander, who took it as a sign of treason, ordering the arrest and execution of the minister. 009 charged at the man, considering him a level 1 threat. Despite the protagonist's desire to fight on his own, the vice commander refused, since he could easily end it, punching him in the direction of 009, who detected her target and broke the man's back with her knee, permanently putting him out of his misery. The peak-tier vice commander and almost peak-tier guard eliminating a high-tier 3rd grader in such a short time amazed all, as Yi Ning was now considered a well-protected person. With that, the highest commander ordered the disposal of the body and ordered the commencement of votes regarding Yi Ning's trivial proposal after discussing the matter in 3 minutes. As the body was being dragged out, some took the minister's actions as confirmation of Yi Ning's intel accuracy, while others still doubted him. The time was now over. With the majority of the votes supporting the young man, the old man then ordered the evacuation of the East Sea before demanding to dispatch specialists in order to grasp the situation. After the conference day, Fang Hao explained in front of Yi Ning's home how the state dungeon was only reserved for Tier 3 intermediate and lower, forbidding Feng from entering alongside the young man, but Yi Ning reassured the man that he would be fine. The vice commander then handed Yi Ning the legendary set as a promised reward, along with 2 of the 4 items requested by Yi Ning from the National Treasury, leaving him confused. So the man explained how these items were too rare to reside in the National Treasury. The human-faced falcon who murdered numerous innocents in the South China War Zone was rumored to have escaped 4 powerful awakeners that chased him, while the Ice Ghost Core is said to have had supernatural origins. Fang Hao then added that he would have to wait for the 7th Research Institute to gather the data, so Yi Ning explained how he accepted to wait while mastering the 2 available items. Seeing how the remaining materials weren't currently within reach, the protagonist understood how challenging subliming the Sword God system was. With that, Yi Ning was now halfway to upgrading his system. The young man then pointed out how particular the chest of the legendary set was as he unlocked it with his fingerprints. With that, Yi Ning acquired the legendary items Ripper Bracers and Elemental Wind Blade. On top of increasing his speed, the Ripper Leg Guards also granted our hero the skills Corpse Annihilation and Blood Explosion, while the blade granted him the power to almost double his fire damage and create a firewall along with Frost Explosion while enhancing strength and speed. Our hero realized that he would need some time to familiarize himself with this new powerful set, and so he decided to try out the Elemental Wind Blade. As he used Raging Flames, our hero was left amazed by the power unleashed upon a gentle impact, before trying out his new ice power and freezing the burned ground. This blade, on par with SS class, was far superior to his previous one, and combined with his many ultimates, Yi Ning could unleash many lethal attacks at once. Yi Ning then hoped to enhance his lacking defensive capabilities by using the gacha draw granted to him by the system for his successes in the 3rd grade trial. Our hero hoped for defensive equipment as he spun the wheel, stating how his main goal was to exit the state dungeon alive, only to obtain the epic grade experimental infantry combat suit. But Yi Ning was left confused, seeing how thin it was compared to the regular metallic armor, making him speculate that the system was making fun of him. Yet to his delight, the thin piece of cloth offered a large variety of immunities along with numerous types of damage reduction. Yi Ning couldn't be happier, as he had never possessed such magnificent equipment even in his past life. The suit, which was greatly valued in the spirit peace world, could make Yi Ning a target for outworlders despite its skill. Hell Without Limits, which turns enemy souls into shields. This paired well with the soul-collecting underworld ruler's judgment, yet Yi Ning grew worried about the outworlders related to the ring, speculating that they were at least tier 5. Yet our hero, who harmed no one, decided to face them with courage when the time came, as he was backed up by the Sword God system, before deciding to focus on the dungeon. Meanwhile, at the Air Force base of the capital district, one of the soldiers pointed out how Yi Ning was, and that they couldn't afford to wait any longer as they risked missing the dungeon's opening after a 4-hour flight. Captain Ming Lu asked them to address the high-ranked young man politely, while the anxious Zhang Keiming stated that he should have met them in order to coordinate. But the man was left surprised as Huang Yin informed him that the higher-ups tasked them with prioritizing the first sequence's safety. Meanwhile, Liu Bin, another squad member, began to think that Yi Ning was scared of death before mocking him for needing protection despite his immense power. Zhen Cheng, the vice captain, was left in awe in front of Yi Ning's entrance, who was ridiculously escorted by 6 mid-tier 3rd graders. And so the captain saluted His Excellency before introducing himself and asking Yi Ning, who discarded formalities for a resume, which he accepted. So the Strength and Agility type Awakener explained how he and the Agility and Willpower type vice captains were mid-tier, while the 3 marksmen and 4 frontliners were low-tier, and how their main goal was to gather shining ores in a dungeon where killing was favorable. And having reviewed the dungeon data, Yi Ning asked about the opposition. So the captain handed him a list explaining how this would be their toughest battle, as they were up against 6 powerful enemy nations. But as he went down the enemy list, Yi Ning began to speak of his future opponents as normal strangers. Such an attitude shocked the soldiers, making the captain politely explain how they should be taken seriously, seeing how many of their strongest fighters have fallen to their hands. The words of the soldiers triggered the young man, as he was now determined to avenge the fallen by taking their killers' lives. After that, in front of the state dungeon gate, the Awakeners of the different nations began to argue about their country's share of the rewards, until Yamada Richijo, the R Nation battle chief, intervened, pointing out how their priority wasn't profit but to forbid Daxia from collecting any resources, explaining how vulnerable their safe zone would be once deprived of its spirit energy reserves and powerful air force. An Awakener agreed with the man, fearing seeing Daxia's most powerful warriors, and the R Nation wasn't worried since their strongest remained inside as defenses. Jin Yu, the captain of the It Nation squad, claimed that he could single-handedly slay all these A-rank talents alone, as he was equal to a high tier according to his assistant. And when the Awakener pointed out how Daxia possessed the all-class Awakener, Jin Yu remained unimpressed, as the new 3rd grader would most likely be absent. Just then, a mysterious powerhouse came in, scaring everyone with his murderous aura, explaining how glad he would be to collect the young man's severed head. This psychopath, who was none other than the Warzone vice captain, would be happy to collect a 7th Daxian skull for his collection. Just then, the protagonist's strike squad entered the dungeon Zombie Nation, which was a perfect copy of the real world, but blessed with 3rd grade tier technology while deprived of Awakeners. With that, the enemy forces decided to enter the dungeon. Yi Ning began to get back on his feet, while all of his allies remained lying on the ground. Our hero just realized that he had entered the state dungeon, which still gave him a hard time despite his willpower, as expected. But he was quickly left confused by the temporary spaces that prevented the teams from attacking each other, while the system confirmed the number of fighters in each team before commencing. This further intrigued the young man, as it meant that they still weren't inside the dungeon, which only added confusion, seeing how this procedure didn't exist in his previous life. Just then, a foreign Awakener woke up, shocked to see the young man back on his feet before him despite his senses detecting Yi Ning as a simple beginner. This feat also impressed the vice captain, who had just woken up. Yi Ning took this opportunity to ask the man about the odd domes, so he explained how they were an advantage that would allow the weakest team to enter the dungeon first. Shortly after that, all weaker Awakeners began to wake up feeling dizzy. The warriors of the R Nation immediately began to make fun of the protagonist and his allies, with their vice captain aiming to collect the head of the squad's captain. With that, the captain of the R Nation Warzone proposed to give their targets an appropriate welcome, as he began to mock them for returning to the state dungeon despite their past heavy casualties. And after insulting the squad as a whole, the bald cannibal affirmed that he slowly cooked their past captain, who turned out to be delicious. His vice captain then joined the mockery, claiming that all of them were only qualified as fuel for their septic tanks. This triggered the Daxians, who were determined to repay the citizens of Arryn blood, while the bald captain affirmed that they would all end up on his plate. Seeing this, the leader tried to calm his team, as this was all a strategy to make them lose their composure since they were the first to enter the dungeon, which impressed the protagonist. Jinyu took this opportunity to point out how this new leader, whom the previous one had sacrificed himself to save, had no battle instinct as he crossed to the other dome. But all this was pointless to him, as he was certain that they would all die at his hands. Seeing how the other teams could enter each other's domes made them realize that they had resorted to the rare team-up option, making them realize that all their data was not true. Yamato and Shijo cracked a smile at the Daxians' surprised faces, yet Yining remained unimpressed since their numbers were all meaningless as long as they didn't have high tiers, while realizing that the fake intel was given by a traitor among them. The Warzone captain boldly claimed that they would spare them a painful death if they began to beg for mercy, or give him the girl as a tribute for his own personal use. These vulgar words triggered the female awakener. The F Nation took this opportunity to try and negotiate for some Daxian women in exchange for ores. The thirsty men of the I Nation were also pleased by this idea. Yamato Ichijo took this opportunity to mention how much he tortured Zheng Wei, the most gorgeous woman in the Daxian army, before explaining to the captain, who loved her and who wouldn't even dare to harm her, how many of them had assaulted her before while she begged for death after they left her to their mercy. The vice captain then mentioned how well he remembered how she felt. After hearing this, Ming Lu couldn't bear the anger any longer, as he charged at them, determined to get his beloved out of their grasp. And so the whole squad charged in, determined to use this desperate situation to take the our warriors down with them, when suddenly, Yining ordered them to calm down and asked the captain to think carefully. As he deployed his overwhelming aura, the young man explained how a third grader couldn't be put to shame, having the ability to quickly detonate their own flesh. This made the cannibal realize that Yining was a smart one, assuming that his cold calculation resulted in him not knowing Zhang Wei. The captain reassured the young man, stating that they would still prioritize their safety and even use the military-issued item to save him so that he could avenge them once they were gone. Yining was surprised to see no resolve in their eyes despite not having entered the dungeon yet, so he decided to single-handedly eliminate the competition, being too lazy to explain. This filled the psychotic vice captain with joy, speculating that the all-class skull would finally be in his grasp. Just then, the waiting time ended, with the Daxia Nation entering the field 6 hours before the others. And while all the others were relieved by the system's kindness, Yining found it to be too embarrassing. Before entering the portal, the young man turned to Yamato Ichijo, promising to insert his skull into his posterior, before assuring all his other adversaries that they wouldn't benefit from the gift of mercy, which left all of his enemies filled with rage and annoyance. The Warzone captain began to grow suspicious after seeing the protagonist at ease, while his ally was more concerned with Daxia's enormous time advantage. But the vice captain was mostly excited about chasing and collecting Yining. The goals were to retrieve the anomaly data from 3 months ago, obtain at least a ton of energy ores, which could be increased by slaying the opponents, or locate the MC, Lin Ru, to unlock the rest. With that, all of the squad members rushed to locate a system able to reveal the coordinates of the non-player characters and accomplish all goals in 6 hours, when suddenly the young man unleashed a sword attack, alarming the others as they would now be wanted by the NPCs, yet Yining was determined to carry them to victory. The young man disagreed with the team's tactics, stating that they should just rush to their goals, explaining that he planned to lure his enemies into the dungeon before executing all of them, and then taking control of the vehicle. All were left confused as the alarm was turned off by the young man. But the young man affirmed that those were military secrets before ordering them to enter the vehicle, before demanding a transfer of leadership from the captain for this mission alone. This shocked the devoted man, who ordered his men to follow our hero's commands. Such a hasty maneuver worried the awakeners who were tasked with his safety, while others didn't care since they were all doomed anyway. The team's destination was the Layson Manor on Champs Elysees Avenue, number 91. The captain was left impressed by the young man's sharp skills, who decided to prioritize the Sword God System's mission in order to get the legendary blueprints as a trump card in the apocalypse, seeing how his individual power wasn't enough. Just then, the team received a new mission consisting of changing this world's fate after obtaining full control without harming the protagonist, Lin Kan. The young man decided to take control of the local authorities in order to complete the mission and face the 6 nations, and according to Ghost Eye, seizing the governor's house was the best way. Just then, the captain realized that Yining planned on using this world's powerful figures to their advantage against their enemies, which the young man confirmed. But the man explained how this was a waste of time, seeing how they couldn't locate and ambush the spawn point of the numerous opposing third graders. But Yining explained how easy it was with the triangulation method, as the system wouldn't separate them from the enemies, and how their destination must be very close. The young man then explained how he reduced the potential location of their spawn point to a single region, despite it being too large. This made the captain point out how they should attack the enemy teams immediately and how the two most important characters were Professor Clerk and Lin Ru. By taking the midpoint of their locations and integrating it with a found area, and knowing that the system wanted them spawning in unseen places, the spawn points were reduced to a few spots. Such incredible precision and planning left all of the squad members in awe. And since spawn points must be somewhat close to the objective, Yi Ning's calculations only became more precise as Ghost Eye attributed more clues to make him certain. After 1 hour, Yi Ning, along with the strike squad, finally arrived. But as soon as they arrived, the guards charged at them. With that, Yi Ning ordered his forces to fight back without resorting to lethal force as he severed every enemy's external contact. And so it began. The Awakeners used their skills and swords to fight against guns and bullets. Seeing these odd abilities, the soldiers opened fire. But the Awakeners kept unleashing skill after skill, taking out the soldiers in the least lethal way possible, resorting to physical and mental attacks. The strike squad members were left amused as they faced simple humans, wishing their fight against the Six Nations was this easy. As Yi Ning created a path with the steel of his blade, the young man was pleased as the soldiers bombarded him with bullets, seeing it as the perfect chance to test out his suit. The soldiers were terrified as their bullets merely tickled the odd young man. And so he decided to waste no more time and resorted to the right amount of cryomantic power from his blade. With that, a powerful wave of cold energy was unleashed inside the hall, instilling a cold calm inside. As the soldiers rushed to help Yi Ning, they were amazed by the beauty of his non-lethal ways, seeing how all fragile humans were left immobilized by a gentle freeze. After that, Yi Ning and the others met with Governor Blade, with the young man affirming that he would be spared if he cooperated. The terrified man pointed out how no group of humans, normal or modified, could have dealt with his many guards so easily. And so Governor Blade agreed to work with them, but first asked about their identities and intentions. But the man was left shocked, as Yi Ning claimed that his squad and himself were from 10 years into the future, here to put an end to the future crisis, using the safety of his immobilized guardsmen as a token of goodwill. Before asking him to deploy all of the Oba province armed forces in 3 hours along with the Scanet systems in order to locate and terminate the time travelers who were here to cause the apocalypse. Yet the man had a hard time believing such a ridiculous story, speculating it to be a dream. The Inomi protagonist threw a small object at the governor's face to prove that this was reality. Yet the man affirmed that his position didn't allow him to deploy that many forces, making Yi Ning ask for an exact number of available A-class mechs. Seeing how these mechs were no match for the regular third-grade Awakener, Yi Ning aimed to use around 100 of them, but the governor affirmed that they could only resort to 120 B-class mechs he controlled and 3 A-class mechs that would open fire only when they saw fit, discouraging the Daxians. With that, the young man ordered to bring him Anna, the governor's daughter, leaving the man terrified for his child. Yi Ning explained that the man had the right to enter wartime status and use all of the available Oba forces, including 60 A-class mechs and 600 B-class mechs, ordering him to use any excuse to do so. Yet the terrified man affirmed that he could only enter wartime status after getting the approval of the undeceivable mainframe artificial intelligence. But the governor had no choice but to obey when Yi Ning demanded the order be issued, as well as sending people to exact locations to install surveillance. And with the backdoor command he obtained from a non-playable character in a hidden sub-story, our hero could now handle the issue of the mainframe. Seeing how his fake request was accepted by the difficult system, the fat man was left in awe, now convinced that Yi Ning truly came from the future. As the soldier brought the struggling young lady, the old man demanded her release. But having no time to calm parental anxiety, the young man knocked the governor out with a single tap, startling his daughter. Yi Ning revealed to the girl how her father had committed crimes worthy of death, but promised to spare him if she helped locate her admirer classmate Lin Ru in order to protect him. 4 hours later, at the 077 National Highway of Oba Province, the newly spawned enemy teams mocked our heroes for not daring to set them a trap, as they had decided to use NPCs to find them. Yet the Warzone captain felt that something was odd, noticing how bizarre the surveillance camera looked in the freshly turned soil. But as the cameras began to glow red, the Awakeners quickly understood that they had spawned in a deadly trap. With that, many mechanical creatures began to march their way. Yamada Michijou was shocked to see the Daxians use such a great portion of the local military forces to their advantage. The toxic fog bombs were quickly unleashed into the sky, choking the enemy Awakeners. With that, the Warzone captain immediately ordered all the psychic-type Awakeners to raise their shields, allowing them to protect the men from the poisonous gas until it disappeared. But the assault wasn't over just yet, as the air forces deployed their airburst bombs, along with the electromagnetic mecha-quartz beginning their attack, putting the enemy in an agonizing and challenging situation. Seeing this, the Warzone captain ordered the weakest Awakener to stay on support, while the intermediates joined him on the front lines. Yamato Ichijo easily got rid of the gigantic machine. As he sliced through the machinery, his ally stated that he had kept himself from ascending to high tier for 7 years for a precise purpose. The mid-tier awakeners were quickly turning the tides of the battle by using their skills, the low third-tier equivalent Amex, and their weaker B versions. The R Warzone vice captain even used his special powers in order to reach the air forces, and easily took them down with his Golden Dragon dance. Meanwhile, the Daxians were watching the battle from afar. The captain pointed out how Yineng's plan of taking down the enemy by using the local forces would soon fail, yet the young man revealed that this was never his purpose. This left the soldiers intrigued about their true main weapon to slay the opposing awakeners, and so Yineng revealed that they were counting on his blade this whole time in order to kill them all. The captain tried to stop the young man as this plan would be total madness, explaining how they were tasked with guaranteeing his safe return home, and so he invited them to join him, for the sole purpose of preventing any enemy from escaping. And when the captain tried to argue, Yineng walked away, stating that rebelling against his will would end in punishment. After that, the awakeners grew confused as a mysterious figure rushed to the battlefield. Yineng activated his hunt mode in order to take down the weakest members first. Shortly after the men identified their opponent, the protagonist began his carnage. Yamato Ichijo was startled by this sudden surprise attack, and immediately activated his psychic shield to protect himself from the devastating slash. Many struggled to keep their shields on while being injured. The Daxians watched as Yineng's ultimate shattered the shields of the enemies, leaving them in awe, amaze, and intrigue, as these foes weren't beginners in 3rd grade like the previous first sequence. The captain explained this feat by the awakeners being tired from the mechs and asked them to ready themselves to save Yineng regardless of his orders. Having caused many casualties on the opposing side, Yineng found himself being rushed at by many 3rd tiers seeking his death. Yet the mechs stood between him and the annoyed R Warzone captain. But their countless numbers did not discourage the young man, preparing a powerful counterattack against his aligned enemies. And with that, Moonlight Slash had been unleashed. Just then, the opposing vice captain appeared behind Yineng. Two of his allies took this opportunity and immediately launched an attack in Kei's direction. Yet the two skills only frazzled the degenerate's arm, continuing their course towards the protagonist, which raised his suspicions. And so he used his pyro powers in order to counter the misfires. The vice captain revealed that Yineng only possessed 2 ultimates, ordering an all-out attack on him while leaving him the kill. This only raised Yineng's suspicion even more after the misfires, as the man was certain of his claim. With that, the awakeners charged headfirst at him, but little did they know he still hadn't used up all of his tricks. As he activated his new power, the Human Realm Reaper, which consumed 35,000 energy points, the surprised psychopath tried to escape into his spirit void. The Daxians were left amazed as they recognized this skill as one of the 4 S-rank skills in the research center. This unique technique was even more impressive as it consumed a tremendous amount of 20,000 spirit energy. Yet the enemy captains remained unimpressed as they were determined to end Yineng and the rest of the Daxians. The young man was left amused as they began their ridiculous claims before he could start the final part of his skill, allowing him to summon the spirits of the dead. Yineng ordered his newfound minions to slay Jinyu for him. This situation left the targeted man utterly confused. The young man then turned to the bald one, asking him if he was aware of the reason behind not targeting him with the ghosts. The captain claimed it was due to the spirit's inability to harm him, but the protagonist affirmed that this wasn't the case, seeing how he was determined to put Yamato Ichijo's skull in his posterior as promised. The captain charged up his fist, looking forward to the upcoming battle. Yineng resorted to the power of his blade and attacked using Frost Dragon. Yamato Ichijo used his Tiger Soul Fist, making the 2 attacks clash in the most spectacular way. But the young man wasn't done just yet, as he snuck back behind the man's back and attacked using Raging Phoenix, unleashing a powerful flame bird in the bald man's direction. But the enemy was quick and immediately used his Nirvana Wing shield, fending off the volatile flame attack. The young man expected no less from the durable body of a berserker, making him want to toy with him a little longer. Just then, our hero noticed a bunch of shurikens launched by the vice captain targeting his back, and immediately paired his telekinesis with his dagger in order to counter the sneak attack. Yamato Ichijo took this opportunity and tried to ambush Yineng from above with his Megura shower. Seeing how both the captain and vice captain were teaming up against him, Yineng decided to finally reveal his true power, and so the young man used his Fallen Heaven defense, blocking the R Warzone chief against all odds. Yamato Ichijo couldn't fathom the fact that a low-tier 3rd grader possessed such power. The young man affirmed that this skill had not reached its end, and so he used his Fallen Heaven locked impact, immobilizing the enemy captain to his horror. Even when concealed, the psychopath could feel the hero's tremendous power. Meanwhile, the H Warzone captain affirmed that mid-tier 3rd grader ghosts couldn't possibly harm him, claiming that he would terminate their summoner. Yet the man was left horrified by the sudden explosion that appeared out of nowhere, instantly obliterating him. Yineng couldn't be more pleased after discovering that the skill he mostly relied on for defense had an offensive power equal to Sword Storm. His power was so great that it even made his own allies doubt his humanity. So the video ends here. If you don't want to miss the next part, activate the notification bell and see you next time on Tob's channel.